All I did was say I wanted to be a hero. Kakin, why? He heard footsteps in the hallway outside, and he quickly adjusted himself so that he was sitting upright. Mom stuck her head in, a soft smile on her face. Hi, sweetie. How was your first day of junior high? Izuku smiled, barely holding back a wince as the burn throbbed again. It was great, Mom. The teachers were nice today, and I got to know a lot of people that didn't go to the elementary school. Technically, it was true. The teachers were nice, up until they found out that he was quirkless. He did get to know new people by getting acquainted with their fists and shoes. Izuku could never outright lie to his mom, but he'd gotten better at leaving out key details. Mom's smile widened. Well, to celebrate a new part of your life, I went ahead and got you something. Her arms came out from behind her back, holding what looked like a gray box. I know you'd always wanted a gaming system of your own. It's an old system from the pre-Quirk era, a Nintendo Switch. Izuku's eyes watered. Mom, you didn't have to. Honestly, you don't need to waste money on me like this. Mom frowned slightly. Izuku, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a mother getting her child a gift. And besides, I didn't buy it. I found it in our storage unit. Izuku smiled. Well, if you say so. After doing his homework, Izuku connected the Switch to the TV in the living room. Apparently, this was a used system because there was already a profile set up on it, as well as several games installed on it. Whoever had previously owned it had apparently made sure to keep the card slot empty, but hadn't bothered removing the digital downloads. Izuku went ahead and set up a new profile for himself, deleted the old profile, deleted the old Mii's, and made a new Mii for himself. Glancing at the clock, Izuku figured he had about 2 hours or so before dinner. Scrolling through the various titles, he eventually settled on one that he recognized, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Supposedly, the game had been really popular when it first came out, though game production had gone stale when Quirks developed soon after. The franchise had been known for its low difficulty, and Izuku figured that would be the only game a stupid Deku could be any good at. Before he could start doubting himself any further, he started up the game. The opening cutscene started playing, and Izuku settled in for a short play session. Ko glanced over towards the living room, giggling to herself as she watched Izuku lean forward, focusing entirely on the gorilla boss he was fighting. Initially, she'd felt bad about lying to him, but he looked so happy that she couldn't bring herself to interrupt. The system had actually been kept inside her bedroom, and she would occasionally play some of the titles on it when she was feeling especially down. She deleted her old profile and Mii to make it seem like an old system that Izuku could think of as his own, rather than being on loan from her. She turned back to the stove, humming contentedly as the pork cutlets simmered in the pan. Maybe cooking Izuku's favorite food and giving him a gaming system might have been too much for a single day, but it was the start of a new chapter in his life, after all. That, and she knew he wasn't being entirely honest about school, though he thought he was hiding it, but a mother always knew when her child was in pain. She could tell from the moment he had walked in the door that he was nursing some kind of injury on his shoulder, and the bathroom sink running for much longer than to just wash his hands practically confirmed it. Probably a burn, if the light scent of smoking flesh was any indication. Ko sighed to herself. I know Izuku always insists that he and Katsuki are friends, but I can't lie to myself much longer. Mitsuki always had anger issues, and Lord knows what influence the schools are having on that boy. I should have pushed harder after that one incident in elementary when Izuku got hurt while playing with that Tsubasa boy. She shook her head, clearing her mind of the negative thoughts. No, all I can do now is support him. She turned her attention back to the pork cutlets, humming along with the music coming from the living room. She didn't bother turning around to check on Izuku, believing that he was mature enough to know when to stop. Though, if she had turned around, she would have noticed his hair glowing. She would have noticed a distinct green cap appear over his green curls, going unnoticed as the two occupants of the apartment were too focused on their own tasks. She would have noticed the sword laying on the floor behind the couch. Izuku blinked as he felt a tap on his shoulder, glancing up at where Mom was standing to his side. Time for dinner, sweetie. He blinked again, before glancing over at the clock, eyes widening at how quickly the time had gone by. Okay, Mom. He quickly went through the process of closing down the game and turning off the console and TV. By the time he was done washing his hands, Mom had already set out 2 plates of katsudon on the table. He started digging in immediately. I had no idea playing video games made you this hungry, and it was only for 2 hours. Mom giggled. You liked that game, didn't you? I wasn't expecting to have to get you to stop myself. Izuku hummed, putting his chopsticks down on the table. Me either. I've seen people play video games on HeroTube before, but I got distracted, sucked in, almost. It's weird, and I don't think I'm supposed to be this hungry after only 2 hours. Mom frowned. You're feeling hungry. You told me you had a good-sized lunch at school today. Unthinkingly, Izuku cringed at the thought of school. Sure, he'd gotten a good-sized lunch, up until the moment the tray was knocked out of his hands and the food was spilled all over the cafeteria floor. He could still hear the jeers of Kaken and his 2 lackeys. Mom sighed. Izuku, sweetie, you don't have to lie to me. Are you safe at school? Izuku waved his arms frantically. No, Mom, I'm fine. Besides, even if I did have any problems, which I don't, then they'll probably go away once I get to know my classmates better. Mom hummed, and for a split second, Izuku thought she didn't believe him. But then she sighed and smiled at him. Well, if you're sure. Still, I think we should see a doctor. It's odd that you're feeling so hungry after only 2 hours of playing. If it keeps happening, I'll call Musutafu General Hospital and set up an appointment as soon as they're available. 4 weeks later, the doctor frowned, flipping through the pages on his clipboard. And you're absolutely certain that you've been eating properly since you first noticed it. Izuku winced. The other students still hadn't let up, but at least the lunch ladies had started giving him some of the extra scraps towards the end of the lunch hour. Yes, but for some reason, I still feel really hungry and tired, even after really short gaming sessions. The doctor hummed, before stashing his clipboard under his arm and leaning down to look Izuku in the eyes. Could this be a side effect of a quirk? Mom shook her head. We had it confirmed when Izuku turned 4. He doesn't have the extra toe joint, but he's quirkless. The doctor raised an eyebrow. Just because a person doesn't have a quirk at age 4 doesn't mean they're quirkless. Which doctor was this? Dr. Tsubasa. The doctor frowned. That old quack. When he was here, most of his diagnoses were way off. A lot of people found out later that their quirks were a lot stronger than they thought, or that it was a different mechanic behind it. If you want, we could get one of our more reliable quirk specialists to come in and take a look. Mom hummed and turned to Izuku. What do you think, sweetie? Izuku shook his head. I don't want you to waste your time on me. The doctor smirked. It's no trouble. It's actually become an unofficial policy around here for Tsubasa's former patients to get a second opinion. Heck, I won't even charge you for it. Izuku glanced over at Mom. Well, if it's not too much trouble. The doctor patted him on the shoulder, which had thankfully healed from the burn on the first day. It's no trouble at all, young man. The quirk specialist frowned, looking up from the laptop she'd carried into the examination room. You've clearly got an active quirk factor in your hair, though it looks closer to that of a 4-year-old's quirk factor than someone your age, like it was only awakened recently. It's a common sign in late bloomers or people with obscure activation requirements. It seems to be connected to the optical center of your brain. Have you seen anything strange or new in the past few weeks? Izuku hummed. Well, Mom bought me a new gaming system to celebrate my first day of middle school. I've been playing it for about half an hour each day so far, though I did play on it for 2 hours on the first day before dinner. Why? The woman hummed, scrolling through the results on her screen. Interesting. You seem to have an extra lobe connected to your occipital lobe. This lobe is commonly found in people with stockpiling quirks, like fat gum. If you'd like, I can arrange for you to meet with a colleague of mine tomorrow. She's a quirk counselor whose quirk allows her to analyze the quirks of other people through skin contact. Normally, she's got a pretty steep fee, but she's got a soft spot for people that had their quirks misdiagnosed. Would you like that? Izuku nodded. If I actually have a quirk, I'd really like to know that. The specialist winced. Dr. Tsubasa diagnosed you as quirkless, right? Can't imagine you've had it very well. I lucked out, getting a quirk that lets me scan a person's body like an MRI. My little sister is quirkless, and she had to put up with a lot of bullies in school. Can't imagine it's gotten much better for your generation. Inko hummed as she and Izuku sat in the waiting room for the quirk counselor. As expected, the woman had been more than happy to give them a discount after hearing about Izuku's misdiagnosis. Apparently, her quirk had put her services in high demand, and the waiting list was usually quite long. But Izuku had gotten an appointment for the day after his hospital visit. She glanced over at him, his attention distracted by the other people sitting in the waiting room. His fingers were twitching, obviously wanting to write down quirk analyses in one of his notebooks, which reminded her, the other day, he'd come with a tattered notebook, as though it had been ripped apart and hastily taped back together. She sighed. Izuku. Her son immediately turned to her, confusion evident in his expression. Be honest with me, your classmates aren't kind to you, are they? He started stammering, clearly nervous at being put on the spot. Eventually, he managed to squeak out, "They're fine, they just..." Inko frowned and took his face in her hands, immediately cutting him off. Izuku, you don't have to hide anything from me. I'm your mother, it's my job to worry about you. You don't have to hide your pain to make me feel better. Izuku fell silent. Eventually, he whispered, They don't like that I'm quirkless. I was analyzing the quirk of the girl in front of me the other day, and Yubai stretched his fingers to take my notebook and rip it in half. Inko sighed and pulled Izuku into a hug, rubbing his head softly. It didn't take long before he started crying silently, letting the tears flow as he melted in her embrace. Fortunately, they managed to collect themselves just as the receptionist looked up from her computer and called out, "Midoriya Izuku. Miwei-san will see you now." Izuku glanced around the room as they entered, noticing the one chair set right in front of the desk and the other chair set to the right and slightly behind the first chair. His attention was drawn to the woman behind the desk, who glanced up from her computer and smiled. "Midoriya-san, Midoriya-kun, please sit." They complied, with Izuku sitting in the chair set closer to the desk. He asked, "Miwei-Kumamoto, right? Kazu-san at the hospital said that you can tell what a person's quirk is by touching them." The woman nodded, the smile never leaving her face. "That's correct. My quirk, Analyze, allows me to know the basics of a person's quirk by making contact with their skin with 5 fingers. I'm sure you noticed how close that chair is to my desk. It's set up that way so that I can easily reach across and make contact with someone without having to sit right next to them. In any case, I'm sure you're curious as to your own quirk status." Mom nodded. Kazu-san implied that his previous diagnosis might not be accurate, since the doctor that gave it has a history of being wrong. Izuku was originally diagnosed as quirkless, but he's been experiencing strange things recently, and we wanted to be sure. Miwei-san winced. "That's rough. I know what people are forced to put up with based on a lack of a quirk. Heck, before I first analyzed someone, I thought I was quirkless myself. But enough reminiscing." She laid her hand out flat on the table, one eyebrow raised. "May I?" Izuku nodded, and she reached out, her hand wrapping around Izuku's temple. She closed her eyes, and Izuku watched with fascination as her eyelids were covered in a flowing pattern of blue lines. After a few seconds, the lines disappeared, and Miwei-san let go of his head, opening her eyes and steepling her fingers on the desk with a smile. "Well, I can confirm that you do indeed have a quirk after all. Though it's a bit of a strange one. Apparently, your quirk allows you to store items that you've seen before in a sort of mental inventory, then manifest them at will. The strange part is that, for whatever reason, it has to be an item in a video game. It can't be something that you've previously held in your hand. In addition, manifesting the items uses the fat stored in your cells. So the more you eat, the more items you can make. Once it leaves your hand, any manifested item will dissipate after about 3 seconds. The fat won't go back to you when the items disappear, though it kinda just disperses into the air." Izuku's eyes widened. "That explains why I was so hungry after the first day of school. I must have created something without realizing it." Miwei-san nodded, rubbing at her chin. "My guess is that it must have been something you were using in the game at that time. If you don't mind my asking, what game were you playing?" Izuku rubbed at his neck sheepishly. "It was an old Nintendo game, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, I think. At one point, I was playing around with the sword ability, and I remember wishing that I could use it myself." Miwei-san smiled. "That must have been when it happened. Oh, another thing, you can only store so many items, and the number you can manifest at any given time is even more limited. The numbers will grow with time and training, but at the moment, your current limits are 3 inventory spaces and 1 equipped item. Although, objects that are linked to each other will only count as 1 item for your quirk. In the case of Monday, you manifested the hat and the sword as a single item. And with linked objects, you only need to be holding 1 object to keep the set intact. It is possible to only manifest 1 part of a set, but only certain parts can be manifested by themselves. In this case, you could manifest just the sword, but you can't manifest just the hat." Izuku glanced over at Mom, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I have a quirk. I have a quirk. I can be a hero." Mom smiled. "I never thought you couldn't be a hero without one, sweetie, but yes, you have a quirk." Miwei-san cleared her throat, drawing Izuku's attention. "As heartwarming as this is, we do have some paperwork to get out of the way." She turned her computer around, showing Izuku the forms on the screen. "I've already filled out most of the information on the quirk registry forms for you, such as type and basic abilities. All that's really left is to name it." Izuku glanced at Mom, and she nodded. Turning to Miwei-san, he smiled and said, "Save file." Katsuki glanced up as Deku walked in just before the bell rang, scowling at the smile on the nerd's face. "Oi, Deku, what's got you so happy? You useless freak." The nerd just smiled even wider. "Have a little patience, Kaken. I've got a surprise for you." Katsuki's scowl deepened, but he didn't say anything. The nerd walked past him and sat down in his seat, that smug grin never leaving his face. He'd better not be planning something effing stupid. The other extras started filing into the room, exchanging confused glances at the grin on Deku's face. After a few minutes, the bell rang right as Teach walked in, doing a double take at Deku's expression. After going through the morning announcements, Teach finally broke. Midoriya, care to share with the class what's got you in such a good mood? Everyone turned to stare at him, and Deku opened his mouth. Before he could get a word in, Fingers scoffed and said, bet you his mom finally got a clue and ditched him. Katsuki immediately rounded on him. Shut up. Fingers didn't even look a effing bit remorseful as he said, what? It's the truth. He's only dragging her down by existing. Suddenly, there was a sword at Fingers' throat. Katsuki heard Deku say, you know, it's not polite to interrupt someone. The classroom went utterly silent. Slowly, Katsuki turned around, eyes widening at the sight of the instantly recognizable hat on the nerd's head. Deku removed the sword from Fingers' neck and laid it on his desk, before leaning back in his chair with a smug grin on his face. As I was going to say before you by so rudely interrupted, I'm in a good mood because my quirk finally came in. There was silence before the classroom erupted into laughter. Teach chuckled, good one, Midoriya. Never took you to be the comedic type. The smile faded from Deku's face, and he sat upright. I'm not joking, sir. Why would I joke about having a quirk when I haven't made jokes in the past 8 years? Fingers laughed. Come on, Deku. Everybody knows that if you don't get a quirk when you're 4, you don't get a quirk at all. Katsuki scoffed. Bullshit. Don't you remember science class last year, dumbass? There's plenty of people who get their quirks later than 4 years old. You've got late bloomers, where it just shows up late, or people with obscure activation requirements that don't find them until years later. Remember the article about that one kid in Portugal? He didn't realize he had a speed quirk until he ate a pineapple for the first time when he was 10. Deku finding his quirk when he's 12 isn't that far-fetched. Deku nodded. Exactly. In my case, it was because I hadn't played a video game until last week. My quirk, the ability to store items from games I've played and manifest them at will. Teach stopped laughing. Midoriya, stop this prank right now. I don't know where you got your hands on a sword, but trying to pass it off as a quirk is in no way funny. The principal has already seen your diagnosis from when you were 4. Put away the sword and stop terrorizing your classmates. Deku tilted his head, and Katsuki went pale. That was the head tilt Auntie did whenever she was about to verbally rip someone to shreds. Terrorizing, sir? You mean like how my classmates have been terrorizing me ever since I was declared quirkless? Oh, and for the record, that's a false diagnosis. If you'd bothered to check with the school nurse, sir, you'd have realized that I had an appointment with Mue Kurumoto yesterday, and she verified that I do, indeed, have a quirk. Teach scowled. Enough lying, Midoriya. You and I both know that the esteemed Mue Kurumoto would never see a quirkless freak like you. Now put the sword away and apologize to your classmates before I give you detention. Suddenly, the classroom door slammed open. Teach went pale as he recognized the woman who had just walked into the room. Deku's eyes widened. Mue Kuru-san, I wasn't expecting to see you here. The woman smiled softly. And I was hoping that I wouldn't have to be here today either, Midoriya-kun. Unfortunately, when I called your school's nurse this morning to confirm she had received my analysis, she told me, and I quote, don't worry, I went ahead and tossed out that forged report. I'll see to it that the offending student is properly disciplined. Naturally, I was quite irritated. She turned to the teacher and scowled. Sadly, I see that it isn't just the nurse with a problem. Honestly, accusing one of my patients of lying, just because they were believed to be quirkless? Frankly, sir, you disgust me. Suddenly, the intercoms crackled to life, and the voice that came on over the speakers wasn't one that Katsuki recognized. Attention, students of Aldera Junior High. Due to suspicions of quirk discrimination, this school will be closed for the foreseeable future. Please proceed to the front entrance so that you can be picked up by your parents. Students that live within walking distance of this school are allowed to go home. The classroom devolved into chaos, and Katsuki looked over at Deku, but the nerd looked just as surprised as him. Humming, Katsuki stood up and grabbed his bag, before looking back at the other boy. Meet me outside in a few minutes. We need to talk. Let's see if that spine is a one-time thing or a permanent fixture. Izuku frowned as he walked out of the front entrance of the school, noticing Katsuki standing by himself a few meters away. Walking forward, he crossed his arms and said, I'm surprised. Where's your posse? Katsuki scoffed. Those extras. They tried hanging here, but I told him to shove off. This is just between the two of us. Izuku hummed. So, is this gonna be a talk like the first day of school, or are we actually gonna talk? Katsuki scoffed. Well, you finally stood up for yourself, so I can't be too mad at you. Suddenly, everything clicked. You're kidding. All of the beatings, all of the insults, all of the burns, and it was because you wanted me to stand up for myself. Katsuki raised an eyebrow. No, you didn't know that. No, the blonde physically leaned back at the sudden shout. I thought you hated me, Katsuki. I thought you wanted me to give up on being a hero. Katsuki's face paled. You, really? Yes. You never once made me think that you were being in any way supportive. Katsuki stared at him for a second. But, I thought it was obvious. I mean, Mom always yells at me to get my ass in gear. That's how you encourage someone, right? Izuku sighed. No, your family is a weird outlier that I'm not even gonna try and tackle right now. But I had no clue you were trying to get me to stand up for myself, and I thought you were genuinely trying to make me give up on my dream. Katsuki slammed a palm into his face. Now you tell me. God, I feel like such a dumbass. Izuku snorted. Now you know what it's like. You want to know why I chose Kirby for my first game? It was because I was convinced that a stupid Deku would only be good at an easy game. You seriously messed up my self-confidence, Katsuki. Katsuki sighed and leaned back against the building, staring up at the clouds passing by overhead. You're right. Can't believe I ever thought you were looking down on me for claiming you'd be a hero. It sounded to me like you were gonna try and be a hero without putting in any work, like you could just go out and do the same things as real heroes without any effort. And that thought pissed me off. Izuku chuckled. Well, you do have a point there. He gestured at his thin frame. I mean, can you see this scrawny mess going out there and saving people? Katsuki scoffed. No way in hell. Izuku smirked. Yeah, they stood there in silence for a bit. So, Izuku stuck his hand out. Wanna try being friends again, Katsuki? The blonde snorted and grabbed Izuku's hand, pulling himself upright from his leaning position. Sure thing, Izuku. Shouta grunted as he watched the two students walk off in the same direction away from the school. HMPH. Guess he's got more potential than I first thought. Mamoto leaned over and stared out the window in the direction of the two kids. Who, Izuku-kun? Shouta shook his head. No, the Bakugo brat. Mamoto frowned. Yeah, Gazu had told me about the still healing burn on the kid's shoulder, and given the research I'd put in before coming here today, I was expecting the brat to just be a hateful jerk. But turns out he's just a misguided kid who didn't realize his encouragement was coming off as hateful. Who knew? Shouta shrugged, before turning towards her. So, what do you find on their servers? She winced. A lot, and none of it good. She tapped away at the keys on her laptop, bringing up a folder of video clips. She hit a few more keys, uploading the files to a USB. She pulled it out of the laptop and held it out to Shouta. Bring that to the rat god. He's not gonna like what's on it, but it's necessary for the investigation. I went ahead and took out the clips of Bakugo and Midoriya, but everything else is intact. Shouta took the USB, stashing it in one of his belt pouches. Dare I ask what's there? Mamoto sighed and leaned back in her chair. Teachers assigning Midoriya extra homework on account of his quirk status. Students with weak or villainous quirks being given detention for just being near fights without being part of them. Other students beating Midoriya up in the hallways. Footage of the students openly using their quirks inside and outside of classes. Teachers giving Midoriya detention for coming into class with a destroyed uniform or other minor offenses. Students with heroic quirks being given barely a slap on the wrist for serious offenses. Students knocking Midoriya's lunch tray out of his hands. The list goes on. Shouta raised an eyebrow. School's only been in session for about a month. How do you have so much footage on Midoriya? She sighed. The teachers take every opportunity they have to make a pariah out of him. And apparently, they find several opportunities every day. Not even an hour goes by in the footage before a student pushes Midoriya around or a teacher gives him detention for some arbitrary reason. It turns my stomach just thinking about it. Shouta scowled. Mine too. I'm setting Nedzu on these scum as soon as possible. I trust that you and the police can wrap things up here. The woman smirked and threw up a mock salute. Yes, sir, Eraserhead, sir. Don't you worry about a thing. We've got this covered. Shouta snorted and lightly ruffled the shorter woman's hair. All right. By the way, Mike's hoping you'll stop by sometime later for dinner. For reasons I can't fathom, he likes to have you around. Mamoto giggled. Go on, cousin. Get that footage to your boss and go back home to your loving husband and 3 cats. Shouta rolled his eyes. 4, actually. I found another stray on patrol the other day. Mom glanced up as Izuku and Katsuki walked into the apartment, her eyes red and puffy from crying. You didn't tell me it was this bad, sweetie. Izuku winced. Sorry, Mom. It's been so long. It's a bad habit to downplay things. I'll try and work on it. She sighed. Well, so long as you're trying to be better. She noticed Katsuki standing back by the door, and her eyes widened. Oh, Katsuki, it's nice to have you over. Katsuki cringed and rubbed at his arm. Probably not as nice as it used to be, but it's my own fault. Mom frowned. Yes, I had my suspicions, but I wasn't willing to act unless Izuku specifically told me that it was a problem. Izuku cringed and rubbed at the back of his neck guiltily. Katsuki sighed and crossed his arms. Honestly, I'd have preferred it if you'd given me a lecture earlier. Turns out the whole thing was a miscommunication on both sides. though mostly on my part. I already apologized like 5 times on the walk over from school, but I'm not expecting to be called Kakin again anytime soon. Mom smiled softly. As long as you know what you did wrong and are working to fix it. Speaking of doing things wrong, she turned to Izuku. I haven't been fully honest with you. The switch that I gave you is actually the one that I got from my father. I thought you would appreciate having something you could call your own, and I didn't want you to think that you were just borrowing it from me. Izuku smiled softly. I don't blame you. Honestly, if you hadn't done that, I probably would have refused to play on it at all, thinking that I'd be taking something from you if I did. Katsuki cleared his throat. Well, if we're good for now, I'm gonna head home. I've still gotta explain myself to the hag and the old man. But hey, maybe now you can start playing against someone. Izuku grinned. I think I'd like that. Mom chuckled. Oh, already discounting your mother as a potential player too, huh? I'll have you know, I currently have a streak of 25 wins against Mitsuki in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Actually, I think she still has a few controllers sitting around the house, just in case I decide to invite her over for another session. Goodness, it's been years since the last one. Katsuki snorted. I'll let her know that you're getting back into gaming. Heck, I might even pick it up myself. Train my hand-eye coordination and reflexes and stuff like that. Izuku smiled. I look forward to finally kicking your butt at something. Katsuki groaned as his Captain Falcon was spiked off stage, the screen declaring Izuku's Pokemon trainer the winner. Dang it, how are you so good already? Izuku smirked. Practice. I've been playing a lot recently. And Mom can't even complain about it because it's technically Quirk training. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Sure it does. Wouldn't training involve increasing your storage capacity and the number you can manifest simultaneously? Izuku shrugged. True, and I work on that too, but the increased library gives me a greater number of things that I can put in my inventory. More variety in my items gives me more scenarios where I can be helpful. Like, your quirk is great, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't exactly help in a situation where you have to silently infiltrate a villain's base. Meanwhile, I could use one of Spy's invisibility watches from TF2 to turn invisible and go undetected, while still being able to face villains head-on with different weapons if need be. You see what I'm getting at? Katsuki nodded. Makes sense. Any good hero has more than one trick up their sleeve. And while you're right that my quirk isn't great for stealth, that doesn't mean I can't be good at it. Izuku grinned. I never said you couldn't. Present Mike has a quirk that's great for offense, but he still manages to be able to sneak up on villains from behind without them realizing. Remember that one time he teamed up with Ingenium to take down Earthbreaker? Katsuki grinned. Totally. It was so cool. Watching Ingenium run rings around the guy's attacks and draw his attention, only to get his shit rocked from behind by Mike. From the kitchen, Mom barked, Katsuki. Language. The blonde winced. Sorry, Auntie. Aunt Mitsuki shook her head from where she was sitting on the couch. It's still weird hearing Katsuki sincerely apologize for things. I mean, it was only a few months ago that he was a total brat. Uncle Masaru patted her on the shoulder. At least it isn't taking him 23 years to learn manners like you did. Aunt Mitsuki gasped. What? Who told you that? Mom giggled, and the blonde woman rounded on her. Inko, I trusted you. Izuku laughed. It had been 5 months since Aldera had been shut down, and both the Midoriya and Bakugo families had already made huge strides in making up with each other. Katsuki was now a constant presence, always challenging Izuku in either academics or video games. Aunt Mitsuki and Uncle Masaru would sometimes come over for larger game nights and the occasional Smash Ultimate tournament, but most often they would chat with Mom while the two boys played together in the living room. At first, Mom had looked into other junior highs in the area, but as it turned out, being a month into the school year meant that most of their classes had been filled up, either by students who had enrolled at the start of the year, or former Aldera students who had transferred as soon as the junior high had shut down. As a result, both Izuku and Katsuki started attending an online school. Aunt Mitsuki went ahead and bought each of them a new laptop, brushing Mom off when she complained about the cost and pointing out that she and Uncle Masaru already made more than enough from their shared clothing line. Katsuki had always been at the top of his class, and that hadn't changed. But Izuku, he was absolutely thriving, without the pressure to intentionally lower his grades so he wouldn't be accused of cheating, and the freedom to work at his own pace. Izuku was soaring through the curriculum. Sure, he slowed down so that he wouldn't leave Katsuki in the dust, but that didn't stop him from breezing through the assignments and getting 100 seconds all across the board. Katsuki still called him a nerd, but at least now it was teasing rather than insulting. Well, technically goading, but still. Katsuki still had a few outbursts every now and then, but at least he wasn't causing property damage or injuries as often. Besides, most of those outbursts were when Katsuki tried hanging out with former classmates from Aldera, only to find out that they were doing things like underage drinking or putting someone in their place. At one point, he'd found Yubai and Genku with a kid named Minta, cornering a girl in an alleyway and making grabbing motions towards her skirt. Those three had ended up in the hospital, and the girl, who was named Hagakure, gave Katsuki her number. That wasn't to say they never went out. For as much as Izuku had picked up gaming as a serious hobby, Mom still made sure that he went outside for fresh air and exercise often. There was a gym nearby that allowed repeat customers to sign out rooms for Quirk training. And apparently Katsuki had been going there for the past couple years, and with their friendship firmly re-established, it wasn't long before Izuku became a regular there, too. Over the past 5 months, Izuku had bulked up nicely. He could bench press up to 70 kilos and reach a running speed of about 8 meters per second, maybe 8.5 if he was pushing himself. Not bad for a kid whose limits 5 months ago had been 20 kilos and 3 meters per second, in his opinion. Of course, he'd also made progress with save file. He'd worked his way up to 8 inventory slots and 3 items manifested at the same time. It seemed like slow progress, but the employees at the gym assured him that it would speed up as he kept working at it like with normal exercise. He'd also found that things that pushed the boundaries of physics took up more slots in his quirk. For instance, the sword ability only took up 1 slot, whereas a hyper potion from Pokemon took up a whole 3, and he couldn't manifest any other items until the bottle used up its manifestation time and dissipated. Though it wasn't all weights in quirk training, Katsuki made sure to get it through Izuku's head that breaks were important, too. In the blonde's words, there's no point in putting all your energy into training when you don't give yourself time to get that energy back, or else you're just gonna lose steam and waste all that progress. Most breaks were spent playing video games, of course, for as much as they helped with reflexes, hand-eye coordination, and critical thinking with the occasional puzzle game, they were still fun time wasters. On some break days, Izuku often found himself booting up Animal Crossing, New Horizons, and just experiencing the simple pleasures of pre-quirk life. Naturally, with the number of online games out there, Izuku had far more friends than just Katsuki, though most of them he only knew through his games, and there were quite a few of them. Insomnicat was a constantly tired ball of snark who had very heavy opinions on quirk discrimination and heroics. Baby Gremlin was a fast-talking genius who was incredible at spotting minor details and taking in lots of information at once, making her the default scout, sniper. Newton's Bane was bubbly, friendly, and always up for co-opus games, especially ones with support roles. Snow White was a quiet companion, always filling the role of healer and being a calming presence. Sparky Way was a comedian who usually had a short attention span, but had incredible focus when it came to gaming, and had probably the best aim out of the entire friend group. Rock Riot was an enthusiastic player with a penchant for tank roles, and always called things manly for some reason. Mr. Twister was similarly enthusiastic, always going on about heroic passion and whatnot. Totally Jacked, meanwhile, was almost as snarky as Insomnicat, but had a cuter side that always came out when talking about music. The first meetings had been just as varied as their personalities. Izuku had met Insomnicat through an online forum for talking about underground heroes, and the two had bonded quickly over their shared appreciation for an obscure hero called Eraserhead and their mutual love of RPGs. Baby Gremlin had joined a Call of Duty lobby at the same time as Izuku, and the two had hit it off quickly, their different playstyles somehow complementing each other perfectly. He'd met Newton's Bane in a game of Overwatch, when her Pharah had appeared out of nowhere and blasted his Genji off a cliff. Snow White had joined him in Team Fortress 2, supporting Izuku's soldier with his medic. Katsuki had met Sparky Way in the same Overwatch lobby as Izuku and Newton's Bane. Katsuki had been angry when his Junkrat suddenly collapsed, only to turn completely into respect when the kill feed showed the cross-map headshot from the other player's Widowmaker. Rock Riot and Katsuki had ended up on the blue team opposite Izuku and Snow White on red, and the combination of Heavy and Demoman respectively had proved a formidable force. Mr. Twister had been paired against Katsuki in an online Smash Ultimate tournament, and the two had hit it off when the former's Incineroar just barely lost to the latter's Donkey Kong. Katsuki had met Totally Jacked in a different Overwatch lobby, when her Lucio saved him from an enemy Reinhardt. After a few weeks of interacting with their online friends via texts, phone calls, and in-game chats, Izuku and Katsuki decided to put together a Discord server for all of them, named Hero Hopefuls. There were a few major channels for general discussions, memes, cat pictures, hero-related discussions, and of course various voice channels with designated text channels for gaming. They hadn't gotten to the point of using their real names yet, but they knew quite a bit about their friends. Insomnicat was in the foster system, and kept bouncing around because of his villainous quirk. Baby Gremlin lived in Kyoto and loved to tinker with support gear, often talking with Izuku in private messages or the general chat about quirk analysis. Newton's Bane lived in Mai, and her family was pretty strapped for cash, with her just barely being able to afford a decent laptop for games and Discord. Snow White didn't like talking out loud because of his quirk, but he loved to gush about animals in the text channels. Sparky Way would talk about basically anything, and would switch topics on a dime. Rock Riot loved anything remotely related to Crimson Riot, though he seemed a little annoyed that his quirk wasn't flashy enough for a pro. Mr. Twister lived in Yamanashi, and was considering both UA and Shikzu for their heroics courses. Totally Jack's parents ran a music store in Shizuoka, and both Izuku and Katsuki promised to check it out at some point. Izuku was jolted back to the present by the music of the character select screen, and he quickly picked his controller up off the side table by the couch, eyes scanning the screen as he debated who to pick next. Hitoshi quietly closed the door and swept through the house without making a sound, quickly making it to his room in the attic and closing the door, breathing a sigh of relief as he flopped onto his bed. God, I can't wait until I get into UA and apply to live in the on-campus dorms. He got up and moved over to his desk, pulling out his laptop and opening up Discord. He quickly put in his login information and maneuvered to the Hero Hopefuls server, noticing that Bush Boss and King Explosion were currently playing Smash Ultimate. Hashtag General. Insomnicat. Sup, Fers. 3:47 p.m. Newton's Bane. Oh, hi cat. 3:47 p.m. Bush Boss, cat, can you please not? Mom would kill me if she found out that the people on my Discord server use that kind of language. 3:48 p.m. Bush Queen, are you sure about that? 3:48 p.m. Bush Boss, Mom. 3:48 p.m. Bush Boss, when did you join the server? King Explosion, I added her about a week ago, nerd. 3:48 p.m. Bush Boss, why? 3:48 p.m. Bush Queen, well, I wanted to meet the people you always gush about at dinner. 3:49 p.m. Bush Queen, besides, always beating at King Explosion's mother gets old after a while. I needed some new butts to kick. 3:50 p.m. King Explosion, wheeze. 3:50 p.m. King Explosion, I'm telling her that at dinner tonight. Bush Boss, okay, but can we get back to the part where my mother is in a Discord server with me? 3:51 p.m. Bush Queen, oh, lighten up, sweetie. Besides, I'm only fine with vulgar language so long as it's not within hearing range. 3:52 p.m. Bush Queen, that said, at Insomnicat please keep the swearing to a minimum in the voice chat. Insomnicat, yes, ma'am. 3:53 p.m. Hitoshi snorted as Bush Boss kept panicking about his mom being in the Discord server. At least he has a mom that loves him. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the ground floor. Oi, freak. Get your ass down here and help unload the groceries. Hitoshi quietly groaned to himself, before knocking on the floor of his room once. This family had told him that they used a code. 1 knock for yes, 2 for no. Of course, Hitoshi knew that was bullshit. The only time anyone ever knocked on anything in the house was when he was responding to someone. Just a precaution against his quirk, like with the last few families. He quickly closed down his laptop and hid it between his mattress and bed frame. The device was one of the few things he carried with him between homes. The other 3 being his phone, his backpack of essentials, and the muzzle. Hitoshi had managed to buy the laptop for a decent price a couple homes back, and always hid it somewhere in his room to make sure the other kids didn't steal or break it. His backpack was similarly hidden in one of the drawers of his dresser, and his phone stayed underneath a loose floorboard whenever he had to leave it behind, and that damn muzzle always sat in plain sight. As he descended the ladder to the attic, he found himself thinking about the background chatter he could always hear through Bush Boss's microphone while the other boy was in the voice chat. He wished he could live in a home like that. Taoyuka hummed to herself as she put her stuff away, before pulling her laptop out of her bag and booting up Discord, quickly scanning through the conversation that was going on in the general chat. She snorted at Bush Boss panicking over his mom being in the server with him. Dad shouted, Oi, Kyoyuka, you better not be gaming before you finish your homework. She called back, I know, Dad. Don't worry, I'm not dumb enough to put gaming before my studies. Rockin', that's my girl. She chuckled to herself, before pulling her homework out of her backpack and setting it on her desk in front of her laptop. She reached over to the jar on the side of her desk and pulled out a pencil, checking to make sure it was sharp before turning her attention to the papers in front of her. Izuku looked up at the seemingly massive door in front of him and took a deep breath. Katsuki scoffed from behind him. Relax, nerd. It's just the second year of junior high. Izuku glared at him. Rational brain knows that. Anxiety brain is still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Katsuki held his hands up in surrender. Okay, I get it. But standing here waiting for you to get your nerves under control isn't gonna help anything. Izuku sighed, before shouldering his backpack and sliding the door open. Immediately, all attention turned to the doorway, and Izuku swallowed, feeling a bead of sweat run down the back of his neck. The teacher said, "Ah, Midoriya-kun, Bakugo-kun. I was expecting you here earlier. Please, find your seats." They obliged, moving to the 2 empty seats by the outside wall. Katsuki took the desk at the very front, and Izuku took the one behind the blonde. The girl on his right glanced over at him, twirling something around her finger. "Hey, Jiru Kyoyuka, and you are Midoriya Izuku." She raised an eyebrow. "Wait a sec. I swear I recognize your voice from somewhere." "Bush boss." Izuku brightened. "You must be totally jacked. Nice to finally meet you in person." The teacher cleared her throat, and Izuku snapped his mouth shut, turning to face the front. She announced, "Now, most of you probably recognize each other from last year. However, this year, we have 2 students transferring here from online schooling. The circumstances are their own business, and I will not tolerate any of you bothering them about it. Am I understood?" They chorused their assent, and she nodded, before turning around and writing something on the board. "As most of you may know, my name is Kishiki Yonda. I'll be your homeroom teacher this year and next year, since your previous teacher chose to retire. As some of you may have heard from your upperclassmen, I do not tolerate troublemakers in my class. If I find anyone causing issues for other people in this school, then rest assured that they will be properly dealt with. Don't feel like you have to take matters into your own hands. It's my job to ensure that you all have a safe learning environment." Izuku chuckled to himself. Certainly better than the shitstains that Aldra would hire. They always went on about leading us to greatness and all that crap. Fat lot of good that did them. Kishiki-sensei glanced over at the clock and sighed. "Normally, I'd have everyone come up and say a little something about themselves, but we're low on time for homeroom, so I'll see you all this afternoon. Please try to not destroy the classroom while I'm not here." She turned and walked out the door, shutting it behind her right as the bell rang. Immediately, the class got up and started filtering out of the door, and Izuku stood up and shouldered his bag. Jiru tapped him on the shoulder, and he turned to face her. "I looked at the locker assignments and noticed that you and Bakugo, I think his name is, have lockers right next to mine. Come on, I'll show you where to find him." As it turned out, Musutafu Junior High had a similar locker system to Aldera Junior High, where the lockers for students were placed outside of their assigned homeroom. As a result, it was a short walk to Jiru's locker, where she pointed out that Izuku's was on the left of hers and Katsuki's was on the right. As Izuku loaded his books into his locker, Katsuki leaned against the wall. "So, totally jacked, right?" Jiru nodded. "Yep. If Midoriya here is Bush Boss, that must make you King Explosion." Katsuki grinned. "Exactly. Looks like your username is on the nose. Those jacks just for show, or can they actually do shit?" One of the things dangling from her ears that Izuku had assumed was an earring suddenly wiggled, and his eyes widened as he realized they were actually earphone jacks hanging from her earlobes. "That's so cool. Can you plug them into electronics like earbuds? How strong are the tips? How much weight can you lift with them? Can they extend? Do they do anything else?" Jiru blinked, before rubbing at her chin. Yes, strong enough to insert into concrete walls, about half a pound each, up to maybe 2 meters, and they can project my heartbeat about 1,000 times louder when I plug them into some kind of speaker." Katsuki let out a low whistle. "Damn, that's a pretty cool quirk." Jiru rubbed at the back of her neck as a slight blush formed on her cheeks. "You really think so? You don't think they're creepy?" Izuku's eyes narrowed. "I want names." Suddenly, a loud shriek drew their attention. A purple creature with glowing yellow eyes had its arms wrapped protectively around a student with a black bird head. "Don't touch Fumi." An upperclassman standing in front of the student cackled, flanked by 2 other upperclassmen. "You can't tell me what to do, Birdie. I'll touch whatever I want to touch." Jiru sighed. "Samui Tamaru. He thinks he's some big shot because his dad's the principal. Unfortunately, that does make him a big shot, and his dad's got really good lawyers. So any attempts to take him down haven't worked yet." Izuku frowned. "What about Kishiki-sensei?" Jiru shook her head. "She tries, but Samui is sadly not an idiot. He never acts up whenever she's around, so she never catches him in the act. An uncharacteristically smart move on his part, since she has Nedzu on speed dial." Katsuki did a double take. "Hold the F up. Our homeroom teacher has the goddamn principal of UA on speed dial." Jiru nodded. "Yeah, supposedly. She was one of his personal students back when she was in the Gen N course. I think she caught his attention with her quirk. It lets her read entire books just by touching the cover." Izuku's eyes widened, but another hiss from the creature down the hallway grabbed his attention. "Do you know that student with the bird head?" Jiru hummed. "Not personally. That's Takoyami Fumikage. He kinda keeps to himself, so nobody really knows anything about him. All I've heard is that his quirk is supposedly really strong." Izuku hummed. Suddenly, the other end of the hallway turned bright, and the purple creature whimpered and retreated under the shirt of the student with the bird head. One of Samui's lackeys stepped forward, his palm glowing. We figured out your Quirk's weakness, bird boy. That monster doesn't like light, does it? Jiru grunted. Akorui Tenohira, half of Samui's posse. He claims to be Samui's friend, but he's really just riding Samui's coattails. Katsuki huffed. That's painfully familiar. The other upperclassman held his hand out, palm up. A gray glow encompassed the end of the hallway, and Jiru winced. Crap, that's Shizukana Hani. He just silenced that entire area. Even if Takoyami calls for help, nobody's gonna hear it. Izuku scowled. Reaching into his locker, he pulled out a button camera and attached it to his collar, flicking it on and walking forward. Katsuki, with me. Katsuki nodded, falling into step behind Izuku. The two of them strode forward, the crowd parting before him. As they entered the cutoff area, Samui's voice came into painful clarity. Now, if you promise to do my homework for this semester, then maybe I won't cut the blood flow to your legs, chicken brain. Izuku cleared his throat, drawing the attention of all 4 students. Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice that this isn't exactly the most friendly of chats. Perhaps one of you could explain to me what the hell is going on here. Samui drew himself up and walked forward, clearly trying to intimidate Izuku with his sheer height. Buzz off, pipsqueak. We were just teaching this villain that the only way he'll stay out of the slammer is if he behaves like a good boy and doesn't piss off the only future hero in this joint. Izuku snorted. Only future hero. Good one. Samui huffed. I wasn't joking. You'd better not try anything, runt. Izuku smiled, but it lacked any trace of mirth. Why, that threat almost makes you sound like a bully. And surely a bully wouldn't go on to become a hero, right? Akorui stepped forward and grabbed Izuku's face. Shut up and back off, unless you want to go blind for a week. Katsuki's hand clamped down on Akorui's wrist. Hands off, F-face. Akorui's hand was wrenched from Izuku's face, and the upperclassman actually stumbled back a few paces. Samui's eyes narrowed. And who the hell do you think you are? Katsuki stood upright and thumped a fist against his chest. Bakugo Katsuki, future UA Hero Course student. Izuku smirked. Midoriya Izuku, future UA Hero Course student. Samui scoffed. Like hell you are. My dad's the principal, you know. You realize how easily he could F up your school records? You'll never get into a hero course in Japan, unless you apologize and back the F off right now. Izuku's smile didn't budge. Sorry, but I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, I make it a habit to never apologize for doing the right thing. Samui clicked his tongue. Shame. You could have avoided having your lives ruined if you'd just used your brains. Shizukana snapped his fingers, and the gray tint faded from the area. The 3 upperclassmen walked by, and Samui intentionally shoved Izuku to the side as he passed. Dad's not gonna be happy when he hears about how his son was beaten up by 2 second years. Izuku looked Samui in the eyes. Go cry to your daddy. It won't help. Samui scoffed and turned his back on them. Once the 3 upperclassmen rounded the corner, Izuku turned around and walked forward, offering a hand out to Takoyami. You all right there? The other boy huffed. I am fine. Dark Shadow will recover. But that was quite foolish of you. Samui has brought darkness upon many other students at this school. He will no doubt do the same to you. Izuku grinned and reached up to his collar, flicking the button camera off. From what I figured, he's only gotten away with it before because there wasn't any evidence against him. Trust me, if there's one thing I hate above all else, it's bullies. Inko frowned as she walked through the halls of Musutafu Junior High, soon finding her way to the principal's office. The secretary looked up at her. Midoriya Inko, yes, Principal Samui has been expecting you. Please go in. Inko didn't respond, instead pulling the door open and taking in the expressions of everyone inside. The anger on the principal's face, the smug grins of both Izuku and an upperclassman, and Katsuki's scowl. Then she noticed the bruises covering the upperclassman's face. She sighed. All right, what happened? The principal shouted. Your son attacked my boy right after homeroom, jumping on him and beating him mercilessly for no reason. Inko hummed, scanning the older boy's face. Would you sit down for a moment? The upperclassman's expression turned confused, but he complied, sitting down in a nearby chair. Izuku, would you please hold your hand up to the bruise on his cheek? Izuku complied with a grin, and the principal froze at the clear size discrepancy. That proves nothing. Bruises grow in size as they get older, everybody knows that. Inko tilted her head. True. Do you have camera footage of my son beating up your son? The principal scowled. Irrelevant. Your brat attacked my son unprovoked. This will have to go on his permanent record. Inko smiled sweetly, but her eyes held a burning fire. My dear principal, how could we know who deserves to be punished without footage of the incident? The principal pointed at the upperclassman frantically. It's clear as day. My son has bruises, yours does not. There is no need for footage. Izuku cleared his throat. Actually, if we're going to discuss footage, there's something you should see. He pulled out a hologram projector and set it on the principal's desk, before taking a USB out of his pocket and inserting it into the projector. The device turned on, showing footage that looked to be taken from Izuku's button camera. The principal went pale as his son threatened a different student, before turning on Izuku and attempting to intimidate him into silence, then turning to more threats when intimidation failed. Throughout the entire recording, Izuku had not moved once, nor laid a hand on the older boy. As the upperclassman in the footage rounded the corner, the video ended, and Izuku slipped the projector back into his pocket. "Any further questions, sir?" The principal scoffed. "You probably just went and beat him up after turning off the camera. Probably trying to intimidate my poor son into silence so that he wouldn't turn you in like you deserve to be." There was a knock on the door to the office, and he shouted, "What?" A female voice that wasn't the secretary said, "I have something that you'll be very interested in, sir. It's about this whole affair." The principal huffed. "Very well, come in." The door swung open, and the upperclassman paled at the sight of an old friend Inko hadn't seen in a while. She stayed quiet as Yonda walked in with a USB thumb drive held in her hand. "After hearing about the incident from one of my students who witnessed the whole thing, I decided to grab the security footage of the hallway where this took place." Izuku held out his hologram projector with his own USB unplugged, and Yonda took it gracefully, inserting her flash drive into it and setting it on the desk. Immediately, a video played that told the same story as what had been displayed on Izuku's button camera. Yonda pointed out the gray tint at the edges of the screen. "As I'm sure you're aware, sir, this tint indicates the effects of the quirk of Shizukana Hani, who is visible in this footage. Fortunately, this camera happened to be inside his range of effect, allowing it to capture audio from the incident as well as video. You can also clearly see quirk usage by Akarui Tenohira, and your son clearly made threats of using his quirk on Takoyami Fumigage." The principal blustered, but the Takoyami boy also used his quirk. Inko cleared her throat. "Actually, young Takoyami appears to possess a sentient quirk, meaning he cannot use it in the same way as young Shizukana or young Akarui. Besides, quirk usage is not illegal if it is in self-defense." The principal went pale. Inko smiled and walked forward, steepling her fingers on the man's desk. "Why, it seems to me as though you were trying to portray this as an attack on your son, when your son was one of the aggressors in this instance. But the bruises..." Yonda cleared her throat and tapped on the projector. "Actually, I took the liberty of looking through the rest of the day's footage earlier." The video shifted, now displaying footage of the upperclassman punching himself in the face, right where the bruise currently was. He was laughing alongside his two lackeys as he said, "Let's see that little punk try and spin that on me." The projector shut off, and the older boy paled as Yonda lifted it off the desk and unplugged her USB. Handing the projector back to Izuku and crossing her arms as she stared down at the squirming principal. "The way I see it, you have two options. Either you agree to punish your son fairly from here on out, or I send this footage to Principal Nedzu. It's entirely up to you." Izuku grinned as they walked out of the principal's office. "Thanks for the help, Kishiki-sensei." She waved her hand dismissively. Think nothing of it. I've been waiting to catch Tamaru in the act ever since I first got a complaint about him from one of my students." After a few seconds, she broke down into giggles. "Though, it took all my willpower not to react when I walked into that scum's office and saw Inko of all people standing there." Mom started giggling, and Izuku glanced back and forth at the two of them. "You two know each other?" Mom nodded. "Yonda and I were in the same gen ed course at UA. Actually, so was Mitsuki." Kishiki-sensei gasped. "Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot to keep in contact with Mitsuki. Oh man, she's gonna kill me. Wait a minute, her brat is in my homeroom." Izuku snorted. "Hey, give Katsuki a little slack. He does have Uncle Masaru to balance out Aunt Mitsuki." As it turned out, Principal Samui had decided not to punish his son as he should have, and instead tried to call the cops on Kishiki-sensei for threats and blackmail. Unfortunately, said cops included a detective with a lie detector quirk who slapped a pair of handcuffs on the sorry excuse for a man the second that he stopped shouting. With the former principal now in jail, somebody had to step up and fill the role, and the current vice principal had resigned after learning that his old boss had ruined several promising students' careers before they could begin. As a result, Kishiki-sensei ended up taking on the job of principal, though still managing to act as the homeroom teacher for Izuku's class because, in her words, "I trust my new vice principal to handle the administration while I'm teaching." Of course, finding out that said new vice principal was mom was a pretty big shock. Takoyami ended up joining the friend group once Tamaru was expelled. Not because he was scared of facing Kishiki-sensei's wrath, like most students that tried to be friends with Izuku, but because he genuinely appreciated Izuku sticking up for him when nobody else in that hallway would. Though, Izuku only found out when Dark Shadow appeared out of nowhere and quietly informed him of the fact. Since Takoyami was entirely committed to the edgelord aesthetic. Naturally, with the in-person meeting with Totally Jacked came the long-promised visit to her parents' music shop. Jiru had a full-face blush when she opened the store that sad to Izuku's grinning face and Katsuki's signature lazy smirk. Her parents were initially somewhat standoffish. up until Izuku brought up the fact that he'd gotten Tamaru expelled. At that point, the mother profusely thanked him while the father burst into tears and threw himself into a doji position. After the first meeting, Izuku and Katsuki would often come to the jacked-up music center on the weekends. Katsuki found that he had a talent with percussion, and Izuku found himself really enjoying bass guitar. As with most things, Mom ended up tagging along at one point, and it turned out that she used to play guitar back in high school. Hitoshi sighed as his former foster mom slammed the door shut, leaving him standing on the street with nothing but his backpack, his clothes, his laptop, and his phone. The door opened again, but Hitoshi didn't move, just bringing his arm up to catch the muzzle thrown at his face. He looked down at it, before sighing again and stuffing it in his pocket, then turning on his heel and walking off in the direction of the orphanage. Well, it was nice while it lasted. At least it was better than the last house. When the orphanage came into view around the corner, Hitoshi raised an eyebrow at the sight of two police cruisers parked in front of it, along with a nondescript black car parked off to the side. That's new. Wonder who called the cops. As he got closer, he felt something in his chest flutter as the beach who ran the place was dragged out in handcuffs, squirming in the grip of a police officer with a cat head. You don't understand. Those brats would have nowhere to go but villainy if I wasn't there to correct them. She glanced over and saw him standing there. There's one of them. That one's nothing but a filthy brainwasher. Arrest him. Not me. The officer just rolled his eyes and unceremoniously shoved the beach into the backseat of his cruiser before pulling out a radio. Hitoshi didn't bother listening to what the cop was saying as he walked into the building, watching with awe as the various restraints were picked up by police officers and deposited into evidence bags. Hitoshi noticed a guy standing by, wearing a long trench coat and a fedora. Hey, you're the detective running this bust, right? The man nodded. Tsukachi Naomasa, Musutafu Police Department. How can I help you? Hitoshi pulled the muzzle out of his pocket and held it out to the guy. Figured you'd want another nail in her coffin. The detective looked down at the muzzle and winced, before pulling out a handheld radio. Yamada-san, I might have someone for you to take a look at. The woman running this place was sending him to foster homes with a muzzle. The man suddenly held the radio far away from his ear, and Hitoshi could understand, considering the demonic screech on the other end. Once it was cut off, the detective put the radio back up to his ear. Aizawa-san, yes, Yamada heard me correctly. A muzzle. No, the kid's still here. I'm actually impressed that he's sticking around after he heard that screech. I'll see the two of you in a minute. Hitoshi raised an eyebrow. Friends of yours? The detective nodded. A couple of pro-heroes. I work with Aizawa-san a lot for cases like this, and Yamada-san often gets dragged into them by virtue of proximity. Hitoshi sighed. Well, if this Yamada guy reacts like that whenever he hears about muzzles, I guess I can't be too mad. Detective Tsukachi winced. Yeah, he's a little touchy on the subject. Hits a little too close to home, if you know what I mean. Hitoshi nodded, and the sound of a door opening drew his attention. Suddenly, a yellow blur shot out from the stairs to the correction facility, and Hitoshi was suddenly in a very tight embrace. Oh, you poor baby. Hitoshi's brain paused as he recognized the banana-shaped hairdo of the guy holding him. Holy shit. Present Mike used to be muzzled? A sigh from the doorway drew his attention, and he froze completely. A disheveled man wearing a black jumpsuit walked out from the basement and over to Detective Tsukachi, running a hand through his unkempt hair. I'm assuming that's the kid you were talking about. The detective nodded and passed the other man the muzzle. He had this in his pocket, and he matches the description she gave of the tired brat with purple hair. The man glanced over and frowned at Hitoshi's shocked expression. Mike, let him go. I think you might have cracked his ribs or something. Present Mike immediately released him. Oh, so sorry, little listener. Are you okay? Hitoshi didn't move an inch. Oh, listener. Eraserhead. The underground hero smacked his palm into his forehead. Damn it, I told Momoto not to share those videos of me on patrol. Now I've apparently got a fan base. Effing wonderful. Mike, go ahead and kill me now. Present Mike snorted and clapped the older hero on the back. Hey, lighten up. At least your new kid's a fan, right? Hitoshi's brain froze again. New kid. Eraserhead sighed and dragged a hand down his face. Apparently, when this idiot heard about this place, he got it in his head that we needed to adopt all of the kids here. I managed to talk him down to the worst one, which the beach running the place claimed was you. So, if you're okay with it, we thought we'd adopt you. Is that fine with you? Something in Hitoshi's chest swelled. No more muzzles. No more muzzles. No more being kicked out every other week. Nope. No more being silent 24/7. Something in Eraserhead's expression softened, and he nodded. No more being the villain kid. Just a kid. Hitoshi sniffed. Please. Izuku glanced down at his phone, frowning. That's weird. Insomnicat usually doesn't do mass pings. Wonder what's up with him. He quickly opened Discord. navigating from last night's discussion with Newton's Bane about 13's Quirk to the general chat. His eyes widened, and he tapped Katsuki's shoulder. The blonde raised an eyebrow at him in confusion, and Izuku pointed at his phone screen. Hashtag General, Insomnicat, at everyone 3:04 p.m. Insomnicat, guys. Insomnicat, bros. Insomnicat, my GS. Insomnicat, Eraserhead and Present Mike just shut down my shitty orphanage and adopted me 3:05 p.m. Several people are typing. Kayuka glanced down at her phone, eyes widening when she read the notifications. She dropped the guitar she was holding, and it crashed into the floor, snapping the neck on impact. Dad appeared in the doorway and shouted, "Kyouka, I thought you knew better than that. Dad, Insomnicat's orphanage got shut down." Dad froze, his neck scolding stuck in his throat. After a few seconds, he turned and started heading towards the living room. "Oh, honey, remember how we gave the Midoriyas our address? I think we should be prepared for guests soon." May hummed as she fiddled with the screws on her latest project, just barely noticing the first ding from her phone. As usual, she dismissed it as background noise, but the 4 dings that followed in short order grabbed her attention. She quickly pulled off her goggles and grabbed her phone, unlocking it and scanning the conversation. Her other hand froze, and her baby exploded, but she didn't move an inch, not even when the workshop's sprinkler system activated and started spraying down the fire that had formed under her screwdriver. Mom poked her head in and sighed. "Really, Mayday? The last one was only an hour ago." Mom, one of my Discord pals just got his orphanage shut down. Apparently the owner was treating all of the kids like villains. He just sent an image of the torture chamber in the basement." Mom froze, before shutting her mouth and turning on her heel. "I'll go bake some muffins, then. Caramel sound okay?" May nodded wordlessly, bringing her knuckles to her mouth as she watched the new messages pile up. Denki glanced over as his phone dinged with a news notification. Saitama Orphanage closes down over abusive activity. Yikes, that's gotta suck for the kids there. Suddenly, he noticed the several Discord notifications. Wait, Insomnicat's orphanage got closed down. Wow, that's a weird coincidence. What are the odds that 2 orphanages get closed down on the same day? Then he noticed one of the images that Insomnicat had provided of the outside of his former orphanage. Wait, it's the same orphanage? Wait, Insomnicat was in Saitama the entire time. We totally could have met up. Wait, shit, his orphanage just closed down. He's gotta be feeling awful after that. Wait, he got adopted by Present MIC. Hashtag General, Insomnicat. Okay, so, quick update on the whole getting adopted situation. The detective who was running the orphanage raid is a work friend of Eraserhead. So the adoption paperwork got filled out in, like, half an hour, and I'm already at their house. 3:48 p.m. Insomnicat, I'd send photos, but Dad doesn't like the idea of having images of his house shared online. Job security, and all that. Insomnicat, I mean, I totally get why, but still, wish you guys could see this place. 3:49 p.m. Insomnicat, oh my god. Bush boss, cat, you okay? 3:49 p.m. Hashtag kitty corner. Insomnicat, look at this baby. 3:50 p.m. Sparky way. Oh my god, that's adorable. Name, 3:50 p.m. Insomnicat, Dad says her name is Tortellini. I would die for her. 3:51 p.m. Sparky way. Oh, dude, same. 3:51 p.m. Bush boss, that's a very cute kitty. I believe that breed is a tortoiseshell. 3:51 p.m. Insomnicat, I don't care what breed she is, all I know is that I would die for her. 3:52 p.m. Insomnicat, wait, Dad says there are 3 more. Totally jacked, whelp. We just lost at Insomnicat to the furry demons. I'll expect an update in a few hours with pictures once he's pulled away from them by his new parents. 3:54 p.m. Insomnicat, bold of you to assume I would allow myself to be pulled away from kitties. 3:55 p.m. Insomnicat, and that Dad wouldn't be in the same position. Insomnicat, according to Pops, Dad's apparently also a sucker for cats. He found Tortellini in an alley on patrol and immediately took her home with him. 3:56 p.m. Insomnicat, oh dear god, he showed me a picture. Insomnicat, my heart is now melted. Shouta huffed warmly as the kid tapped away at his phone, likely chatting with his online buddies. Turning, he grabbed Hizash's arm and dragged his husband into the kitchen, leaving their new kid in the living room. What's up, show? Shout sighed and pushed Hizashi towards the fridge, before leaning back against the edge of the sink. You do realize we're gonna have to rearrange our patrol schedules so we aren't leaving him at home alone, right? Hizashi raised an eyebrow. What? You don't trust him to be able to take care of himself? Shouta shook his head. No, it's not that. I know he can take care of himself, but he shouldn't have to. I want to show him that we're not gonna leave him on his own like the adults in his life clearly have so far. Asashi winced. Fair point. I'll call the agency and let them know I won't be able to take on nighttime patrols for the foreseeable future. That way you don't have to ruin what's left of your sleep schedule. Alright. Shout aside, I guess. We can move things around as necessary as we get used to having the kid around. Not just scheduling wise, but furniture wise, too. Asashi snapped his fingers. I knew I was forgetting something. We haven't stocked the little listener's room with furniture yet. How about I take him shopping tomorrow, since I'm already scheduled to be off then? Shouta nodded. That should work. He glanced over the counter separating the kitchen and the dining room, and something in his chest grew warm when Hitoshi laughed at something one of his friends had said. We're really lucky, aren't we? Asashi raised an eyebrow and smirked. In what way? Mainly that his spirit wasn't shattered by that hellhole disguised as an orphanage. I'm honestly impressed he's still able to smile and laugh like that after enduring so much pain. Asashi patted him on the shoulder. I think it's safe to assume that his online buddies played a big part in that. Having friends is a hell of a thing, you know. No matter how much you undergrounders like to preach about it being an occupational hazard. Shouta snorted. I dare you to say that to Emi's face. Wasn't she going nuts the other day about how she and Ragdoll had started a thing? Asashi chuckled. You know damn well what I mean, show. 2 weeks later, Achako opened the door, raising an eyebrow at her parents sitting at the dining room table and staring wide-eyed at a letter. Ma, Pa, what's going on? Ma glanced up, tears running down her face. Chako, we got a request from the Put Your Hands Up agency. Achako did a double take. Wait, we got hired by President Mike. What's he want us for? Pa tapped the letter with the back of his hand. Says he's thinking of remodeling his agency to include overnight rooms and training gyms. And he heard through the grapevine that we specialize in larger buildings. He'd also heard that we'd been cheated by our most recent client. And he says he wants to help us out. Achako's mind flashed back to the conversation she'd read on the Hero Hopefuls server about Insomnicat getting adopted by Eraserhead and President Mike. Insomnicat, you sly devil, you. Ma tilted her head in confusion. Hey, Achako waved a hand dismissively. I'll tell you later over dinner. Still gotta get Ma homework done. Izuku smiled as he scanned through the back and forth of gratitude and polite dismissals between Newton's Bane and Insomnicat, before turning his phone off and setting it on the table by the couch, turning his attention back to the TV. He picked up his controller and unpaused the game. Alright, let's see what you've got, Morpho Knight. Kishiki-sensei walked into the room just as the late bell rang. Good morning, Hellions. Yes, I'm still doing double duty as principal and your homeroom teacher. The system I established last year seems to work perfectly well. And why try to fix what's not broken? Scanning the faces of the class, she nodded and dropped a stack of papers on her desk. Right, welcome to your final year of junior high. As you're all aware, now's when you need to start thinking about what you're going to want to do with your lives once you leave this school. I know a good number of you are planning to become pro heroes, but I need to impress upon you that it is not the only way to succeed. Plenty of people are successful without being heroes, and those people tend to be able to make more of their success by being, alive. The mortality rate of pro heroes is the highest of any career in the world. It's a grim fact, but it's a truth you're all going to have to face at some point in your lives. So, are you going to be willing to put your lives on the line to save people? Because if not, then being a hero isn't for you. She glanced around the classroom, nodding at the serious faces. Now, onto a less morbid topic. This year, our guidance counselor's office will be open during all school hours, and she is more than willing to discuss possible careers with you during your free time. Never think that you're confined to a specific career path based on your quirk. You're always more than just what you were born with. Am I clear? The class chorused. Yes, Kishiki-sensei. She nodded. Good. She tapped on the stack of papers on her desk. Class reps, distribute these packets. As Izuku and Kaiuka handed out a packet to each student, Kishiki-sensei continued, these packets hold valuable information to help you in your search for your dream career. Websites that have information about various jobs, different examples of jobs in the area where you can talk to employees, and even resources to help you build a good application. There's also a list of high schools in the area that specialize in different areas. She tapped at her chin for a few seconds. Oh yeah, one more thing. I'm sure you're all aware of this, but it bears repeating. Due to our proximity to UA High School, we will be visited by a representative from UA later this year to gauge if any of you have the potential to be UA students. We also hold mock exams that are designed to test if you're qualified to take the UA entrance exams. However, never think for a second that you know what they're looking for. If there's one thing I want you all to learn this year, it's that you should never assume you know better than UA's principal. Do you understand? Yes, Kishiki-sensei. She nodded. Good. Glancing up at the clock, she stood up and straightened her tie. Since we're almost out of time for homeroom, I'll be seeing you Hellions this afternoon. Don't wreck the place while I'm gone. True to form, the bell for first period rang just as Kishiki-sensei closed the door behind her. Most of the class got up and filtered out the door to their lockers, but Izuku, Katsuki, and Kyoika stayed in their seats by the windows. Since they always got to school so early, they'd usually put their things in their lockers before getting to homeroom. Katsuki swiveled in his seat and crossed his arms on the back of his chair, staring back at Izuku. So, what's new with you and Auntie? The hag told me that you and her went on an outing the other day by yourselves. Izuku grinned. Well, since Mom's been getting paid well as the vice principal, we took another camping trip to Mount Takari. Kyoika raised an eyebrow. Another? You've gone camping there before? Izuku nodded. Yep, but before last weekend, we hadn't gone in years. For a while, Mom was using all the extra cash we had to get me new hero merch every month. But since I dropped that after getting into video games, she'd been saving up what she could, and her salary as vice principal doesn't hurt, either. Kyoika smiled. Well, it's nice that the two of you are able to go out and do stuff as a family together. Sure wish I could do that with my parents, but they're always busy running the shop. Katsuki shrugged. Different families bond in different ways. I know for a fact that my mom wouldn't last an hour camping in the wilderness before going crazy. Kyoika grunted. Dad's the same. He'd go bonkers if he was away from his instruments for any length of time. She turned her attention back to Izuku. By the way, how's training been going for you? I know you said you'd made progress over the break, but you never specified. Izuku rubbed at his chin. Last I checked, I'd reached a 75-kilo bench press and an average running speed of 9 meters a second. I've also gotten save file up to 9 inventory slots and 4 equipped slots. Not to mention, my items are getting more durable as I make them more often, and ones that I use a lot manifest faster and tougher than ones I don't use as much. For instance, my Meta Knight sword manifests almost instantly and can take a point-blank explosion no problem, whereas my wild hammer takes a few seconds to make and would probably shatter after one solid hit. So, right now, I'm torn between either making my regular items faster and stronger to create, or building up my less used items so that they're on a similar level. Kyoika chuckled. So, in Pokemon terms, you're debating whether you want to train your level 70 starter even higher, or get the rest of your team to at least level 60. Izuku nodded. Exactly. What about you? She twirled one of her jacks around her finger. Not much. Sure, I've increased their extension length to maybe 3 meters, but that's about it. Not much else I can train without causing noise complaints, you know. Izuku shrugged. Fair enough. What about you, Cats? Katsuki grunted and flexed his right hand. Finally figured out how to get the angle right for that flight trick I'd been trying out. I think I've increased my blast radius, but I've also been working on smaller, less destructive blasts, like a concussive grenade instead of a frag. I also figured out how to basically make a flashbang. Physical training's been holding up fine, too. Guess I'll find out the specifics once we take those fitness tests later this week. 4 months later, Shouta hummed to himself as he walked through the hallways of Musutafu Junior High. Did they get the place renovated or something? 13 said it was a shithole when she dropped by last year. Noticing the number by the classroom on his right, he walked up to the door and peeked inside, brow furrowing when he noticed one of the students towards the back reaching towards the girl in front of him. He grabbed his capture scarf with one hand and prepared to enter the room, only to pause when he heard a popping sound. The offending student turned pale and sat back in his seat, and Shouta scanned the classroom again. His eyes widened when he noticed a familiar head of blonde hair. That's the Bakugo brat from Aldera, right? I remember he was in an incident near the Kiyashi Ward Mall a couple years back for beating the shit out of 3 other kids. Did he get worse after the place closed down? Bakugo turned in his seat, his expression softening as he started chatting with the kid behind him. Shouta relaxed as he recognized the Midoriya kid. I see how it is. Oh, right, I remember now. That Minda kid at the back was one of the students in that report, if memory serves. They'd been about to molest a girl from another school when Bakugo showed up and beat them several shades of black and blue. Looks like Minda hasn't tried to fix that, and only his fear of Bakugo is keeping him in line. A tap on his shoulder shook him out of his thoughts, and he turned around to see Kishiki standing behind him, holding a stack of papers. You know, sir, staring into a classroom like that makes you look like a child predator. We wouldn't want the kids to get the wrong idea, now would we? Shouta huffed. Good to see you too, rat demigod. By the way, I suggest you keep an eye on Minda. He only seems to be behaving himself because he's in the same room as Bakugo. Kishiki sighed. Yeah, he's a troublemaker, that's for sure. Sadly, I can never catch him in the act, and his mom's on UAS school board, so his record is squeaky clean. I almost wish Midoriya would give the brat the Samui treatment. I bet I wouldn't have said it a couple years ago, but I'm glad I've got Bakugo in my class. The kid makes a great bullying deterrent. I'm probably going to recommend him for UA, along with his 3 friends. Shouter raised an eyebrow. 3, yeah, it was just him and Midoriya when they first got here last year, but they made friends with Jiru and Takoyami on the first day after saving the latter from Tamaru. Nearly everyone in the school knows that they're the unofficial anti-bullying squad. If someone has a problem and they can't reach me or my vice principal directly, they go to one of them. Of course, it helps that the vice principal is Midoriya's mom and an old friend of mine. Shouta did a double take. Really, how's that been working out? Kishiki smiled. Oh, wonderfully. Inko is a marvelous assistant. She usually takes care of the administrative stuff while I'm teaching, but I'm still on call if something needs the principal's signature. She's also done wonders for the working conditions. Last year, this place was missing patches here and there, but Inko called in the Uraraka construction company to renovate the place over the break. Shouta nodded. Good choice. Zashi got them to renovate his agency, and they did a bang-up job of it. Glad we trusted Hitoshi when he recommended them to us. Kishiki raised an eyebrow. Why would your kid know about a random construction company in Mai? That's basically the other side of the country from where you and Mike live in Saitama. Shouta huffed. Apparently, one of his online friends is the daughter of the company's owners. He'd learned that they'd been cheated by their last client, and he told us about it, so Mike decided to throw them a bone. Or, more accurately, a 3-course meal. Kishiki nodded. Understandable. When we were negotiating payment with them, they mentioned something about getting a request to renovate the international students' dorms at UA. Nedzu somehow got wind of the quality of their work, and while Cementos is great and all, he doesn't exactly have the fine control to get nearly as good results. Shouta smirked. And you definitely had nothing to do with it. Kishiki snorted. What do you take me for, a decent human being? Come on, Eraser, you know me better than that. Shouta chuckled, before schooling his expression. In any case, same spiel as usual? She grinned. I don't see why not. Kishiki stepped around Shouta and slid the door open, drawing the class attention as she walked over to the teacher's podium. Shouta ghosted in behind her, silently walking towards the back of the classroom. As the class quieted down, she said, All right, Hellions. As some of you may know from looking at the schedule, we have a representative from UA visiting our third-year classes today. Be on your best behavior, since they're going to play a major role in determining if you'll be accepted, assuming, of course, that you even qualify for the entrance exam at all. Midoriya raised his hand. I'm guessing it's the guy who walked in behind you. The class glanced at each other in confusion, save for Bakugo, a girl sitting behind Midoriya, and a boy with a bird head sitting near the back away from the windows. Kishiki grinned. Correct, Midoriya. You, Bakugo, Jiru, and Takoyami all get extra credit on your next quiz for situational awareness. Shouta cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention towards him. Your teacher has a point. If you want to become a UA student, let alone a pro hero, you need to have better senses than that. Right now, I'm not seeing much potential in most of you. There are a few of you that I'm keeping an eye on, but don't think that you won't succeed without improving beyond where you are right now. It's illogical to believe that you don't have room for improvement. There was silence for a bit, before the class devolved into mutters. From his position at the back of the room, he easily heard the Minta brat grumble, Does he really work at UA? He doesn't look like any hero I know. What is he, the janitor? Midoriya cleared his throat, and the entire class turned to him. Actually, he's an underground hero, which is why you probably don't recognize him. Underground pros tend to work at night, and they handle the seedier side of heroics, interrupting back alley drug deals, saving victims of muggings, sometimes going undercover in villain organizations. It's not the flashiest or most glamorous job, but somebody's gotta do it. Hell, they're probably more respectable than limelight heroes, considering they don't get paid as much due to not being in the official rankings or the public eye, but they still put in over twice as many hours as the average limelight pro. You think Death Arms stretching himself to 50 hours of patrol in 1 week is impressive? The average underground hero does 80 hours in a light week. Shouta nodded. Correct. Most underground pros average at about 100 hours of hero work every week. It's a tiring, thankless job, but a necessary one to keep society chugging along. He gestured to the bags under his eyes. You think I got these by sitting around my house watching HeroTube videos all night? Kishiki cleared her throat, drawing the class attention back to her. Now, since Aizawa-san is with us today, your schedule will be drastically different from normal. Lunch will be at the usual time, but the rest of the day is a free period. Catch up on homework, talk to the guidance counselor, play outside, whatever. Just stay on the school grounds, and make sure you're within hearing distance of the loudspeakers. I'll be calling you into my office one at a time to talk to Aizawa-san personally. My personal office, not the principal's office. Remember, he's not only a teacher at UA, but a pro hero with a license. As such, I expect you all to give him the respect he deserves when you meet with him. Am I clear? The class chorused. Yes, Kishiki-sensei. She nodded. Good. Dismissed. Bakugo, you're first on the list. I'm sure you know where to go, and I know for a fact Aizawa-san does. If anyone needs me, I'll be in the principal's office. Katsuki crossed his arms as he sat across the table from the hero. So, are you actually here from UA, or are you just pretending so you can check up on a former delinquent from the school that you shut down? The man raised an eyebrow. What makes you think that? Katsuki shrugged. I heard your voice on the intercom the day Aldera Junior High closed. I forgot about it afterwards. But hearing you speak in the classroom reminded me. The man huffed. Okay, I have to admit, that's impressive. Remembering a voice after only hearing it once 2 years prior. Not a lot of people can pull that off. Katsuki waved a hand dismissively. Whatever. So are you making sure I'm not getting worse, or are you actually scouting for potential UA students? The hero scoffed. I don't make it a habit to lie about my intentions, unless I'm dealing with someone who breaks the law. Yes, I work at UA, and yes, I'm the one who was sent here this year to scout for potential students. It's a yearly thing, but it's usually a different staff member each year. Katsuki nodded. Right, I remember that 13 visited last year. So, what did you want to talk about? The man grunted. The usual. Grades, potential behavior issues, goals, the works. Katsuki shrugged. Well, I've got all 93 seconds or higher. My only behavior issues are that I tend to have a short temper, which I'm working on, and I want to be a pro hero. I used to want to be number one so I could prove that I was the best. But considering it was Aldera that got that idea in my head, I'm not so sure if I want to aim for that anymore. Not to mention, there are plenty of heroes out there who are awesome without having to be number one. Maruko's basically my effing spirit animal. Aizawa sighed. Well, hopefully you're more willing to work with other people than she is. Teamwork is something we look for in UA students, and being an asshat isn't going to get you anywhere. Katsuki waved a hand dismissively. Hey, in my experience, being an asshat gets people to show their true motives faster, gets them aggravated and makes them get to the point, saves time that could be better used saving lives. The hero made a weird noise that Katsuki realized was a hasty attempt at disguising a snort. Clearly, he'd passed some kind of unofficial test with the guy. Well, if there's nothing else you want to talk about, go ahead and go do whatever you want. Katsuki tilted his head and thought. One question. The principal of Aldera, what was his sentence? Aizawa hummed. 5 years in prison and permanent removal of his teaching certification, if memory serves. Katsuki smirked. Good. Effin deserved it. Shouter raised an eyebrow as Midoriya walked in right as the previous student left the office. That was fast. The kid shrugged and sat down on the other side of the desk. I knew that Netsu-sen was the one going before me, going off of the order people were being called in, and Kishiki-sensei's brought me to her office before. I figured I wouldn't waste your time by making you wait for me to get here. Shouta hummed. So, you were just standing outside the office while I was meeting with the last kid. Midoriya grunted. If you're worried about me listening in on what you were talking about, don't be. I might be sassy, but I'm not a jerk. I know better than to invade someone's privacy. Shouta huffed. Good. Now, let's start with your grades. Midoriya grinned. I see my file there on the desk. Why ask about my grades when they're right there? No, you're looking to see if I'm honest about my achievements. See if I'll exaggerate or downplay my skills. I'm assuming your next question is about behavioral issues, right? Shouta said nothing, but inwardly, he was shocked. This kid picked me apart from just a few clues. Nedzu might like him. Outwardly, he grunted. Well, you're more perceptive than most brats I've scouted at this school. Did your blonde friend tell you about his meeting with me? Midoriya shook his head. Nah, figured you'd want something like doctor-patient confidentiality, especially since if people know what you're looking for, they'll try and put up an image of what they think you'll like. Being honest is always the best policy, especially when you're dealing with somebody who's spent years looking for tiny details. Right, Eraserhead. Shouta's eyes widened, then narrowed. You're the bush boss that my kid talks about, aren't you? Midoriya grinned. In the flesh. Give Insomnicat my regards, will you? Shouta huffed. Maybe later, but right now, let's talk about you. Midoriya sighed. You're aware that any notes on my file from my elementary school teachers are exaggerations or outright lies, right? Shouta nodded. I'm the hero who was brought in to investigate your old middle school. I am very aware of their poor treatment of you before you had your diagnosis rescinded, and I will admit, I'm disgusted that those scum were ever allowed to be teachers. Midoriya smirked. That's good. I'd hate to find out that UA is just as bad as them. Gosh, I sure hope it isn't. Despite himself, Shouta snorted. Kid, the rat god tends to pick his employees from people who have been abused or discriminated against. Nobody's gonna give you a hard time for a quirk or a lack thereof. Even if they did, they'd be gone within an hour of Netsu finding out. Midoriya's smirk widened. Glad to hear that. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss with me? Or can I head back to my friends and leave the next poor sap to your discretion? Shouta grinned. No, that'll be all. As the kid closed the door behind him, Shouta glanced over at the computer screen on the desk, which was currently displaying the footage from the security camera posted over the door. He watched the kid's expression morph from a smug grin to a genuine smile as he jogged off towards the classroom. Midoriya Izuku, I'm looking forward to seeing what you pull off at the entrance exam. Kayuka poked her head into Kishiki-sensei's office, tensing when Aizawa-sen looked up at her. Jiru Kayuka, right. Sit down. She closed the door behind her, sitting down in front of the desk and placing her hands in her lap. So, what did you want to talk about? He hummed. Well, to start, how well do you perform in classes? She felt a bead of sweat run down the back of her neck. Well, I put in a lot of effort into my schoolwork. The other kids say I'm smart for someone my age, but I'm near the middle of the class in academics. The hero sighed, and Kayuka tensed even further. Jiru, we're not talking about how well you do compared to others. We're talking about how well you do objectively. Now, I'll ask again. How are your grades? Well, I usually get somewhere between 87 and 94 in most classes. Sometimes a 95 overall if I do really well that semester. Aizawa-san hummed, and more sweat ran down her neck. I see. And how well do you get along with other kids your age? Well, a lot of them say I'm kinda sassy, but we tend to work together fine. Nobody seems to have issues working with me on school assignments. And what about friends? Do you talk to anyone outside of school hours? Well, yeah, I've got Izuku, and Katsuki, and Fumikage. There's a couple of friends I talk to over Discord, but those three are the ones I talk to in person. Aizawa-san glanced up at her, and she tensed. He sighed. Jiru, relax. This isn't a job application. My judgment today isn't going to determine if you get into UA or not. You're still a junior high student. You have plenty of time to grow and improve. If I do see any issues, I'll talk to you about them and recommend ways to fix them in the 6 months before the entrance exam. There's no need for you to act like you're being interviewed for a desk job at Might Tower. She winced and rubbed at the back of her neck. Sorry, sir. I just tend to get nervous when I'm alone in a room with someone else. He glanced up at her, and she froze. Should I not have said that? He sighed. Actually, it's better that you did. Let me guess. A certain classmate of yours with balls for hair is being an issue. Kayuka slumped down in the seat, all of the tension bleeding out of her. Yeah, he's always making creepy comments about the other girls at school. And it's not limited to just classmates. It's like he thinks every female is his to ogle, and he's not afraid of throwing around his connections. I knew another girl back in elementary school, and she tried reporting the bastard for grabbing her skirt from behind. Minda cried to his mom, and the beach got my friend expelled for assaulting a fellow classmate because, according to him, she'd ripped his hand off her bag and punched him in the face before running away. Aizawa-san hummed, and she squeaked as she realized she'd just said all that out loud. I see, and you'd be willing to testify to that, both the harassment and the covering up by his mother. Her anxiety turned into confusion. I'm sorry, don't be. Mind has been allowed to get away with this for far too long. And I know for a fact his mother has been Nedzu's main obstacle in the rat's attempts to make the hero course more inclusive. If you're willing, I'd like to use your testimony as part of a lawsuit against both Minta and his mother. Kayuka curled in on herself a little bit. But what if I'm overreacting? What if everything will just blow over once Minta gets into high school? Aizawa-san sighed. Before tearing a piece of paper out of a small notebook and writing something on it, he handed the paper out to her, and she took it cautiously, realizing that it had a phone number on it. The hero said, "That's my phone number. I'll be talking to Minta later today. And I'd like to talk to you afterwards about what he says so you can decide if you want to pursue legal action against him or not. From what I know, I'd encourage you to do so already, but I can understand if you'd like solid evidence one way or the other first." Kayuka frowned. Okay, sir. His expression softened, and he leaned forward. Jiru, I may be here on official UA business, but I am a hero first and foremost. If people are suffering, it is literally my job to help them. Shouta raised an eyebrow as Minta swaggered into the office, plopping himself down in front of the desk with a smug grin and not a care in the world. You wanted to talk to me? Yes. First off, what are your grades like? The kid scoffed. Who cares about grades? When it comes to being a hero, all that matters is how cool you look while kicking the villain's butt. Shouta's expression stayed flat. Answer the question, Minda huffed. I do pretty well. 92 seconds across the board, which isn't bad for someone without an intelligence quirk. Shouta hummed. Okay, is there anything you particularly struggle with? The kid waved a hand dismissively. Heroes don't have issues. The only ones with problems are jealous kids and villains. Outwardly, Shouta's expression didn't change. Inwardly, however, he was seething. You can't be serious. Heroes probably have the most mental issues out of anyone in the whole damn country. None of that showed on his face, however. He merely said, all right. What career do you plan on pursuing once you're old enough to work? Minda scoffed. I'm gonna be a hero, of course. Why would anyone willingly be anything else? Everyone knows you're only cool if you're a hero. Shouta grunted. I see. So you want to be a hero so you can be cool. Well, duh. Everybody keeps telling me that I can't be cool the way I am. So I'm gonna get into UA and be a hero so I can prove them wrong and get all the girls. Inwardly, Shouta groaned. Wonderful. Possible self-esteem issues. Maybe an inferiority complex. Definitely a problem child. If he gets into UA and stays, I'm definitely making sure he goes to Hound Dog. Outwardly, he just said, very well. That will be all for now. What? Aren't you gonna ask me about my quirk? Or tell me how well I do on the entrance exam? Something like that. Shouta shook his head. You've got 6 months until the entrance exam. Nobody knows how much you'll change in that time. Besides, I'm legally not allowed to discuss the contents of the exam or how well someone would do on it. Also, I don't care about what your quirk might or might not be. It's illogical to judge someone's potential on just one part of them. That will be all, Minta. Please leave the room so I can meet with the next person. The kid scoffed. Fine, but I'll get into UA, you'll see. Even if I have to grovel and beg to do it. Shouta watched him storm out of the office, slamming the door shut behind him. Sighing, he opened Minda's file and wrote his assessment of the boy in the box for teacher comments. The door rattled, and he quickly switched to the next student's file before glancing up at the bird-headed student in the doorway. Takoyami Fumikage, right. Sit down. The student complied. What is it you wish to discuss with me, sir? Just the basics to help me get an idea of where you stand. To start with, how are your grades? Takoyami hummed. I give my best effort. As a child of darkness, I am constantly struggling to step into the light of success. Shout aside. In Japanese, please. A shadowy figure popped out of the boy's uniform shirt, resting one thick arm on his head. Good luck with that. Fumi's really committed to being all emo. If you want, I can help translate for you. Shouta nodded. That would be appreciated, yes. Well, to answer your question, we usually get semi-decent grades. Mid to high 80 seconds, maybe a 91 if we do really well. Technically, Fumi's the only one doing assignments. But it's not like we can be forced to work alone. Shouta shrugged. True. How well do you work with other people? Takoyami huffed. We are fine. Others do not usually associate with us devils, but those who do are amicable. He means that a lot of people either ignore us or are rude because Fumi's always emo and they see me as either creepy or a puppet. It's annoying. But Kyoyuka and Izuku are always nice, and Katsuki always joins in for group projects and stuff. They're great to have around, and Izuku always has so many fun questions about what I can do. Shouta suppressed a chuckle. Man, those 5 are basically attached at the hip, literally in the case of these 2. Outwardly, he said, well, it's nice that you get along with people, but back to the 2 of you. What are you hoping to do once you graduate high school? Takoyami responded. I wish to bring light to those that live in darkness like we once did. Dark Shadow huffed. He means we want to be heroes to give hope to kids who feel like their quirks are evil or ugly. You wouldn't believe how many times Fumi got called names because of how he looks. And it's not even his quirk that does that. Shouta hummed. Alright then. Well, I think that'll be all. You're free to head back to whatever you were doing before you were called. Dark Shadow gave him a thumbs up before retreating back under Takoyami's shirt. The boy stood up and bowed, before silently leaving the office and closing the door behind him. Shouta rubbed at his chin. Certainly an interesting batch this year. Izuku glanced up at the massive building ahead. Wow, UA really takes everything to the extreme? Huh, Katsuki snorted. It's in the damn motto, nerd. What else did you expect? Izuku shrugged. Can't argue with that. They started forward, only for Izuku to trip on a loose brick in the path. As he fell forward, his mind raced through his different options. Meta Knight Sword. No, that'll ruin the pavement. Sandman, maybe, but there's a chance it'll break under my weight. Crap, can I even catch myself with something without violating quirk usage laws? Shit, I don't think I can. Wait, why haven't I hit the ground yet? As he returned to his senses, he noticed that he was floating at about a 45-degree angle to the ground. Glancing back, he noticed a short girl with with brown curls holding onto his shoulder. Sorry, I noticed you starting to fall, and I kinda acted without thinking. Sorry for using my quirk on you without permission, but I figured it'd be bad luck to trip right before the exam, you know. Izuku shrugged and adjusted himself so that he was standing upright. Maybe, I dunno, never been one for superstitions, personally. The girl placed her fingertips together and said, release. Izuku felt the pull of gravity return, and his eyes widened. Hang on, Newton's Bane. The girl gasped. You must be Bush Boss. Wow, what a coincidence, huh? Who would have thought we'd both show up for the UA entrance exam? Izuku snorted. Well, the server is called Hero Hopefuls, so. She giggled. True, true. She stuck her hand out in a greeting. Uraraka Ochako. Izuku grinned and accepted the handshake. Midoriya Izuku. The blonde here is Bakugo Katsuki, otherwise known as King Explosion. Katsuki stuck his hand up. Yo, nice catch, by the way. Good reflexes. She rubbed at her neck sheepishly. Heh, I guess. Her eyes widened. Crap, we gotta get moving. We don't want to be late for the written exam. She quickly ran off towards the entrance, and the two boys followed. Izuku waved as he walked up to Katsuki, the two of them heading towards the auditorium for the practical exam. So, how'd the written exam go for you? The blonde scoffed. Nothing outrageous there. I sure effing hope I passed. Of course, I bet you did way better than me. There was a tap on Izuku's shoulder, and he turned on his heel to walk backwards, grinning when he saw Kyoika walking behind him. Hey, how'd the exam go? She shrugged. Like Kat said, nothing too ridiculous. A lot of it was stuff that Kishiki-sensei gave us in the past few weeks. So I'm wondering if she was deliberately preparing the class for the written exam here. Takoyami huffed as he appeared behind Katsuki. I would not be surprised if she did. For all her teasing, Kishiki-sensei does genuinely wish to see us succeed. Katsuki whistled. Wow, not a single mention of darkness or demons in either sentence. Good job, Edgar Allan Crow. Takoyami snorted. Well, as best as he could with a beak. Please, a more accurate name would be Quoth the Raven. Katsuki snapped his fingers. Damn, you're right. Gonna have to start using that one. Takoyami grinned. I would not have suggested it otherwise. Sparky boom man. Kyoika chuckled. I see you finally got around to watching Avatar, The Last Airbender. About damn time. They continued chatting as they entered the auditorium, quickly finding 4 open seats next to each other. As they waited, Uraraka slipped in and sat down right behind Izuku. As she tapped him on the shoulder, his eyes widened, and he turned to Kyoika. Oh, right. Kyoika, this is Uraraka Ochako. You know her as Newton's Bane. Uraraka, this is Jiru Kyoika, aka totally jacked. Uraraka grinned and stuck a hand out. Nice to meet ya. A boy with purple hair sitting in front of Katsuki suddenly twisted in his seat and laid his arms on the back of his chair. Wow, did the Hero Hopefuls really all sit together? Talk about a coincidence. He stuck a hand out in greeting. Iyama Hitoshi, aka Insomnicat. Go ahead and call me Hitoshi. He glanced over at Izuku. You must be Midoriya Izuku, aka Bush Boss. Dad said he was looking forward to seeing what you could do. Izuku grinned. Well, I'd better go plus ultra if I'm to impress the great and powerful Eraserhead. Hitoshi snorted. I'm honestly looking forward to seeing what you can do, myself. Kyoika frowned. Hey, Hitoshi, if your parents are teachers here, why didn't you take the recommendations exam? He sighed. I considered it, but I decided that I'd rather try to get in on my own merits. See, one of my primary motivations is to spite everyone who ever called me a villain in the making. And I can't do that if I just coast by on my connections. Kyoika shrugged. Fair enough. The lights dimmed, and everyone turned their attention back to the front. A spotlight shined down on the stage, revealing Present Mike standing there in all his banana-haired glory. Everybody say hey. Dead silence. What a refined audience. In any case, welcome to the practical exam for UAS Heroics course. Your task today, fighting robots. The screen behind the hero lit up with 4 equal sections, each containing a black shape with a white outline. Hitoshi winced. Robots? Huh. Well, F me. Present Mike continued. Once the exam begins, you'll be released into a fake city with several robots, each worth 1, 2, or 3 points. Robots with higher point values are harder to take down, so you have to decide whether to take the risk and get the reward, or play it safe and build up your score slower. Suddenly, a boy with blue hair stood up on the other side of the auditorium. Excuse me, sir. The handouts clearly indicate a 4th type of robot. I do hope UA would not overlook something as important as this. Izuku noticed a slight twitch in the hero's eye. Okay, calm down, listener. I was just getting to that. You're absolutely right. There's a 4th type of robot. However, this guy is worth 0 points. He's an impassable obstacle, and he absolutely rampages at close quarters. So if you see him, your best chance is to run the other way. The team nodded. I see. Please pardon my interruption. Once he sat back down, Present Mike continued. You've been divided into groups and assigned to different testing areas already. Your sight should be indicated on the handout you received before the written exam. Once the exam begins, you'll have 10 minutes to wreck as many bots as you can. Any questions? The auditorium stayed silent, and Present Mike nodded. All right, then, give it your all out there, listeners. Plus ultra. Izuku glanced around at the crowd standing by the gates to the testing site. There was a tap on his shoulder, and he turned to see Uraraka standing there. Hey, what's up? I just wanted to wish you good luck. I mean, this is a pretty big thing. What if I don't get enough points? Izuku suddenly poked her in the forehead. Hey, none of that, you hear me? Self-doubt is only going to lower your performance. You want to give this your best shot, so don't even consider failure as an option. You go out there and you be a hero, you understand? She nodded and pumped her fist in excitement. You're right, I've totally got this. See you on the other end. She headed off into the crowd, and he smiled before mentally going through his inventory. Right, I want movement and power output. His hair glowed, and balls of light descended from his curls, solidifying into an extreme gear that he grabbed out of the air. That covers mobility. Now, what to use for DPS? Shouta walked into the observation room, immediately scanning the various screens for the entrances to the testing areas. He quickly found who he was looking for, mainly since there was only one green-haired kid in the entire batch of applicants. Nezu hummed as he followed Shouta's gaze. Find someone interesting. Shouta grunted. Technically, the kids had my interest for a while. You remember the school district I handed you a couple years back? Nezu chuckled. You're referring to Aldera? Yes. Yeah, those bastards. Well, this kid was the catalyst for the entire investigation, and he's currently enrolled at Musutafu Junior High. He caught my attention when I did my usual scouting trip. He's smart, even without an intelligence quirk. Nezu hummed with interest. What is his quirk, exactly? Not entirely sure. I didn't really look at it much beyond the name, like I normally do. All I know is that it's called Save File. Though, considering he's now holding stuff that he didn't have with him before, I'd say it's some kind of storage or creation quirk. Nezu rubbed his chin, pulling up the feed from the entrance of sight beyond his personal laptop. How very interesting. Still, we mustn't make biased judgments. I assume you can do that. Shouta huffed. The only person you should be concerned about in terms of bias is my kid. And even then, you know me better than that. Nezu chuckled. Too true, Aizawa-kun. In any case, let's begin. Present Mike shouted, go. Immediately, Izuku jumped forward, landing on his extreme gear and shooting off into the fake city. Behind him, he heard the hero yell out, what are you waiting for? There's no countdowns in real life. That kid's got the right idea. Go, go, go. Izuku focused his attention on the streets ahead. A group of one-pointers rounded the corner, immediately locking onto him. Izuku grinned and removed one hand from the board, allowing his Meta Knight sword to appear in his grip. The mask appeared on his face, and his eyes glowed green through the V-shaped slit. Let's party. He swerved around a hail of what were hopefully rubber bullets, before slashing. A crescent-shaped wave of blue fire burst forth, cutting through the group of one-pointers in an instant. 10 points. He rushed forward, veering around the corner and immediately jumping over a wave of fire from a batch of 2-pointers. 2 more slashes cut through the robots, the beams taking out what the sword itself didn't. 18 points. He shot through the city, laughing wildly. Come one, come all. Free ass kickings, get 'em while they're hot. Shouta hummed to himself as he watched the Midoriya kid tear through his testing site, demolishing batches of faux villains in seconds. That's a pretty interesting quirk. Vlad glanced over his shoulder and grunted with interest. What is it? Some kind of fire quirk. That would explain the waves of fire and how he's able to propel that hoverboard. Shouta shook his head. It's actually a lot more interesting. That hoverboard uses an advanced propulsion system that takes in the air around it and expels it out of the bottom and rear to hover and move at high speeds. Vlad raised an eyebrow. And how would you know? Shouta grinned. Because I've seen it in one of the games that my kid occasionally plays with his Discord friends. Nimuri's eyes widened. So his quirk lets him use stuff from video games. Nezu hummed excitedly. So it would seem. Quite the versatile ability. Even if he's restricted to things that operate within the bounds of physics. The sword in particular intrigues me. I believe the items he summons can retain their properties from the game they come from. Hence why the sword is able to create those waves of fire. However, notice how he is constantly keeping one hand on the hoverboard. It would seem that he needs to stay in contact with his items in order to keep them equipped, as it were. It would also appear that some objects have to be summoned together, since I doubt the mask serves any purpose. Nimuri rubbed at her chin. Well, so long as he uses stuff from pre-Quirk era games, he shouldn't have to worry about copyright. At the very least, Vlad coughed. If he gets in, that is. Nedzu smiled. It's looking more like win than if at this point. Though, it appears we have 2 minutes left. Shouta-kun, do the honors. Shouta grinned and slammed his fist on the big red button set on the desk underneath the monitors. The ground rumbled, and Nedzu cackled maniacally as the 0-pointers emerged in the 16 testing sites. Let's see Midoriya handle that. Izuku glanced up as the ground audibly rumbled. What's going on? He leaned back, allowing his extreme gear to carry him up the side of a nearby building. As soon as he crested the edge of the roof, he pulled the board out from under his feet and slid to a stop, peering out over the sprawling fake city. Immediately, he spotted a cloud of dust rising off in the distance, and he could hear several screams echoing in that direction. Without thinking, he dove off the side of the building, landing on the extreme gear and speeding off in that direction. After a few twists and turns, along with a few more points from robot clusters, Izuku emerged from a side alley onto a street littered with debris and filled with fleeing applicants. Glancing in the opposite direction, Izuku felt his breath catch in his throat as he recognized the shape of the 0-pointer from the orientation. Mike really didn't do the damn thing justice. Rampages in close quarters, my ass. Everywhere is close quarters for that thing. He prepared to flee, only to freeze when he heard a cry of pain. Whirling around, he saw Uraraka with her leg stuck underneath a giant chunk of rubble, likely from one of the nearby buildings, and she was trapped right in the path of the 0-pointer. His brain shut down, running completely on instincts and muscle memory. He ran forward. His extreme gear and Meta Knight sword dissipated, but he didn't care. All he could see was Uraraka, trapped and about to be crushed. I was hoping I didn't have to use this, but desperate times call for desperate measures. His hair glowed green, and the balls of light coalesced into a sword in his right hand and a green cap on his head, with a pulsing 5-pointed star on the brim. Izuku felt his feet hit the road, and he leapt, streaking through the air towards the 0-pointer. He grabbed the handle of the sword with both hands, and the blade flashed. The sword suddenly grew to the size of a 3-story building, and Izuku held on, knowing that the handle was stuck to his hands. Roaring, he swung, and the blade cut right through the 0-pointer. The enormous robot froze in place, and Izuku landed back on the street, the sword shrinking to normal size in a couple seconds. He spun the sword in his hand, before snapping it out to the side. The 0-pointer suddenly split in half, the two sides falling against the buildings lining the street. The cap and sword dissipated, and Izuku stumbled, before slowly limping towards where Uraraka was still stuck under the rubble. She stared with wide eyes as he approached, and he stuck a hand out, managing a weak grin. I guess we're even now? Huh. She grinned back, before wincing and looking back at her trapped leg. I'd take the hand up, but my quirks hit its limits. Izuku frowned and stepped forward, pressing both hands against the chunk of debris. He strained as hard as he could, but it didn't move. Panting, he let go, stepping back and wiping his forehead. I'm out of fuel, and I'm not strong enough to lift this. Ideas. Suddenly, the blue-haired teen was there, the engines in his calves sputtering. I believe the two of us together might be enough to move it. Izuku nodded, before placing his hands on the side of the block of concrete. The other boy matched his position next to him, and Izuku said, all right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. They heaved, and the rubble slowly tilted on its edge, before crashing down on its side next to Uraraka. The brown-haired girl quickly swiveled her upper body and started rubbing at her ankle, while Izuku and the other boy collapsed to the ground, their chests heaving. Present Mike's voice rang out, and, time. The entrance exam has now concluded. Katsuki panted as Mike called the end of the exam, still rubbing his wrists as he looked up at the wreckage of the 0-pointer. Damn, still haven't gotten the angle right for that move. I need more practice. Someone tapped him on the shoulder, and he turned to see a kid with black hair standing behind him. The other teen grinned, and Katsuki nearly balked at the shark-like teeth. Hey, man, I just wanted to say, thanks for saving me from that thing. I would have been a pancake if you hadn't blasted it to bits. So manly. Katsuki hummed. Manly, you wouldn't happen to go by Rock Riot, would you? The other guy's eyes widened. Wait, you're King Explosion. Dude, you're even cooler in person. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Yeah, whatever. Glancing around, he frowned when he saw a kid with blonde hair leaning against the side of a building, sparks crackling around his head. Whoa, is that guy okay? Those sparks can't be good. Rock Riot frowned. I dunno, man. I saw him earlier during the exam. He was frying robots with bursts of electricity, so it might be his quirk. Katsuki huffed. Quirk or not, I don't trust sparks near anyone's brain. He quickly walked over and waved a hand in front of the kid's face. Boy, Earth to Sparky, you okay there? The dude glanced up at him. Yeah, just. He quickly turned to the side and coughed into his fist. Just went a little overboard with my quirk. I'm lucky the exam stopped when it did. Otherwise I would have gone full way mode, and that would have sucked. Katsuki raised an eyebrow. You and the hero hopefuls. The dude straightened. Yeah, Kaminari Denki. My username is Sparky Way. You've gotta be King Explosion. And I think that guy behind you already said he's Rock Riot. Katsuki grinned. Yep, Bakugo Katsuki. He glanced back at the other guy. And you, Kirishima Ijiru. Totally manly to meet you in person. Kyoyuka sighed with relief as Mike called an end to the exam. Glancing around, she noticed Hitoshi helping up a guy with weird-looking elbows. You two all right there? Hitoshi nodded, slinging the other guy over his shoulder. I don't think I did very well. My quirk doesn't exactly do much against robots. Kyoyuka winced. Yikes, did you at least have a backup plan? Hitoshi grinned. You bet. Kyoyuka grinned back. Then I expect to see you in the hero course at some point next year. Shouta chuckled as Tensei's brother and Midoriya worked together to get the rubble off the Uraraka girl. Good teamwork there. If we were allowed more than one secret point system, they'd probably earn extra points with that. Nedzu sighed. Unfortunately, we are not, but at least we can give them both rescue points for their actions. Flad winced. Shouta, bad news. Your kid didn't get any villain points, and he didn't earn enough rescue points to make the cut. Shouta shrugged. Oh well, he knew better than to put all his eggs in one basket. Though, quick question, what's the score of Mineta Minoru? Nedzu hummed, swiping through the results on his tablet. 1 villain point over the cutoff. Ironically enough, he got 0 rescue points. So, in terms of this year's batch, he is quite literally the bottom of the barrel. Shouta allowed his logical ruse grin slip onto his face, and with any luck, we'll be cutting out the rotting bottom and replacing it with a fresh one within a week of the new school year. Following the entrance exam, Izuku was a nervous wreck. Every day after getting home from school, he would run to the mailbox outside the apartment and check for anything from UA. That Friday, it had gotten to the point that Kishiki-sensei had to take him aside to her personal office. Midoriya, calm down. I'm sure you did just fine. But what if I didn't get enough points to pass? What if getting a quirk wasn't enough? Oh god, am I gonna have to settle for Gen Ed? Kishiki-sensei grabbed him by the shoulders and gave him a quick shake. Midoriya. Breathe. He stopped pulling at his hair and looked at her. I know for a fact that you did well. You're one of my top students, not just academically. If you didn't pass the entrance exam, then I swear that I will effing eat my teaching license. Izuku sniffed, tears welling up in his eyes. You really think that highly of me? Yes, Midoriya, you are one of the best students I have ever had in my entire teaching career. You are an incredible joy to be around. You always give your best effort in class, and you always go out of your way to help other people. If that rat god doesn't give you a chance to be a hero, I swear I will walk up to his office and punch him in the face. Izuku's face went pale, and he started weaving his arms frantically. No, you don't need to do that over me. I'll be fine. Kishiki-sensei grabbed him firmly by the shoulders, and he stopped talking. Midoriya, you are worth it. I don't care what the F. Aldera put in your head about your value as a person, none of it is true. You are a wonderful person, and I will be surprised if you don't reach the top 10 in the hero rankings within a year of your graduation. Izuku took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping a few inches. Thanks, sensei. I just couldn't help but worry. She patted him on the back. Don't sweat it. Can't have my best student ruining his grades because of overstress. I'll let your mom know that you need some time to unwind. I don't want to hear about you going out and training at any point this weekend. You hear me? You need a mental health break. Izuku tossed up a mock salute. Yes, ma'am. Will that be all, ma'am? Kishiki-sensei snorted and slapped him on the back. There's the Midoriya I know and love. Go on, get back to your friends. They're probably wondering if they need to strap you to your bed and force you to watch cat videos. A snort came from the doorway, and Izuku turned to see Katsuki standing there. Funnily enough, that was our first idea. I guess you beat us to him, huh? Kishiki-sensei nodded and pushed Izuku in the back, sending him stumbling into Katsuki's arms. Get that boy home and distressed. I'll let your teachers know that I prescribed him 12 hours of forced R&R. Katsuki chuckled. Pretty sure you can't effing prescribe something unless you're a doctor, but whatever. Apparently, Mom had noticed Izuku's steady decline, so she was ready and waiting when he and Katsuki showed up at the apartment. The moment he opened the door, she immediately dragged him to the living room and plopped him down on the couch, wrapping him in his favorite All Might blanket and handing him a steaming cup of hot chocolate. Before he could protest, she'd stuck his computer on his lap, already open to his favorite cat compilation. It only took a few seconds before he sighed, the tension bleeding out of his shoulders as he practically melted into the couch. Katsuki sat down next to him and wrapped him in a tight hug, while Mom bustled around in the kitchen, likely prepping Katsuden for dinner. Thanks, I needed this. Katsuki huffed warmly. You're shitty at hiding your problems, nerd. This was gonna happen eventually. Just be thankful that we caught it and nipped it in the bud before it started affecting your grades. Izuku's phone dinged, but before he could read the notification, Katsuki had swiped it out of his hands. Katsuki, give me that. No, you are not allowed to look at your phone unless it's something I deem safe for you. Auntie, back me up here. Mom called. Izuku. Until specified otherwise, Katsuki is now in charge of your screen time. You are to only look at pre-approved cat videos and messages from your friends. Katsuki will handle all other notifications. Izuku sighed, before wrapping his hands around his mug of hot chocolate and sinking back into the couch. Fine. Katsuki smirked and patted him on the head, before turning to Izuku's phone and checking the notification. Oh, it's just Bose wondering where you went. No, you don't need to do anything. I'm perfectly capable of updating her on the situation myself. You just sit there like a good boy, watch your cat videos, and drink your hot chocky. Izuku pouted and slumped against the back of the couch. Alright, I get it. No thinking for the baby. Kayuka glanced down as her phone dinged. She plugged one of her jacks into it and listened to the automated voice read out the notification. Sighing with relief, she glanced over at Fumikage and made a beckoning motion with her finger. Dark shadow popped out from the boy's shirt and slid across the floor, coming up right next to Kayuka's desk. So, what's the situation with Zuko? Apparently, he was stressing over the possibility of failing the entrance exam. Kishiki-sensei, Katsuki, and Mamadoriya had to stage an intervention and force him to distress. He's currently sitting on his couch, watching cat videos and drinking hot chocolate. Katsuki confiscated his phone for the foreseeable future. Dark Shadow huffed. I knew something was up with him. Thank goodness they caught it before it got any worse. Kayuka nodded and turned her attention back to the board before Bangu-sensei could accuse her of not paying attention to the lesson on complementary and supplementary angles. In the back of her mind, she could hear Dark Shadow relaying information to Fumikage. Before retreating back under the boy's shirt, Fumikage glanced over at her, and she tossed him a quick thumbs up before focusing back on the board. She heard Minta mutter under his breath, "Oh, so when us regular people get stressed, we're told to man up and deal with it. But when Mr. Precious starts worrying if he passed a little test or not, he's allowed to go home early and be excused from schoolwork." Talk about a teacher's pet. Right then and there, Kayuka swore to herself that one day, she was going to grind that bastard into a fine paste, stuff him into a wine bottle, and then get Uraraka to chuck the bottle into orbit. Izuku was a smart enough person to admit when he was wrong. He knew that he'd been getting overly stressed, and he really needed the time to unwind and calm down. He knew he probably would have gone crazy if Kishiki-sensei hadn't forced him to go home early on Friday for his own mental health. He also knew that he could be forgiven for devolving into a panicked mess when he noticed the letter from Yue inside his mail. As soon as Mom heard his hyperventilating, she immediately came over, picked him up, and dropped him on the couch, wrapping him in a blanket before going back outside to the mailbox. As he curled up there, clutching the blanket like a lifeline, she calmly walked in and sorted the mail into different piles on the dining room table, before taking the letter from Yue and setting it on the coffee table in front of the couch. Well, sweetie, it's not going to get any better if you wait. Go on, open it. Izuku reached out with trembling hands and picked up the envelope, popping the wax seal with his thumbnail. He reached in and took out 2 items, a folded letter and a hologram projector. Mom calmly took the items from his hands, setting the letter to one side before placing the projector on the coffee table and turning it on. A video of All Might appeared and shouted, "Greetings, young Midoriya. I am here to deliver your exam results. In the written exam, you scored an impressive 99%. Not an easy feat without the help of an intelligence quirk. In addition, you scored a whopping 76 villain points in the practical exam, more than enough to qualify for the hero course normally." Izuku panicked. Was there something I didn't know about? Oh god, what if I failed because I didn't satisfy a hidden condition? However, recently, Yue has added a secret point system to help out those with less combative quirks rescue points. After all, what is a hero if not someone who saves people? For your heroic actions in the entrance exam, you have been awarded an additional 80 rescue points. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. What? Congratulations, young Midoriya. You have passed Yue's entrance exam with 156 points, making you the top scorer this year, even beating out my old record of 110 points. Izuku brought his hand up to his mouth, tears forming in his eyes. You mean I, young Midoriya, welcome to your hero academia. The hologram shut off, and the 2 Midoriyas sat there in stunned silence for a few seconds. Suddenly, Izuku threw off his blanket and screeched triumphantly, and Mom jumped up and wrapped him in a bear hug. Izuku, you did it. You're going to UA. I did it, Mom. I'm going to be a hero. Kishiki-sensei, of course, was smug beyond belief. I told you I knew for a fact you'd get in. I still keep in contact with the rat god. After all, I knew the exam results, but I couldn't say anything until the letters had been sent out. Katsuki clapped him on the back the moment the two saw each other in person. Told you, Zuko, you're a effing boss. We promised to be heroes together, after all. Dark Shadow had wrapped him in a tight hug as soon as Izuku took one step into the classroom. I'm so sorry we didn't notice sooner. We totally could have helped you unwind before it got too bad. Fumikage wasn't quite as emotional, but he offered his apologies for not noticing, and assured Izuku that he would be more vigilant in the future. Kaiuka was close to tears, wrapping Izuku's hand with one of her jacks and dragging him over to her desk. Always tell us when you're stressed in the future, alright? Never think that you have to keep your problems to yourself. She then proceeded to pull him into a hug, causing most of the class to either turn red or let out wolf whistles. Mind simply grumbled and buried his nose in his homework. Once she released him, Izuku stumbled back to his desk and sat down, his entire face one deep red blush. Kaiuka wasn't much better, her face buried in her hands and constantly making squeaking noises. Kishiki-sensei walked in, looked at the expressions of everyone assembled, and decided to just move on in her own blunt way. Well, those of you who took the UA entrance exam, I'm sure you've gotten your results back by now. Those of you who got in, congratulations. Those of you who didn't, oh well. You'll always have other opportunities. Whether that's other hero schools or other career paths is up to you. Minda coughed into his fist and rubbed it against his chest, leaning back in his seat and wearing a smug grin. Kishiki-sensei continued. By the way, passing doesn't ensure your spot in the hero course, especially you poor saps in 1A. Your behavior for the remainder of this school year can potentially have your attendance revoked. And 1A's homeroom teacher is notorious for expelling those who he believes don't live up to his standards. So don't feel safe. Minda just continued looking smug. Izuku and Kaiuka had since recovered from their respective blushes, and were currently glaring at the grape with barely concealed disdain. As was most of the class, really. The boy had made a reputation for himself at Musutafu Junior High for using his mom's position on UAS school board to get himself out of whatever trouble he ended up in. And said reputation hardly endeared him to most of the students and faculty. Of course, he completely misinterpreted the reason for their disgust, believing them to either be jealous of his quirk or literally looking down on him for his lack of height. Kishiki-sensei cleared her throat, bringing everyone's attention back to the front. Still, regardless of the results of the entrance exam, you all are still my students, and this is still a school. You are not excused from lessons just because you've been accepted to a high school. Your grades can impact your attendance just as much as your behavior. As such, I expect you all to continue giving your assignments as much effort as you have so far this year. Am I clear? They chorused. Yes, Kishiki-sensei. She nodded. Good. Glancing up at the clock, she sighed and closed her folder, picking it up and holding it by her side. Hate to sound like a broken record, but we're out of time for homeroom. Class dismissed. The bell rang just as she walked out. The class got up and started filtering out the door, though most students tossed glances at Izuku and Kaiuka before they left. Katsuki simply turned around in his seat, leaning on the back of his chair and grinning at Izuku. Gee willikers, Zooks, I didn't know you had a tech kink. Izuku's blush returned in full force, and he slammed his face into his desk, the impact actually making the surrounding empty desks jump a couple centimeters into the air. Fumikage chuckled as he walked over. For once, I agree with the Pomeranian. Your feelings clearly go far beyond simple friendship, do they not? Kaiuka buried her face in her hands and whimpered. Katsuki's grin widened. Oh, come off it, you two. This has been a long time coming. Ever since Suku stepped in and stood up to Bose's primary bully. She probably had the hots for him the entire time. It's just neither of you had the balls to open up and admit it. A loud gagging sound came from the back of the room, and the four of them glanced over at where Minta was sitting. Oh my god, can you not? Honestly, it's disgusting that Sensei lets you four get away with everything. Like, can you possibly be more of a teacher's pet? Sheesh. Izuku and Kaiuka glared at the short boy as he stood up and strutted out of the room, oblivious to their anger. As soon as the door slid shut behind Minta, all four of them said in unison, I'm gonna squash that effing grape the first chance I get. Izuku glanced up at the massive building sitting before them. 2 months later, and it only feels more impressive, doesn't it? Kaiuka nodded, her hand intertwined with his. Well, it's not gonna get any less impressive while we stand here gawking. Come on, let's get to class. You remember where 1A's room is, right? Izuku scoffed. Child's play, at least, compared to some of the work Kishiki-sensei would assign us. Kaiuka snorted. More like the work she would assign you. I totally noticed her giving you high school level work during the last month of junior high, and you still aced it like the genius you are. Izuku chuckled, and the two of them started forward. Thankfully, there wasn't a loose brick to trip on this time, and they continued into the main building uninterrupted. Izuku quickly took the lead, navigating his way through the various halls until they stood in front of a 10-foot tall door marked 1A. Well, we're here, shall we? Kaiuka lightly elbowed him. Do we do this normally or do we go for the dramatic entrance? Izuku grinned. What do you think, babe? They locked their hands in place and stepped forward, Izuku catching the door with his right hand and sliding it open in a practiced maneuver. The two of them spun into the room together, catching the attention of everyone inside. Izuku stopped in front of the teacher's podium, allowing Kaiuka to spin in place before he dipped her into a passionate kiss. Izuku could hear the wolf whistles and clapping from around the room, as well as a shocked gasp and a pain groan. They split apart, and Izuku pulled Kaiuka upright with a grin, turning to face the class and gauge their reaction. Several people standing near the front were clapping in approval. Izuku spotted Kaminari and Kirishima standing with a pink-skinned girl who was cackling madly. A blonde boy wearing a fancy belt had his hands on his cheeks and sparkles in his eyes. The blue-haired boy from the entrance exam had his jaw hanging open and his hand raised as though he was about to karate chop some sense into both of them. Katsuki was smirking and nodding in approval. And of course, the reaction they were hoping for. Minda was sitting near the back of the room and looking absolutely disgusted. And here I was hoping I'd get away from your stupid PDA here. Izuku grinned and wrapped his arm around Kaiuka's waist, bringing her in closer. Too bad, buddy. You're stuck with us now. Ochako walked up with a grin on her face. So, you two finally figured out you liked each other and got together over the break. About time. Izuku grinned and rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, a slight blush on his face. Yeah, it actually took Mom locking us both in my room until we confessed our feelings. But on the plus side, at least we have new material to bug Minda with. Ochako snorted. Yeah, that's definitely a plus. Kaiuka tapped Izuku's lower back, and he turned towards the door, having picked up on the same thing she had. Hi there, Aizawa-san. Do you always make yourself look like a caterpillar, or is this a special occasion? All attention was drawn to the bright yellow sleeping bag laying in the doorway. Aizawa-san sighed and stood upright, allowing the bag to fall to the floor by his ankles. Well, I guess I can't be too surprised. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Aizawa Shouta. I'll be your homeroom teacher this year. He pulled a bunch of uniforms from his bag and tossed them on the podium. Get changed and get outside to the training field. I don't tolerate slackers. He glanced at Izuku and Kaiuka. Keep the PDA to a reasonable amount. So long as it doesn't interrupt your work, I won't have a problem with it. The man turned on his heel and left, dragging his sleeping bag behind him. Izuku and Kaiuka reached over and grabbed one uniform each, before splitting apart and heading towards the locker rooms. This spurred the rest of the class into action, and they followed, with Katsuki and Fumikage leading the pack and Ochako bringing up the rear. The five of them were out on the training field in about 5 minutes, followed closely by the teen with split hair and the girl with her black hair in a ponytail. Kaminari and Kirishima showed up at about the 8-minute mark, and the rest of the class had trickled out after 10 minutes. Once Minda had finally swaggered onto the field, Aizawa-sensei raised his voice to address the entire class. Most of you took over 10 minutes to get out here. That is unacceptable. Out in the field, hundreds of innocent people could have died in those 10 minutes. As a hero, you learn to make every second count. In other news, we're holding a Quirk apprehension test. Ochako raised her hand. Sir, what about orientation? Heroes don't have time to waste on frivolities. Any important information covered during orientation is also covered in your syllabi, so I recommend looking through it once we're done here. But back on topic. You've already done these tests in middle school, but the Ministry of Education likes to waste time by making you do them quirkless. Izuku deftly caught the ball tossed his way with his right hand. Midoriya, you got first on the entrance exam, right? What was your score for the softball throw in middle school? 65 meters, I think. You know the drill. Stand in the circle and throw that as hard as you can, but this time, you can use your quirk. Izuku hummed and moved to stand in the circle. Alright, what do I have on hand that deals little damage, but a lot of knockback? His hair glowed, and the balls of light coalesced in his left hand, forming an iron sledgehammer. There's nothing against me hitting it after it's in the air, is there? Aizawa-sensei grinned. You heard me. The only rule is that you have to stay in the circle. Izuku felt a matching grin slide onto his face, and he tossed the ball up in the air. As it reached its zenith, he grabbed the handle with his other hand and lifted the hammer into the air behind him. As the ball fell down, Izuku swung low like he was playing golf, and the head of the hammer hit the ball at just the right angle. The ball streaked off into the distance, and Izuku allowed the hammer to settle onto his shoulder in the follow-through. The class gasped in surprise, while Katsuki merely crossed his arms and smirked. Eventually, the ball hit the ground on the other side of the field, and a device in Aizawa-sensei's hand beeped. He held it up to show a screen that reads 698.3 meters. In order for me to properly train you all, I first need to know your limits. These tests are designed to find those limits. The class devolved into chatters, and the pink-skinned girl said, we get to use our quirks books for this. This is gonna be fun. Immediately, Aizawa-sensei rounded on her, eyes narrowed. Fun? Is heroics just a game to you? The class fell silent. Fine, if you want to treat this like a game. Then let's raise the stakes, shall we? Whoever comes in last place will be determined to have zero potential and will be expelled. The class devolved into shouting, and Ochako shouted, "You can't do that." Izuku scoffed. He can, and he absolutely will if you don't give this your best effort. Aizawa-sensei is known for being strict, and he's expelled students in the past for not trying their hardest. Hell, last year, he expelled his entire class on the first day because they didn't take him seriously. Aizawa-sensei nodded. Exactly. I refuse to teach students with no potential, or worse, students who refuse to use their potential. Heroics is not a game. One wrong move, and your life is forfeit. I refuse to send a student out into the field, only to read their obituary in the paper the next day. Have I made myself clear? The quartet from Musutafu chorused, "Yes, Aizawa-sensei." The rest of the class all voiced their assent soon after. The man nodded. Good. With that out of the way, let's get down to business. Since the ball throw was the one demonstrated, we'll start with that and go in order of seat number. Aoyama, you're up first. Katsuki rolled his shoulders and flexed his fingers as he prepared for the 50-meter dash. He was running alongside Izuku, and the nerd was going through some basic stretches. Stay out of my way, nerd. Izuku grinned. Only if you stay out of mine, Pomeranian. Katsuki smirked and walked up to the starting line, leaning forward. He was dimly aware of Izuku doing the same thing next to him. Aizawa-sensei called out, "Midoriya, Bakugo, start." Immediately, Katsuki blasted off, his palms facing behind him and letting off one explosion at a time, maximizing his thrust and keeping him on course. There was a blur of wind beside him, and the nerd was suddenly standing at the other end of the track and facing backwards, wearing roller skates and holding what looked like a speaker turned into a gun. Katsuki streaked across the finish line only a second later, immediately grabbing Izuku and pulling him into a noogie. How come you never showed that speed during training? Ha! Izuku snorted and pushed him off. Yeah, whatever. Kayuka crouched down at the end of the sandbox for the standing long jump. If I had any speakers, I could propel myself. But what can I do without them? Her jacks flew out and stabbed themselves into the ground a couple feet out, on either side of the sandbox. She glanced over at Aizawa-sensei, but he didn't say anything, just checking his tablet. Go ahead, she grinned, before turning her attention back to the sandbox. She jumped, her jacks pulling her forward and slightly adding to her momentum. She fell back down to earth just outside the sandbox, landing on her feet and stumbling for a meter or so. Aizawa-sensei merely smirked and tapped something out on his tablet before calling for the next person. Fumikage hummed as he considered the measuring tool used for the grip strength test. It would be foolish to assume that having you grip it by yourself would not adhere to the spirit of the test. Dark Shadow sighed. Probably not. So, what do we do? Fumikage rubbed at what approximated to his chin. You already slumber within my body, yes. Would it be possible to infuse your wings into my arms and add your strength to my own? Dark Shadow grinned. What the heck, let's try it. Fumikage picked up the device, and Dark Shadow settled over him, feeling almost like a second skin. Fumikage wrapped a shadow-covered hand over the end of the tool and squeezed, and the bar came back much faster than if he'd done it on his own. Aizawa-sensei nodded in approval and motioned for the next person to come forward. Izuku walked off the track, having just finished the endurance run. He and the Yaoyorozu girl had lasted the longest, having both made devices to carry them, her with a moped, and him with his extreme gear. Kayuka was leaning against the wire fence, and she stepped forward, holding her arms out to him. He immediately pulled her into a hug, smirking at the loud noise of disgust from Mainta. When do you think he'll realize we do this specifically to piss him off? Kayuka snorted. The day his intelligence beats out his pride. Ah, so when hell freezes over. Gotcha. Aizawa-sensei cleared his throat, and the class turned their attention to him. Well, none of you did too poorly, so I can't exactly complain about that. As for your specific scores, he pulled out a hologram projector and turned it on, displaying a 10x2 table of names and numbers. First place had gone to Todoroki, who had dominated most of the tests with proficient use of his eyes. Yaoyorozu had taken second place with Izuku in a close third, both of them having created various items to help them with their tests. Ada came in fourth, and Katsuki was a close fifth. Sixth went to Ochako, seventh to Fumikage, and eighth to Kirishima. Kayuka had pulled a respectable 12th, and Minda was sitting in 19th above Hagakure in 20th. Immediately, the invisible girl started sobbing, and Minda smirked. Sucks to be you. Now I've got a good shot at some real lookers. Aizawa-sensei smirked. I wouldn't be too sure. The holographic display shimmered and switched to footage from one of the security cameras overlooking the training field. Minda's face went pale as a video played of him grabbing Yaoyorozu's butt from behind. only to dart off when she whirled in place with a fully formed taser in her hand. I wasn't judging last place on just your scores in the tests. I was also looking for clever thinking and proper behavior. The display went back to the table of scores. If I add in that little interaction, the two bottom spots switched places. Hagakir's score stayed the same, but Minta's score had dropped to 0. The short boy went pale. You can't do that. Aizawa-sensei huffed. I believe Midoriya has established that I can and will. Have you forgotten? Nenzu told you in your acceptance letter that you were admitted on probation. One wrong move, and you're out. You already got your other 2 strikes at Musutafu Junior High. This was strike 3. You're expelled. Get out of my sight. Minta started crying and wailed. Mom will have your job for this. Aizawa-sensei chuckled darkly. Might you be referring to Minta Karen, our former school board member? Minta froze, the color draining from his face. What? Oh, right. She probably hasn't had an opportunity to tell you yet. You see, somebody went around and collected records of every sexual harassment lawsuit that was filed against you. Interestingly enough, every single case was dropped due to insufficient evidence. Quite the odd consensus, especially considering the most recent one, occurring at the Kiyashi Ward shopping mall, had clear video evidence of you and 2 others attempting to assault your helpless victim. As a result, your mother was fired from the school board just this morning. The hero glared down at the midget. My decision stands. You are expelled, Minta Minoru. Minta's face went white as a sheet, and he ran off towards the classroom, bawling his eyes out. The class watched him go, and a collective cheer rose up as he rounded a corner and vanished from sight. Aizawa-sensei continued, remember, the syllabi are on your desks back at the classroom. Make sure to look through them, since they have a map of the school and a list of facilities available to you as hero students. Izuku took Kayuka's hand in his and started heading back towards the classroom. As he passed by Hagakure, he paused and tossed her a thumbs up. Mom says you're welcome. When Aizawa-sensei walked into class the following day, the room fell silent within seconds. He nodded with satisfaction. Good, you're already improving. Now, a few announcements. First of all, UA follows the same style as junior high. You will have your classes in your homeroom, with a different teacher for each subject. There will be a 5-minute break between periods to allow for trips to your lockers, which are located in the hallway by the stairwell. Morning classes are your academics, math, science, English, etc. The lunch period lasts for 1 hour, after which you will have 5 minutes to be back here for afternoon classes. Since you're in the hero course, those will usually be hero-related classes, such as foundational heroics or heroic law. Any questions? Nobody raised their hand. He nodded. All right. Secondly, we have a new staff member this year to help teach heroics classes to your year. He's new to teaching, but for some ungodly reason, he'll be in charge of your foundational heroics class today. Don't worry, I'll be nearby to hopefully prevent accidents. I want you to give him the same amount of respect that you would give any other teacher. No more, no less. We may be heroes, but while we're holding classes, we are to be treated as teachers. Understood? They chorused. Yes, Aizawa-sensei. He nodded. Good. Lastly, he turned towards the door. Come in. Hitoshi walked into the quiet cheers of the hero hopefuls. Aizawa-sensei continued. As of this morning, Aoyama Hitoshi is officially a hero course student. He had the highest score on the entrance exam for those who failed, so he was chosen to fill our empty seat. I'd better not find any of you treating him differently because he transferred from the general education course. He glanced up at the clock and sighed. That'll be all for today. Dismissed. In a move reminiscent of Kishiki-sensei, Aizawa-sensei walked out of the room and closed the door behind him right as the bell rang to signal the end of homeroom. Most of the class filtered out towards the lockers, but a portion of the students gathered around Izuku's desk. Kayuka casually leaned against the wall and said, all right, so we're all in the Hero Hopeful server, which really needs a rebranding now that I think about it. How about we all go around and introduce ourselves for real? Izuku nodded. Makes sense to me. Midoriya Izuku, aka Bush Boss, aka the guy who started this whole shindig. Katsuki smirked. Bakugo Katsuki, aka King Explosion. Ochako raised her hand. Uraraka Ochako, aka Newton's Bane. Hitoshi snorted. Aoyama Hitoshi, aka Insomnicat. Kaminari tossed up a mock salute. Kaminari Denki, aka Sparky Way. The rock-headed boy tapped his fingers together. Kudakuji. My username is Snow White. Kirishima knocked his fists together. Kirishima Ijiru. Rock Riot. Kayuka twirled a jack around her finger. Jiru Kayuka. Totally jacked. Izuku hummed. So, we're only missing Baby Gremlin and Mr. Twister. Have we heard anything from them since the school year started? Katsuki, the more active of the two admins, shook his head. Not a peep. Could be that they've been busy with school shit, but I know we were all trying for UA. Baby Gremlin does support shit, right? Maybe she's in the support course. Could be that Mr. Twister is in 1B. Or maybe he went to Shiksu for whatever reason. Somebody should ping him and ask. Izuku nodded. I'll work on that during lunch, probably. He glanced over at where Koda was looking nervous, and he raised an eyebrow. Kuda, would you be more comfortable with sign language? Because I know for a fact that Katsuki, Kaiuka, and I know JSL. Kuda's eyes widened, and his hands started flying. You really mean it. You're not gonna call me weird because I don't like to talk. Katsuki sighed. I'm pretty sure we've all gone through some shit at some point in our lives. Eyebags was the villain kid. Izuku was the quirkless Deku. Both used to get teased because of her jacks. And I don't even know what kinds of shit the rest of you have gotten. Kirishima winced and rubbed at his neck. Yeah, the other kids at school used to make fun of me because my quirk isn't very flashy. So when I said I wanted to be a hero, they kinda laughed at me. Katsuki groaned and dragged a hand down his face. And here I thought I used to be a sack of shit. Your quirk is perfect for hero work. That level of tankiness is gonna get you places. Kaminari scoffed. Well, at least he's good for more than just a single use. My quirk literally turns me into a brain-dead idiot when I discharge too much. Katsuki stared at the other blonde. Then don't discharge. It's not that effing complicated. If you can hold a steady current around your hands, then you're effectively a human taser. Figure out a fighting style to complement that, and you're golden. Kaminari held up a finger, then paused. Wait, shit, it really is that simple? How the hell didn't I think of that before? Kaiuka scoffed. 100 yen that your teachers always said that bigger, flashier attacks were better for a hero. They really aren't. Heck, bigger attacks leave you more exhausted and more open to a counterattack, so it's better to keep your hits small and efficient. Achako nodded and turned to Kuda. See, none of us are gonna hate you for not talking, or how you look, or what your quirk is. I can't relate to specifically being bullied, but I know what it's like to feel hopeless. My parents' construction company got cheated by one of our clients, and we were really strapped for cash for a while. We all make a habit of being nice to people in worse situations than us, because we know what it's like to be in a bad situation. Kuda's eyes started filling with tears, and his hands flew too fast for even Izuku to decipher. The rest of the morning went by fairly normally. Sure, it was cool that they were being taught by pro heroes, but Aizawa-sensei was right that in these circumstances, they were teachers, not pros. Of course, that didn't stop Izuku from internally geeking out every time a new one walked in. Their first class had been algebra with ectoplasm, who apparently liked to incorporate his quirk into his lesson. Different numbers of clones would pop up to go along with the numbers in the questions they were working through. In person, the hero was much more calm and friendly than his appearance would suggest. Second period was modern literature with Cementos. Supposedly, he enjoyed sitting down with a nice cup of tea and a good book, and would always volunteer to help with rebuilding efforts, especially if a library had gotten caught in the crossfire. Third period was English with Present Mike. The blonde hero was apparently fluent, and would occasionally throw in random English phrases during his lessons. Izuku, of course, matched them all perfectly, and Mike was bursting with pride by the time the period had ended. At one point, they'd reenacted a fencing scene from a classic pre-Quirk American movie, to Katsuki's amusement and everyone else's confusion. Their fourth morning class was Cultural Studies with Snipe, a fitting choice, considering how much the hero knew about other cultures, especially American culture. Having been to several other countries throughout his career, Snipe was probably the most qualified to teach students about different cultures around the world. Fifth period was rough, given that it was art history with Midnight. Nearly every sentence was accompanied by a suggestive pose or innuendo, and it was really hard to focus on the work around those. Even the girls were having a hard time, though they were probably flustered rather than attracted. Lunch followed shortly after. The cafeteria was thankfully easy to find, and the signs set up around the vast room helped prevent any collisions between students who were unsure of where to go. Lunch rush presided over the kitchen, whipping up anything a student requested in record time and with record quality. The line moved quickly, and one is scattered among a group of available tables. Izuku and Kaiuka obviously sat together, and they were quickly joined by Katsuki, Ochako, Fumikage, and Hitoshi. After the initial silent period where everyone dug into their lunch with relish, conversations started to spring up. Hitoshi asked, "So, Midoriya, I wasn't in the same testing center as you, so I didn't exactly get to see you show off. Dad was really impressed with your performance, though, and it got me curious. Namely, what's your quirk?" Izuku swallowed the bite of food he'd been chewing. It's a stockpiling quirk that I call save file. Essentially, I can store up to 10 items that I've used in video games in a mental inventory. I can then manifest up to 4 items at a time. though more physics-breaking items take up more slots. For instance, my extreme gear that I used during the test yesterday takes up only one slot since it's fairly easy to recreate with technology, while something like the Ultra Sword I pulled out during the entrance exam took up 3 slots due to its size-changing property. In addition, I equip items by creating them from the fat in my cells, so making really big items can drain me. That's why I usually stick to smaller items like my extreme gear so that I still have the energy to fight. Itoshi hummed. Are there any things you just can't make at all? Yeah, anything that straight up breaks physics is a no-no, as is anything sentient. So, like, if I tried to store an infinity bow from Minecraft, it wouldn't work. Something like a max potion from Pokemon, however, I can store, but since it takes up 5 slots, I can't manifest it. Itoshi whistled. Damn, even with the limits, that's still a really useful quirk. Dad would call it versatile, but I think Pops would call it busted. Izuku shrugged. Guess so. What about you? Itoshi's face fell, and Izuku winced. Sorry, tough subject. Itoshi sighed. Sorta. I've already told you that I used to be the villain kid. It's because of my quirk. It's called brainwashing. If someone responds to me, they lose control of their bodies and become heavily susceptible to my commands. Basically, I can order them to do whatever I want. I can control if it activates or not. But everybody around me ignored that fact and assumed I'd control them at every opportunity. Izuku winced. Yikes. Also, the name is wrong. Brainwashing is defined as changing a person's thought process over a long time, usually with psychological torture, and it's a permanent change. Your quirk sounds more like putting someone in an enhanced version of a hypnotic state. Itoshi grunted. Wish I'd known that sooner. Oh well, hindsight's 20/20, I guess. What about you guys? Katsuki held up his palm, sparks dancing across it. My sweat has the same properties as nitroglycerin, and I can make it explode using sparks from my palms. I also have a mutation that makes me sweat a lot more than the average person, which is what allows me to make huge blasts. Kayuka twirled one of her jacks around her index finger. I have these prehensile jacks hanging from my earlobes. They can extend up to about 3 meters out, and if I insert them into something, they can project my heartbeat. If I use speakers, I can actually shoot blasts of sound. Achako set her pinky finger down on one of her chopsticks, letting it float above the table. If I touch something with 5 fingers, I can essentially remove its gravity. My quirk counselor wasn't sure exactly how, and I've been studying physics on my own time to try and figure it out. I can cancel the effect by putting my fingers together. Dark Shadow popped out from Fumikid's shirt. Hi, I'm Fumi's quirk. Just call me Dark Shadow. I get stronger in darkness, but I also have less control over myself. I think Fumi and I can also read each other's emotions, but we haven't done a lot of testing with that yet. And yes, I'm fully sentient. Izuku glanced over at the clock, and his eyes widened. Crap, we've only got 5 minutes until the period's over. Conversation ceased as the table hurriedly scarfed down what was left of their lunches. Izuku was probably the fastest out of the 6 of them, even though he ate about twice as much as a normal person in order to fuel his quirk. They got back to class and back in their seats just as the bell rang to signal the start of afternoon classes. Izuku mused out loud. Wonder who the new teacher might be. Maybe a rookie or a recent graduate. Katsuki huffed. Betcha it's someone in the top 10. Yue doesn't settle for second best in anything. Any further speculation was cut off by familiar booming laughter from the hallway. I am here. The door slid open, and All Might leaned in at a perfect 45-degree angle, coming in through the door like a normal person. Izuku's eyes widened as the hero strutted to the teacher's podium. Kirishima excitedly whispered, "Holy crap, we get to be taught heroics by All Might." Kayuka whispered back, "Don't get too excited. Aizawa-sensei did say that he was new to teaching. Watch him not have his certification and have only been allowed on staff because the HPSC would revolt otherwise." All Might seemingly ignored the whispered conversation, looking out over the class with a constant toothy grin. "Yes, indeed. I have joined you as staff to help teach heroics classes to the first-year Hero Course students." Aizawa-sensei walked in and closed the door behind himself with a sigh. "I asked for your first lesson to be in the second week, but no, Nedzu put you in charge of inexperienced first years on the first day of classes when you haven't even gotten a teaching certification." Kayuka snorted and whispered, "Called it." All Might continued, "In any case, we'll be starting with the basics, and nothing is more basic than your costumes." With a flourish, he pressed a button on a remote, causing a section of panels to hiss away from the left wall, close to the board. "Your costumes are numbered the same as your seats. Get changed and get to the buses. Our first lesson takes place in ground beta." Izuku rubbed his costume between his fingers as the class emerged from the tunnel into the fake city that was ground beta. All Might boomed, "They say the clothes make the hero. And you certainly look like heroes to me, ladies and gentlemen." Izuku had gone with a costume that was equal parts substance and style. Elbow and knee pads, Brass knuckles in his gloves, and boots with metal soles augmented his offensive capabilities, while the jumpsuit covering the rest of his body was made from the same material as most hero costumes, providing some defense against heat, cold, electricity, light impacts, and small cuts. Various pouches on his waist could hold medical supplies and snacks to fuel his quirk. The jumpsuit was forest green in color, while the gloves, pads, boots, and pouches were mostly black with dark green lines running along the seams. Completing the look was a stereotypical punk sleeveless vest, looking like black leather with green metal rings around the armholes, along with a deep pocket on each side for extra storage. On the back was a green silhouette of a gaming controller, surrounded by a thick green circle. The collar was lined with black wool where it met his neck. In addition, there was a pair of black headphones with a green lightning pattern across the headband. There were also comical lightning bolts on the outsides of the ear cups, ringed by green circle. Normally, the decals glowed green, but Izuku was glad to see that the lights could be turned off. There was also a note left in his costume case, which read, "Hey there, Bush Boss. I figured out it was you from recordings of the entrance exam, and you had better be thankful that I argued to be your costume designer and personal support technician. Just barely got privileges to work with King Explosion and totally jacked, too. I made your jacket out of a special alloy that looks and feels like leather, but is almost as protective as a suit of armor. Come by the support workshops after classes today, and we can catch up, baby gremlin." Izuku had been psyched about meeting another member of the hero hopefuls, but Katsuki had managed to bring him back down to earth a bit. The blonde had reminded Izuku that they still had to get through whatever All Might had planned for foundational heroics, which had snagged Izuku's attention and gotten the green-haired boy to quickly get changed and get out to the bus. Though, as he stood in the road leading through ground beta, he had a few choice words for the other costume designers in the support course, mainly viable protection and sexual harassment lawsuit. A majority of the girls were wearing skin-tight bodysuits, and while they were likely made of the same material as his jumpsuit, that didn't help their mobility or discomfort. At least Kayuka's costume was exactly how she'd designed it. Originally, she'd just planned on wearing a normal-looking shirt-jacket combo with pants and speaker boots, but after a few discussions with Izuku, she'd gone for a few upgrades. Her gloves carried brass knuckles in case she couldn't use her quirk, and had small, detachable speakers on the backs to give her easier access to sound blasts. Her headphones, like Izuku's, carried a comms system and were noise-canceling to block sound-based attacks from others. Her boots had retractable spikes to prevent her from being blown away by large-scale attacks or extreme wind, in addition to larger speakers than her gloves. And her jacket was apparently made of the same alloy as Izuku's. Katsuki's costume was almost exactly the same as he'd imagined it when he and Izuku were kids. A black tank top with an orange X over the chest, black pants with dark green straps, black boots with orange soles, white knee pads, green gloves with orange palms that somehow let his explosions come through, a black domino mask with spiked black and orange decals behind the ears, and a white neck piece that helped compensate for the recoil of his explosions. However, after reconciling with Izuku, Katsuki had redesigned his grenade gauntlets. Before, they'd looked like typical frag grenades, with storage tanks that would accumulate his sweat and fire a massive explosion out of a hole in the pin when full. Now, however, they looked more like flashbang grenades, and the storage tanks funneled into 3 barrels that would have less power than just the one, but were still more powerful than Katsuki's usual blasts. Before Izuku could think about his classmates' costumes any further, All Might boomed, "Now, then, let's jump straight into today's lesson: combat training." Ada stuck his hand up. "Sir, this looks similar to the fake cities from the entrance exam. Will we be performing mock cityscape battles again?" All Might laughed. "Not quite. Answer me this: where do most villain fights take place?" Kaminari raised his hand cautiously. "Out on the street." "Good guess, but no. While most televised fights are out in the open, a good majority will occur indoors. Most villains you fight will have some form of base, so it's good to learn these tactics early on." Asui frowned. "Isn't this a bit early, Kiro? Shouldn't we start with the basics first?" "These are the basics, young Asui. Now then." All Might reached into his pocket and pulled out a script of all things. Izuku could feel his respect for the man slipping. The scenario is as follows. A team of 2 villains have procured a nuclear warhead and are currently holed up in this building to my right. A team of 2 heroes must go in and capture them. Teams have been assigned by random lottery, with 10 teams and 5 matches in total. Ada thrust his hand up again. "Sir, is random lottery truly the best method of determining teams?" Yaoyorozu hummed. "Perhaps it is to simulate real-world situations. Most heroes do not get the opportunity to choose their partner when in a crisis like this." All Might beamed, and Izuku knew for a fact the hero was lying through his teeth as he said, "Precisely, young Yaoyorozu. Now, the villain teams will each have 5 minutes to prepare. After that time is up, the heroes will be permitted to enter the building, after which they will have 10 minutes to either capture the villains or secure the bomb to win. If the villains capture both heroes or defend the bomb until time runs out, then the villains win." All Might glanced around, as though he was expecting someone to speak up with a question. After a few seconds of silence, the hero cleared his throat. "Yes, well, in any case, here are the teams for the exercise. Team A, Kaminari Denki and Jiro Kyoyuka. Team B, Todoroki Shoto and Ajiro Mashirao. Team C, Hagakure Toru and Ayama Hitoshi. Team D, Kirishima Ijiru and Yaoyorozu Momo. Team E, Bakugo Katsuki and Asui Tsuyu. Team F, Shiro Hanta and Sato Rikadu. Team G, Kudakuji and Shaoji Mezzo. Team H, Uraraka Ochako and Midoriya Izuku. Team I, Ashido Mina and Takoyami Fumikage. Team J, Aoyama Yuga and Ida Tenya. Without being asked, the hero hopefuls immediately formed up with their respective team members. Kaminari and Kyoyuka shared a chuckle at the similar-looking outfits. Hagakure looked confused when Hitoshi walked up to her, but quickly shrugged it off. Similarly, Yaoyorozu seemed anxious when Kirishima walked over to her, but his sunshine nature quickly eased her worries. Asui seemed a little uneasy about being partnered with Katsuki, and the blonde did little to change that with his crossed arms. Kuda walked over to the large form of Shaoji, who turned out to be quite fluent in JSL. Ochako and Izuku grinned at each other as they moved closer, with Izuku already mentally running through possible matchups and counters. The rest of the class watched, before they quickly followed their examples and got into their assigned pairs. Ajiro already wore an annoyed expression as Todoroki didn't move an inch, forcing the blonde to walk over to his partner. Shiro immediately started discussing possible strategies with Sato, the two having stood close together by coincidence. Ashido was practically bouncing in place, and Fumikage merely chuckled as he faded into the background of her exuberant personality. Aoyama and Ida moved together, the former striking a pose and causing the latter to start chopping his arm. Once everyone had gotten into their teams, All Might cleared his throat and drew their attention. Yes, well, in any case, let's get to deciding the first matchup. Two boxes on wheels seemingly appeared out of nowhere, one black and one white. All Might ruffled around in both for a little while, before pulling something out of each and opening his hands to reveal a black ball in one hand and a white ball in the other. Team B as the heroes will face Team D as the villains. Those not participating, follow me to the observation booth. Ijiru smacked his fists together a few times as Yaoyorozu started setting up defenses around the room they chose to hide the bomb in. So, I'll admit, I don't know much about strategy. If you need someone to tank hits and punch hard, I'm your guy. But you seem like you know how to make a good plan. So, what's going through that big brain of yours? Yaoyorozu hummed. Well, I went through the recommendations exam, and so did Todoroki. His usual modus operandi seems to be the same as his performance during the Quirk apprehension test yesterday. Ijiru frowned. So, overwhelming force with his ice. Yaoyorozu nodded. Indeed. So, I believe that his first move will be to freeze the entire building. He most likely believes that such a move would let him win almost instantly. Ijiru grinned. But we're going to prove him wrong, aren't we? Yaoyorozu shrugged. Maybe. It all depends on how strong you are with your quirk activated. If you were frozen up to your shoulders, do you think you would be able to break free? Ijiru smirked and hardened his fists, slamming them together and producing a spray of sparks. You bet. She nodded. Good. Then we have a fighting chance. All Might's voice rang out over the loudspeakers. Your 5 minutes of prep time are up. Heroes, you may enter the building. Ijiru glanced out the window of the room, noticing Ajiro trying to talk to his partner while Todoroki just stared up at the building. Heads up, Yao. I think Todoroki might be trying to do this by himself. Yaoyorozu winced. Todoroki-kun never liked to work with others. Unfortunately, he is strong enough to act on his own more often than not, which tends to reinforce that way of thinking. Be ready. Ijiru watched Todoroki lay his hand on the outer wall of the building, and he braced himself. As expected, ice came rushing out from the hallway, freezing the entire room within an instant. Ijiru grinned and hardened his legs, the sudden protrusions on his joints cracking the ice enough for him to pull himself free. He frowned, noticing how slippery the floor was. That might be a problem. Yaoyorozu hummed, melting herself free with a blowtorch. If you harden just your fingers, would they become spikes? Ijiru's eyes widened. He released his hardening on his fists, and opened his hands, reactivating his quirk and watching his fingers harden into durable, but still flexible, rocky spikes. Gao, you're a genius. If I stab these into the walls, I can get around without much problem. He carefully made his way towards the door, before glancing back at his partner. I'll try not to get too far from the bomb room, just in case I need you to get me loose from more ice. Just because I broke free this time doesn't mean I'll be guaranteed to another time, you know. She nodded. I understand. I will prepare in the meantime. Aijiru grinned and walked out into the hallway, hearing her set up metal barricades by the door behind him. Taking a deep breath, he headed towards the stairwell he'd noticed in his initial sweep. It took longer than he expected for Todoroki to reach the 5th floor, the other boy's breath already coming out in visible puffs. Wow, losing steam already, Todoroki. I was hoping you'd be able to put up more of a fight by the time you reached me, but you're totally exhausted before we've even started. The two-tone boy huffed. It doesn't matter. You won't break free again. Stand aside, or I will be forced to freeze you solid. Aijiru rolled his eyes, his legs already hardening in preparation. No can do, bro. Right now, I've got to hold the line for my partner, and I wouldn't be able to call myself a man if I couldn't hold back one half-dead popsicle. Todoroki's eyes narrowed, and he stomped forward with his right foot. Ice shot forward, but Aijiru was prepared. He launched himself to the side, leaving a crater in the ice where he'd been standing and just barely getting out of the way of the attack in time. Todoroki's eyes widened in shock, but Aijiru didn't pause. Digging his hardened fingers into the frozen wall, he launched himself forward towards his opponent, already worn out from freezing the building. Todoroki couldn't move as Aijiru slammed into him, sending the two-tone boy flying into a wall. Aijiru ran forward, pulling the capture tape out of his back pocket and quickly wrapping it around Todoroki's arms and legs. He nearly balked at how cold the other boy's right side was, but he brushed it aside, stepping back once Todoroki had been properly restrained. All Might's voice rang out. Young Todoroki has been captured by the villains. 5 minutes remain in the match. Aijiru carefully made his way back to the bomb room, poking his head in to see Ieyasu looking out the window. Has Aijiru really been standing outside this whole time? She nodded. It would appear Todoroki ordered his partner to stay outside while he attempted to take on the both of us. A poor decision on his part, apparently, considering you managed to take him down by yourself. Aijiru huffed. He was already half frozen by the time he got to the 5th floor. He probably would have had a better chance if he hadn't used most of his strength freezing the entire building first. Ieyasu inhaled sharply, before turning away from the window. Aijiru has entered the building. I doubt he'll be as hindered by the cold, considering his tactic for the standing long jump yesterday. I again ask you to stand guard by the stairwell. Aijiru nodded. Right. Here's hoping he doesn't have any crazy tricks up his lack of sleeves. He launched himself back down the hallway, skidding to a stop by the stairwell by jamming his fingers into the ice on the floor. It tore up the ice behind him, which was good for him, since it meant less slippery footing for going against Aijiru. The boy in question had just launched himself up the center of the stairwell by wrapping his tail around the railing above him, flinging himself up to the 5th floor remarkably quickly. Aijiru landed in front of Aijiru, quickly settling into a stance that the redhead recognized as some form of martial art. Surrender now. I'd rather not fight if I don't have to. Aijiru shrugged, banging his fists together and causing sparks to fly. Well, too bad. You have to. Aijiru made the first move, springing forward with a fist aimed at Aijiru's face. He crossed his arms, blocking the move and sliding back a few inches. Aijiru followed up with a roundhouse and a tail smack, each blow causing Aijiru to slide back further and further. The other teen was relentless, not giving the redhead an opportunity to drop his guard for even a moment. However, Aijiru knew it was far from one-sided, as hardening was holding strong. And while he was still getting knocked back, he was sliding less and less with each consecutive blow. In addition, Aijiru was quickly starting to tire, as the blows were getting marginally slower and weaker as time passed. Aijiru grunted as he put all his strength into one final tail smack, managing to shove Aijiru back a meter or so. Unfortunately for the blonde, that gave Ieyasu just enough space to fire a marble-sized ball of steel from a slingshot, bouncing off the wall and beating Aijiru right in the forehead. The other boy stumbled, off balance, and Aijiru struck. Dropping his guard, he leapt forward, his left arm coming out and hooking around Aijiru's neck. Aijiru kicked his feet out, falling to the floor and bringing his opponent down with him. As Aijiru's back slammed into the floor, his breath was driven from his lungs in one explosive woof. Immediately, Ieyasu ran forward and wrapped her own capture tape around the blonde's arms and legs. All Might's voice rang out. Young Aijiru has been captured. The villain team wins. Izuku watched as Kirishima and Ieyasu walked into the observation room, the former grinning triumphantly and the latter smiling softly. Todoroki and Ajiro limped into the room afterwards, the latter glaring at the former, who just ignored his partner. All Might boomed, a good match on both sides. Now, can anyone determine who was the most valuable in this match? Izuku said. It was close between Kirishima and Yaoyorozu. An interesting claim, young Midoriya. All Might declared. Would you care to explain your reasoning? Well, the villain team had one big advantage over the hero team: cooperation. Kirishima and Yaoyorozu actually worked together and formed a plan, whereas Todoroki insisted on trying to do everything himself and outright ordered his partner to stay outside. The teen in question glared at him, but Izuku soldiered on. More importantly, Yaoyorozu knew how her opponent was most likely to act, and devised a plan to counteract that. Meanwhile, both Todoroki and Ajiro appeared to think that they could simply overpower their opponents. Most of the class nodded their agreement, and Yaoyorozu blushed. All Might boomed. Very true, young Midoriya. Many villains will either attempt to steamroll heroes with raw power, or will resort to deceit and underhanded tricks in an attempt to succeed. It is important to know if brute force or a good strategy is the better option. Internally, Izuku scoffed. The man wouldn't know a plan if it walked up to him and kicked him in the D. The hero continued. In any case, let us determine the teams for the next match. Reaching into the 2 boxes, he ruffled around for a bit, before pulling out 2 balls. Team C as the villains will face Team G as the heroes. Hitoshi hummed to himself as he and Hagakure mentally prepared themselves for the coming match. So, Dad let me watch some of the footage of the Quirk apprehension test. And while I think I've got a good idea of what Shaoji can do, I'm drawing a blank on Kuda. Got anything? Hagakure rubbed at her chin. I think he talks to animals and stuff. For the ball throw, he got a bird to carry the ball as far as it could. He also doesn't like talking out loud all that much, and I think he's too shy to really fight anyone else. Hitoshi frowned. If he felt up to fighting, I'd be concerned, since his lack of talking doesn't bode well for my quirk, since I need a verbal response for it to work. Unfortunately, Shaoji's pretty strong, and he doesn't seem to talk all that much, either. Any ideas? Hagakure sighed. Unfortunately, I'm flat out of luck. Our only real chance is if you somehow get Shaoji to respond. I'll support however I can, but I'm not exactly in the fittest shape. She shivered and brushed at her legs. Man, did the costume guys really not have a way to give me an actual costume? Just wearing gloves and boots is super uncomfy. Hitoshi scowled. Any designer worth their salt would know better than that. I'm hauling you to the support department later for a redesign. Any further discussion was cut off when All Might announced, your 5 minutes of prep time are up. Heroes, you may enter the building. The building was suddenly swarmed by a flood of rats. Hitoshi went pale as the furry critters flowed across the floor, and Hagakure shrieked in terror as they were pushed over by the tide of rodents. After a minute or so of darkness and fur, the rats shifted to clear their faces, but still weighed down their bodies and kept them trapped in place. Kuda walked in the door, followed by Shaoji. The shorter boy signed, sorry, but I didn't want this to drag out too long, and I wanted to be useful. Apologies if this brings up bad memories or something. Kuda walked over and laid his hand on the prop. All Might's voice boomed. The bomb has been secured. Hero team wins. Izuku grinned as Kuda walked into the room, followed by his partner and the villain team. Izuku tossed his friend a thumbs up, before focusing his attention back to All Might. The hero announced, quite the, interesting match. Now, who was the MVP here? Yaoyorozu raised her hand. It had to be Kuda-kun, sir. He restrained both villains almost immediately and without causing damage to the building. Shaoji-kun did carry his weight by informing his partner of the bomb's location. But Kuda-kun did end up doing most of the work. The villain team suffered a massive disadvantage. Kuda-kun's tendency to use sign language and Shaoji-kun's quiet nature meant that Ayama-kun's quirk would not be usable, and Hagakure-chan's low physical strength would not have helped her much if Shaoji-kun had been the one fighting. However, neither had much of a counter to being trapped underneath a literal army of rats, which honestly seems like a bit of an oversight on UA's part to have such a thriving colony in the training ground. Izuku snorted. 100 yen says that Nedzu lets them stay as long as they don't interfere with classes. All Might cleared his throat. A wise assessment. Young Yaoyorozu. Now, let us determine the teams for the third match. He ruffled around in the 2 boxes again, before bringing out 2 more balls. Team J as the heroes will face Team I as the villains. Fumikage hummed to himself as his partner began dissolving the floor around the bomb. So, if we are to cooperate fully, we should be aware of each other's capabilities. My Quirk is a sentient creature of shadow, growing stronger and more violent in darkness, yet weaker but more controlled in light. Ew, Ashido giggled. I make acid. I can control how corrosive or viscous it is when I'm producing it, and my skin's immune to it, but beyond that, I can't really control it once it's out. Dark shadow appeared from underneath Fumicage's cloak. You know, we've never really tested what all I'm immune to or not. We already know that blades don't really cut me, and I'm pretty resistant to temperature, but we haven't had a chance to test acid. Ashido frowned. I dunno, what if something goes wrong? Fumicage nodded. I agree with Ashido-san. It would not be wise to test your immunities when we do not have a healer on hand in the event that things go awry. Perhaps Izuku could reserve a gym later that we could experiment in, with Recovery Girl on standby. Ashido grinned. Oh, what's this? You already know our resident bush boy. Do tell. Fumicage huffed. We attended the same junior high for second and third year. We became friends after he stood up to an upperclassman who was bullying me. He has given us several creative uses and many questions that we have not yet answered. Ashido giggled. You're gonna have to tell me more later. Right now, though, we've got an exercise to get through. Fumicage nodded. Right. Their quirks are quite dangerous, but I believe we can find ways to counter them. Aoyama-kun's laser is bright, but slow enough to avoid, so your agility should be able to let you dodge it. Ida-kun's engines make him quite fast. But speed is not much of an issue when dark shadow can grow large enough in darkness to block an entire hallway. Ashido grinned. So, I go for Aoyama, you prioritize Ida. Sounds good to me. Though, I noticed that most of these hallways have a lot of lights in them, and not a lot of light switches. What are you gonna do about that? Fumicage smirked and fingered the disc on his belt underneath his cloak. Izuku has shown me the value of working in the darkness, and Dark Shadow has trained to keep their emotions under control. Do not worry about us. Focus on your opponent. Ashido chuckled as the two of them stepped out into the hallway, having just finished melting most of the floor around the prop bomb. Sure thing, partner. Let's do this. All Might's voice rang out. Your prep time is over. Heroes, you may now enter the building. Fumicage jumped down the stairwell, Dark Shadow settling on top of his arms and allowing him to catch the railing on the second floor. Ashido leaped down after him, and Dark Shadow caught her in a large, dark claw, depositing her on the third floor. She gave him a two-fingered salute before running off down the hallway. Fumicage chuckled to himself before proceeding down the hall on his floor. Reaching under his cloak, he removed the disc from his belt and tossed it upwards. It latched onto one of the ceiling lights as expected and hung there, ready to be activated at any time. Fumicage moved towards the end of the hallway, using Dark Shadow's claws to remove a section of wall from the side and shifting it so that it blocked the window, leaving the ceiling lights as the only light source in the entire hall. He quickly walked back towards the stairwell, just in time to see Aoyama be launched up to the third floor. Ada slid to a stop on the second floor landing, pointing in Fumicage's direction. Halt, foul villain. Your plan will not succeed. We heroes will stop you. Fumicage smirked, allowing Dark Shadow's form to cover his head, giving the appearance of a second set of glowing yellow eyes. Then by all means, hero, come and face this child of darkness. We will not allow ourselves to be dragged into the light so easily. Ida dashed forward, already starting to deliver a wide kick with his right leg. Dark Shadow removed their arm from Fumicage, coming out just enough to block the blow. Stumbling for only a moment, Ida followed up with another kick. Fumicage jumped back, allowing the attack to hiss through the empty air. Ada laid on the pressure, forcing Fumicage towards the rear end of the hallway. Surrender now, villain. You have nowhere to run or hide. Fumicage smirked. Bold of you to assume we are running. Ada's leg swung out in another roundhouse kick, and Fumicage jumped forward. He soared over Ada's head, turning in midair and skidding backwards towards the end of the hallway. He shut the door to the stairwell as Ada turned to face him. Bold move, villain. But you have just cornered yourself again. Fumicage's smirk widened. I'm not trapped in here with you. He pressed the button on his belt, and the disc stuck to the ceiling let out an electromagnetic pulse. The lights in the hallway cut out, plunging the room into complete darkness. As Dark Shadow covered Fumicage's face, his vision was tinted red, and the form of his opponent was visible, clear as day. You're trapped in here with me. Izuku whistled in admiration as Fumicage and Dark Shadow wailed on Ida, never letting up for even a second. Damn, they're terrifying when they cut loose. Good thing Dark Shadow trained to keep their emotions under control in the dark. Fumicage lunged, grabbing Ada's face and dragging the other teen with him, before slamming his opponent into the wall at the end of the hallway. As Fumicage stepped back, Ada slumped to the ground, either unconscious or too battered to keep standing. Fumicage pressed another button on his belt, and the EMP on the ceiling deactivated, allowing the lights to turn back on. Dark Shadow retreated under Fumicage's cloak, and the boy stepped forward, wrapping his capture tape around Ada's legs. As All Might announced Ada's defeat, Izuku switched his attention to the screen showing Aoyama's fight with Ashido. The blonde wasn't doing well, already showing signs of stomach pain as the pink-skinned girl skated around his blasts without a single scratch on her. As Ashido ducked around another shot, she sped past Aoyama with barely an inch between them. The boy's belt suddenly fell away from his armor, and what looked like droplets of light started oozing out of the blonde's belly button. Aoyama frantically started scrabbling at the ground, his visor apparently not doing his vision any favors as he tried to find his belt. Ashido slid over and wrapped her capture tape around the blonde's arms, before picking up the belt and reattaching it to his waist. Aoyama sobbed with relief and wrapped her in a hug, and she awkwardly patted his head as All Might declared the villain team the winners. A few minutes later, the 4 students walked into the observation room, wearing expressions of triumph and defeat. All Might boomed, "A stellar performance. Now, who would you say the MVP was this match?" Yaoyorozu spoke up. "I would say that both Takoyami-kun and Ashido-chan were the MVPs. They clearly planned out who would deal with which hero from the start, and both developed plans to counter their respective opponent. Takoyami-kun trapped Ida-kun in a narrow hallway where speed would not do him much good, and disabled the lights in order to power up his quirk to increase his advantage. Ashido-chan outmaneuvered Aoyama-kun's laser and wore him out, before removing the belt that he needs for his quirk in order to cripple her opponent and secure her win. In addition, the villains cut off easy access to the bomb ahead of time, which meant that even if the heroes had gotten past them, it would still be well defended." Izuku nodded along with the explanation, and the rest of the class voiced their assent. Ashido grinned and held up her hand, and Fumikage smirked and returned the high five. Ada removed his helmet with a sullen expression, and Aoyama patted his teammate on the back before heading towards a silent corner of the room. All Might announced, "Very well. Now, let's see who will be our teams for the 4th match." He ruffled around in the boxes for a bit, before pulling out 2 balls. "Team as the heroes will face Team E as the villains." Katsuki checked over his gauntlets, noting that the firing mechanism looked functional, but thankfully wasn't active, meaning there wasn't a chance he could misfire and seriously harm the other team or the building. "So, Frogger, we're up against a girl who hears practically everything and a guy who's a walking taser. Thoughts?" She frowned. "I'd prefer if you called me Tsu, or at least my name, Kira." Katsuki winced. "Sorry, I can't connect names to faces for shit. I'm working on it." She sighed. "Fine, Kiro. So, Jiro-chan has really good hearing. And Kaminari-kun generates electricity, right?" Katsuki nodded. "Bose also has a few speakers on her costume, and if she plugs her jacks into them, she can blast sound waves. I probably shouldn't go against Pikachu, since his electricity can detonate my sweat. That, and I know more about Bose's fighting style than I do about Pikachu's. Granted, that's assuming he has a fighting style at all. From what I know, he's in the habit of using huge blasts that make him go brain dead if he uses too much juice. Think you can handle that?" His partner hummed. "I think I remember something from my junior high science classes about electricity being more effective on something that's grounded, Kiro, and I'm really good at jumping." Katsuki grinned and snapped the handles into place on his gauntlets. "Gotcha. Blast, jump, profit." She nodded. "Let's do this, Kiro." All Might's voice rang out. "Your 5 minutes of prep time are up. Heroes, you may now enter the building." Katsuki headed for the door, before pausing and glancing back at his partner. "I'm gonna make some noise. Try and draw their attention. I'll see if I can herd Pikachu your way while keeping Bose with me." She nodded. "Get moving, Kiro." Katsuki grinned and blasted off, quickly finding the stairwell and plummeting down to the bottom floor. See, just looking at Katsuki's costume, you'd think all of the padding would be in his upper body to compensate for the recoil of his explosions. In truth, his boots also needed braces for his legs and feet, so that any decently sized blast wouldn't send him flying backwards. As a result, the impact from dropping 5 stories in his costume was equivalent to dropping about a foot in regular clothing. As Katsuki blasted off towards the front door, he thought to himself, "Gremlin really knows her stuff when it comes to support gear. I gotta thank her for the boots and braces." He rounded the corner, grinning maniacally as Bose and Pikachu suddenly put up defensive stances when they saw him. "Well, isn't this precious? A couple of twinsies decide they want to get in my business. Tough luck, heroes." Pikachu stuttered out. "Where's the bomb, villain?" Katsuki's grin widened. "Right effing here." He blasted forward, aiming an explosion at Pikachu's chest. The guy shrieked and covered himself in electricity, and Katsuki halted, the blast stopping mere inches from the other boy's shirt. He grabbed Pikachu by the neck and chucked him towards the stairwell. "Come on, I thought heroes were better than this. Give me a challenge." He nimbly leaned back to avoid the jack stabbing through the air at his face. Bose shouted, "Kaminari, go. The bomb's gotta be on the top floor. I'll hold him back." Pikachu quickly gathered himself and ran up the stairs, and Katsuki grinned. "Are you sure about that?" Now you're all alone against the big bad Bakugo. You should have kept your partner with you so that you had a fighting chance. Bo smirked, and her jacks plugged into the speakers on her gloves. She banged her fists together, and Katsuki grinned wider at the clear sound of the brass knuckles underneath. Come on, Blasty, you're mine. Katsuki let out a bark of laughter. Wouldn't have it any other way. Izuku watched with anticipation as his girlfriend and best friend traded blows back and forth on the ground floor. Glancing over at the other screens, he could see Kaminari standing outside the bomb room, seemingly trying to psych himself up. Izuku quickly turned his attention back to the duel between Kyoyuka and Katsuki. She was giving the blonde a run for his money, able to displace his explosions with sound waves from her speakers, and every time she landed a punch, she would let out blasts of sound that Izuku knew for a fact were steadily dealing damage to Katsuki. Of course, Katsuki was dangerous both with and without his explosions, and she was forced to avoid his punches, kicks, and knee strikes. A sudden flash from one of the other monitors grabbed his attention. Kaminari was currently fighting Asui, his hands covered in electricity as he threw clumsy punches. The frog girl was clearly more in her element, able to easily outmaneuver her opponent and get through his poor defenses. Asui darted behind Kaminari and lashed out with her tongue, looking like she was going to wrap it around him. Immediately, Kaminari's whole body lit up with electricity, but it had been a feint. Asui's tongue whipped away from Kaminari, and she leapt from the ceiling, putting a good bit of distance between herself and her opponent. After a few seconds, the discharge cut off, and Kaminari stood there with a dazed expression. Asui quickly darted forward and wrapped her capture tape around her opponent. All Might announced, young Kaminari has been captured. Immediately, Kyoyuka redoubled her efforts against Katsuki, her faster heart rate increasing the strength of her sound waves. Her punches started flying faster, and Katsuki was forced to go on the defensive as he ducked and weaved around her attacks. Her fist flew towards his face, and he was forced to catch it in his hand. A sound wave blasted Katsuki into the stairwell, crashing through the railing and leaving a crater in the wall. Kyoyuka ran into the stairwell and glanced upwards. She raised her fist and, to the gasps of the other students, punched the floor. Another sound wave blasted out, and the recoil sent her flying up to the top floor in seconds. In midair, she let out another sound wave that sent her flying into the hallway leading to the bomb room. Izuku rocked back and forth on his heels, his hands clenched at his side as Kyoyuka ran into the room with Asui. The frog girl shot her tongue out, but Kyoyuka was clearly running high on adrenaline. She darted to one side and punched, a sound wave from her glove blasting Asui into the wall. Kyoyuka ran forward, hand outstretched as Katsuki blasted around the corner, changing directions on a dime and heading towards Kyoyuka. Izuku clenched his fists tighter as Kyoyuka turned around and let out another sound wave, simultaneously forcing Katsuki back and propelling herself forward just enough for her to smack her hand into the bomb. All Might boomed. The bomb has been secured. The hero team wins. Kyoyuka stumbled into the observation room about a minute later, exhausted but grinning. Izuku immediately ran over and pulled her into a hug, causing All Might to blush while a few wolf whistles rose from the crowd. You did good. She smirked. Of course I did. You gave me the idea for soundboxing style. After all, what, you didn't have faith in me? Izuku shrugged. Faith is one thing. Going up against Katsuki is a totally different thing. Kyoyuka chuckled. Fair enough. All Might cleared his throat. Yes, well, in any case, let us decide who will take which role for the final match. He took out the black box and ruffled around in it for a while, before pulling out a black ball with the letter F on it. Team F as the villains will face Team H as the heroes. Kyoyuka gave Izuku a quick peck on the cheek. Good luck out there. And I better not catch you doing some hanky-panky with Ochako while I'm not there to kick some sense into your ass. Izuku grinned and returned the kiss, before pulling his headphones up over his ears, nodding at Ochako, and heading outside towards the assigned building. Izuku leaned against the outside of a nearby building, staring up at the one across the street that housed the fake bomb. Alright, this is the last match of the day. Do we put on a show, or do we go for efficiency? Ochako hummed. If it was Aizawa-sensei leading the exercise, I'd say to go for efficiency without question. But since it's All Might, I'm not sure. I feel like his idea of a good plan involves a lot of fancy techniques. Did you see his face when Kuta swarmed the building with the rats? Izuku winced and nodded. True. Then again, Aizawa-sensei has a point. Being overly flashy out in the field is just going to cost lives. So I say we ignore All Might and treat this like a real scenario. How's your training been going? I know that before the entrance exam, you couldn't reliably float yourself, but how's that been working out for you? Ochako hummed. Well, I still can't remove my own gravity. I can, however, just lessen it slightly so that it feels like I'm on the moon. If you carried me. Izuku grinned. I see what you're getting at. His extreme gear appeared in his left hand. All Might's voice rang out. The 5 minutes of prep time are up. Heroes, you may now enter the building. Ochako tapped her arm with 5 fingers, and Izuku grabbed her by the arm with his right hand. He hopped onto his extreme gear, immediately feeling her lessened weight. Grinning, he leaned forward, and they shot across the street towards the building. As they approached, Izuku pushed down with his back foot, and they shot up the wall, before cresting the edge of the roof and skidding to a stop. Ochako released her quirk and started towards the roof access door, only to pause when Izuku held up a hand. His extreme gear dissipated, and a metal bat appeared in his hand. Carefully, he stepped towards the door, nudging it open with the bat and quickly settling into a defensive stance. Nothing happened, and he glanced back at Ochako and nodded. Together, they silently crept down the stairs, and Izuku glanced around the corner as they neared the stairwell on the 5th floor. He watched as Satu ran down the stairs, swallowing some kind of powder as he passed. Zero used the tape from his elbows to set up a barricade in the hallway leading from the stairs, before heading down to the 4th floor for surveillance. Izuku and Ochako quietly moved back up to the roof, and Izuku's bat disappeared. A rocket belt appeared on his back, and he fell off the side of the roof, hovering in midair and circling the building once. After his sweep, he flew up and landed on the roof, the rocket belt dissipating as he walked over to Ochako. Bombs taped to the ceiling in a room on the 5th floor. It's on the opposite side of the building from the hallway that Zero taped up. She frowned. So it was a trick, designed to lead us down an empty hallway so that they could corner us. Of course, they had to make it look realistic by moving away from there. What's the plan? Izuku grinned and manifested his sword ability. We hit hard, and we hit fast. I'll break the window, and you watch my back while I get the bomb down. I'll also need you to catch it and lessen its weight, since in a real scenario, a drop from the ceiling could cause it to detonate. Ochako nodded. Gotcha. Can your extreme gear fit 2 people? Izuku smirked. Who says we need it? He ran towards the edge of the roof, hopping off and grabbing the ledge with his free hand. He swung around, foot slamming into the window and shattering it on impact. He dropped into the room, immediately running over to where the bomb was taped to the ceiling. Ochako was right behind him, positioning herself underneath it and facing towards the door. Izuku jumped up and carefully slashed through the tape on both sides of the prop, allowing it to fall into Ochako's waiting arms. Zero appeared in the doorway right as Ochako caught the bomb, immediately lessening its gravity and carefully setting it down on the floor. All Might's voice rang out. The bomb has been secured. Hero team wins. A minute later, the 4 students walked into the observation room. All Might boomed, good performance, heroes. Due to how short this match was, I won't bother asking about the MVP, but I will ask this: where did the villain team go wrong? Katsuki raised his hand. Simple. They assumed the heroes would use the front door, and forgot about the roof access. How they forgot that Izuku has flying machines in his inventory is beyond me, considering he used one just yesterday for the endurance run. But whatever. Point is, they made an assumption and disregarded important details, thereby allowing the hero team to swoop in and secure the bomb with basically no issue. All Might coughed into his fist. Yes, well, that is correct, young Bakugo. In any case, win or lose, I would like you all to take something away from today's exercise. In an instant, the hero was standing by the door to the observation room. Now, watch how a pro exits like he's got somewhere to be. All Might raced out of the training ground, the only sign of his former presence being a cloud of dust still lingering in the air. As the class started to move back towards the buses, Kyoika walked up to Izuku and slung an arm around his waist. Don't think I didn't notice the 2 of you holding hands. Izuku blushed furiously. Oh, come on. You know that it was just so I could carry her up to the roof. Kyoika giggled and elbowed him playfully. I know. I just like teasing you, you big dork. Katsuki snorted as he fell into step beside them. You'd think he'd realize after a couple weeks of dating you. Kyoika grinned at the blonde. It's part of his charm. He plays the oblivious cinnamon roll really well. Izuku's blush deepened and he started stammering incoherently. Kyoika and Katsuki started laughing, and Ochako joined in as they headed towards the bus. Fumikage followed at a slight distance, chuckling to himself. Once they'd changed out of their hero costumes, the hero hopefuls all headed towards the support studio together. It only took a few minutes, considering Izuku had memorized the map of UA provided in the syllabus. As they approached the metal double doors, some sixth sense caused Izuku to manifest his Hylian shield and pull Kyoika close. Just before an explosion blew the doors open, loud cackling could be heard from inside, alongside loud groaning. Damn it, Hatsum, that's her 8th explosion. And it's only the 2nd day of classes. The cackling grew louder. Come on, sensei. Explosions are a sign of failure. and failure is a mark of progress. It's part of my creative process. I only want the best for my babies. Izuku grinned and dropped the shield, letting it hit the floor and dissipate. That's gotta be her. He strode through the fading cloud of smoke, letting out a piercing whistle. Oi, gremlin. His vision was suddenly full of yellow eyes, palish skin, and pink hair. Heya, boss. I see you brought the gang with you. Great to see you in person. Hatsume, support genius and future CEO of Hatsume Industries. I heard you used your costumes for foundational heroics today. How'd my babies hold up? Kaiuka smirked. Beautifully. The speakers were great, and I definitely appreciated the alloy in the jacket. Katsuki chuckled. Same. The braces made a 5-story drop feel like nothing, so good job on those. I'm impressed with the details on the gauntlets. You managed to get the mechanisms functional, but kept the tanks from actually siphoning my sweat so that they didn't have any chance to misfire. Hatsume grinned. Sounds like I'm sporting 100% customer satisfaction so far. She glanced over at the others. You must be the other hero hopefuls. Though, we seem to be down a guy. Who's missing? Izuku coughed into his fist. We still haven't heard from Mr. Twister since the school year started. I'll ping him this afternoon and ask. Hatsume shrugged. Oh well, can't be helped. She clapped her hands together. So, now that you've experienced your costumes for the first time, do you want any changes or upgrades? Achako winced. My costume designer put me in high heels. They look nice, but they totally killed my feet by the end of the exercise. The bracers are a little uncomfortable, too. Think you could fix that? Hatsume beamed. Not a problem. Do you know who your costume designer is? They probably have your measurements on file, which means I won't have to take him myself. Achako frowned and pulled a piece of paper out of her bag, scanning it briefly. It says here that his name is Gauman. Hatsume's expression immediately fell. Oh, him. Izuku frowned. What's wrong with Gauman? A nearby support student groaned. Don't even get me started. Not even a day in. And the dude's already a total asshat. Never listens to anyone except Power Loader. And even then it's only when it benefits him. Izuku glanced over at the student, noticing the thick, grayish hair and dark gray eyes. She held up a hand in greeting. Tanso Himo. My Quirk turns my hair into a carbon steel alloy that's pretty durable. Makes for great gadget material. But yeah, Gauman's a real piece of work. Kaiuka raised an eyebrow. How bad could he be? A door at the back of the room swung open, and a short, round boy walked out, his eyes immediately latching onto Achako. A customer. He walked over, strutting in far too close to be polite. How can I help you? Achako backed up a few paces. Gauman, right. I heard that you made my costume. He grinned. You must be the Uraraka girl in the hero course. Did you find my creation to your liking? Before she could answer, he barreled over her and said, Of course you did. I only provide the best. He glanced over at Izuku. I heard you had your costume designed by this wench. He pointed his thumb at Hatsume with a scowl on his face. I truly pity you. When you grow tired of your current costume, please come to me. I'll make you something leagues better than anything this woman could put out. He fell silent at the death glares being sent his way from every direction. Izuku growled. For your information, Achako has expressly stated her discomfort with her costume, which already knocks your reputation down a peg. In addition, those of us whose costumes were designed by Hatsume are immensely satisfied, so you claiming to be better than her makes your standing even worse. Kirishima spoke up. But even without the whole support thing, the fact that you're so clearly sexist is just not cool, man. We're living in the 23rd century. How are you still clinging to a thought process from the American Civil War? Gauman huffed and straightened his glasses. Preposterous. History has proven that we are superior in every way that matters. Strength, stamina, intelligence. Men have beaten women in every category. The door at the front of the room slammed open, and Power Loader stormed into the workshop, looking absolutely done. Gauman, detention for 2 weeks. I will not have that incredibly outdated and idiotic thinking in my classroom. Gauman scoffed and wiped at his hair. Geniuses are never understood in their time. They say Einstein was hated, you know. Hatsume rolled her eyes. Police, who gives a crap about Einstein in here? We're support technicians, not physicists. What did Einstein do for technology? Jack shit, that's what. Gauman huffed. So, name one woman who actually contributed to anything. Oh, wait, you can't. Because women are always far and away inferior to us men. Power Loader snarled. You want to see just how good your classmates are? Then you're the class test dummy for the next 4 weeks. Anyone wanting to test their inventions will take precedence over your own projects. Any of them. Gauman finally went pale. But, sir, no, I do not allow sexism or arrogance in my workshop, and you've proven yourself to be a fountain of both. UA does not tolerate that sort of behavior. Hatsune pulled a monkey wrench out of her toolbox and smacked it against her palm threateningly. You want to see inferior, bub? I'll show you inferior and plenty of it. The next morning, Izuku, Katsuki, and Kyoyuka rounded the corner between the train station and UA to find a crowd of people standing in front of the entrance. The blonde mused, what the hell is that about? Izuku noticed cameras and microphones being waved around, and he groaned. Effing great. Reporters, Fumikage grunted, having just caught up to the trio. If only I could keep my costumes EMP with me at all times. Katsuki huffed. Whatever, let's at least figure out if we can get around them. As they approached, they could see the reporters hounding various students as they tried to push their way through the gate. Izuku heard one reporter shout, "What's it like to be taught by All Might?" He groaned again. They're here because All Might took up a teaching position. They keep hounding the first years, which I'm pretty sure is illegal. Kyoyuka patted him on the arm. Give him hell, babe. Izuku grinned, before walking forward, mentally checking his inventory to see if he'd stocked anything electrical. A reporter caught sight of him, and he was instantly swarmed. Young man, what can you tell us about All Might being a teacher here at UA? Another reporter shouted, Hey, you're a hero kid. You must have had All Might yesterday. What's he like as a teacher? Izuku scoffed. The man's terrible. He's a great hero, don't get me wrong, but he has no clue how to actually teach a class of 15-year-olds with godlike power. I'm honestly surprised and grateful that nobody got seriously injured yesterday. A reporter shouted, Yeah, right, kid. Now come on, give us the truth. We need answers, damn it. Izuku snorted. You don't need shit from me, though I am feeling generous. The reporters crowded closer, and Izuku's face morphed into a shit-eating grin. Zan Partizan's spear manifested in his grip, and he stabbed it into the pavement, causing a surge of electricity that thankfully didn't hurt anyone, but all of their electrical equipment was shorted out. As the reporters panicked, trying to get their gear to work again, Izuku released his spear and motioned towards the trio still standing by the corner. The four of them ran past the reporters and through the gate. One particularly brave woman stepped forwards with her arm outstretched, and the gate beeped, sheets of metal slamming upwards and cutting off the flood of reporters. Aizawa-sensei walked up and huffed as the four of them caught their breath. I knew they were stupid, but to trigger the UA barrier, that's a whole new level of idiocy. I'll let the public quirk usage slide this time, problem child. Now get to class, you don't want to be late. Aizawa-sensei walked in just as the bell rang, nodding in satisfaction at the silence in the room. Good. I took the liberty of looking over the footage from yesterday's training exercise. Good job not causing any serious injuries. And most of you kept collateral damage to a minimum. He glared at Todoroki, who ignored him. For those of you who won, don't think that you're good where you are. Never think you don't have room to grow. Those of you who lost, don't give up. Learn from your mistakes, yes, but don't let them keep you from improving. Understood? Yes, Aizawa-sensei. Good. In other announcements, today you'll have to make a decision that'll affect the rest of your schooling. Nobody dared to breathe. You'll be picking a class representative. There was a collective sigh of relief before the room devolved in chaotic shouting. Nearly everyone put their hand up, all clamoring to be picked. Ida stood up and shouted, Everyone, please, be rational about this. Clearly, if we cannot come to a consensus, then we should hold a vote to determine the class representative. Isui raised her hand. Wouldn't everyone just vote for themselves, Kiro? We've only had 2 days of school, and only a single day of classes. All the more reason to do so. Anyone who has already earned another's vote in such a short time is clearly fit for the role. Izuku rolled his eyes. Just include a rule saying that people can't vote for themselves. It's not that hard. Ida turned to where Aizawa-sensei was laying against the wall in his sleeping bag. Sir, is that acceptable to you? The man sighed. I don't care. Just get it done before homeroom ends. Thank you, sir. Ieyasu pulled 20 sheets of paper out of her bag, and they passed around the room, falling silent except for the sound of scribbling pencils. Once everyone had put down their pencils, Ada went around and collected the votes, sifting through them before writing the results up on the board. Midoriya Izuku 9 votes. Ieyasu Momo 8 votes. Bakugo Katsuki 2 votes. Ida Tenya 1 vote. Aizawa-sensei sat up and huffed. There you have it. Midoriya is class rep. Ieyasu is vice rep. Congratulations, or whatever. Class dismissed. He stood up and hobbled out of the room, still in his sleeping bag. At lunchtime, Izuku, Kyoyuka, and Katsuki were joined by Ieyasu, Ida, and Tsu. After the initial scarfing of food, Ida wiped his face with his napkin and turned to Izuku. Midoriya-kun, congratulations on being voted for class representative. I must admit, I was hoping to secure the position for myself, but I am wise enough to admit that you have earned it. Izuku grinned. Not a problem, Ida. Not gonna lie, part of me is afraid that I'm not good enough for the job. but I've recognized that as the part of me that's still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sue frowned. Why's that, Kiro? My quirk manifested late. Like, start of junior high late. Before then, I was diagnosed as quirkless because I hadn't presented one at age 4. I lived in an area where being the quirkless kid wasn't exactly the best position to be in. Sue winced. That's rough, Kiro. Some of the other kids at my elementary school used to be rude to me because of how my quirk made me act. I can't imagine how bad it must have been for you when you thought you didn't have a quirk. Izuku nodded and glanced down at his tray. Sometimes, I have the worrying thought that I'll wake up, and this'll all be a dream, that I'll be back at Aldera, quirkless and suffering. Ada opened his mouth to say something, only to be cut off by the alarm system going off. Level 3 security breach. All students, please evacuate the building calmly. Repeat, level 3 security breach. All students, please evacuate the building calmly. The cafeteria devolved into pandemonium, the entire student body cramming through the doors and immediately filling up the adjacent hallway. At one point, Izuku got shoved into the window, forced to look outside as his face got smushed by the tide of people. He noticed the reporters from earlier streaming through where the gate should be, and he could feel his temper steadily rising. He pulled himself up onto the windowsill, before jumping from head to head in the direction of the exit. Thankfully, the crowd wasn't moving all that much, so Izuku didn't need to do a lot in the way of course correcting in midair. Once he got close, he crouched down and springboarded off the head of an upperclassman, landing on top of the door frame. Turning to face the crowd, he shouted, "Everybody shut up." The crowd fell silent and looked up at him, and he pointed towards the windows. "It's just the media. Now calm down and leave through the doors in an orderly fashion. You're US students. You should know better than to panic in a crisis." The crowd started thinning as it steadily moved out the double doors, and Izuku nodded in satisfaction, noticing a familiar head of blonde hair in the crowd. He looked for a gap and timed it just right so that he fell from the door frame and landed right next to Katsuki. "How'd I do for my first day on the job?" Katsuki snorted and ruffled the other boy's hair. "Not bad, nerd." The following morning, the crowd of reporters was thankfully absent. During homeroom, Aizawa-sensei announced, "This afternoon, for Foundational Heroics, you'll be taking a field trip to a remote part of campus. In attendance will be myself, All Might, and a third staff member. It will be up to you whether or not you wear your hero costumes. It won't make much of a difference. The bus will be in the same parking lot as 2 days ago, and we'll start loading up at 1 p.m. That afternoon, Wona quickly changed into their hero costumes and gathered in the parking lot just as the bus pulled up into its designated spot. As they filed on, Izuku noticed that the front half of the bus seemed to be open seating like a train car, while the back half was a traditional setup. Interesting choice, but whatever. After they'd all sat down, the bus headed off. After a minute or so of awkward silence, Sue poked her head over the back of Izuku's seat. "Midoriya, Kiro, I tend to speak my mind a lot, so I'm sorry if this seems blunt, but I wanted to ask, what exactly is your quirk? I've seen you make a lot of different items over the past couple days, and I was wondering what sort of limits it has, Kiro." Izuku shrugged. "Reasonable question. I call it save file. Basically, once I've seen and used an item in a video game, I can store it in a mental inventory of sorts and use the fat in my cells to later create it in real life. And before anyone asks, no, I'm pretty sure I'm not related to Yaoyorozu." Todoroki glanced out the window with a mostly blank expression that held just the slightest bit of embarrassment. "Knew somebody would think it." Zero whistled in admiration. "That's a pretty cool quirk. What all can you make with it?" Izuku hummed. "Basically, anything that operates within the laws of physics. You've all seen my hoverboard, which is theoretically possible with real-world technology, so it doesn't take up much space in my inventory. However, items that push the boundaries of physics take up more space, and ones that break it completely are a no-no. For instance, the size-changing sword I used during the entrance exam to slice the zero-pointer in half is on the pricier end of the spectrum, since while something that changes sizes like that is technically not possible, it still mostly obeys physics, save for me being able to swing it. However, something that just outright creates other matter, like an infinity bow from Minecraft, is out of the question. I only have so much space in my inventory, and I have even fewer equipped slots. There are a few things that I can store, but not equip, though that should change with training. Oh, and sentient things are also out of the question." Sadu whistled. "Well, you sure know a lot about it. Did you figure that all out yourself when training for UA?" Izuku smirked and rubbed at his neck sheepishly. "Well, I did have a little help. See, because my quirk needs me to play video games in order to have something to store and equip, I thought I was quirkless for the longest time. It was only about a month into my first year of junior high that I thought I might have a quirk, and I ended up getting an appointment with Mue Kurumoto to help me figure it out." Achako's eyes widened. "And you could afford it?" How rich are you? Izuku snorted. It wasn't as expensive as it would be for most people. Miwei-san actually has a bit of a soft spot for people who are misdiagnosed as quirkless, considering the same thing happened to her, and she knows how bad things can get for quirkless people. I ended up getting a pretty big discount for the appointment. Everyone started talking all at once, only to fall silent when Aizawa-sensei announced, "Quiet, we're here." Izuku stared up at the giant glass dome in front of them. Yui never does anything halfway, do they? Katsuki snorted. I should hope the F not, otherwise the motto wouldn't make any damn sense. As they walked closer, their attention was drawn to a figure standing by the double doors at the entrance, wearing yellow sneakers and a space suit. Hello, Class 1A. As some of you may know, I am the Space Hero 13. Welcome to my pride and joy of UAS campus, the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. Within are 6 zones designed to test your mettle and rescue heroics, each designed to simulate various natural disasters. Aizawa-sensei walked up to the other teacher, a scowl on his face. Where's the blonde buffoon? He was supposed to be here with you. 13 sighed. Apparently, he got held up stopping crime on his way to work. He'll only be able to join us by the end of the class. Aizawa-sensei groaned, the height of irrationality. The man has a duty to teach the students now. He can't just run off and do hero work in an area already saturated with capable heroes. He turned to face the class. Right, unfortunately, All Might will not be able to join us for today's class, but I don't think he'll be missed all that much, considering rescue isn't exactly the man's area of expertise. 13 nodded. Now, before we head inside, allow me to say a few things. You all know my quirk, Black Hole, yes. Ochako nodded emphatically. You've used it to help in so many rescue operations. Quite true. However, it is also a power that can far too easily kill. A hushed silence descended over the group. One thing that is important for all heroes to know is restraint. My quirk sucks things in and turns them to dust. I'm sure you'd rather not imagine what would happen if I turned that on a human being. I'm certain most of your powers are the same way. The teacher clapped their hands together. But that is why you are here, to learn proper restraint and control. My USJ is designed to help you find out new and heroic applications of your quirks. Now, let us go inside. As they entered, a chill ran down Izuku's spine. He rumbled, careful, guys. Something doesn't feel right here. Call it a hunch. Katsuki and Kyoyuka immediately settled into defensive stances, followed closely by the rest of the hero hopefuls. The teachers and other students glanced at them in confusion, only to go pale when a small cloud of black fog whirled into existence down by the fountain. The fog grew to the height of a person, and a dehydrated hand came through, clutching the edge of the cloud. It was followed by a face covered in a severed hand, which preceded a body covered in other hands wearing dark clothing and bright red sneakers. The fog grew to enormous size within seconds, and several figures began walking through, assembling a veritable army in the plaza. A massive black figure walked out of the fog, standing behind the villain that had emerged first. Once the last villain had emerged, the fog shrank, coalescing into a figure the height of a man. The man with the hand on his face glanced up at them, and Izuku felt another chill run down his spine. Eraserhead. The guy with the severed hands is the most dangerous. The teacher nodded, sliding his goggles down over his face. Understood. 13. Take the students and get out while you can. I'll hold them off while you get reinforcements. Izuku grabbed the hero's arm. That's a hell of a lot more people than your usual strategy. Be careful, alright. We still need a homeroom teacher after this. Eraserhead grinned at the student. Get moving, problem child. The class needs their representative. I thought UA students knew better than to panic in a crisis. Izuku snorted, before turning and running back towards the class. They were already most of the way to the doors, being shepherded in that direction by 13 and the hero hopefuls. In the back of his head, Izuku noticed Eraserhead jumping down the stairs to confront the army of villains down below. All of a sudden, the black fog from earlier swirled into existence between the class and the door, and now Izuku could make out the 2 glowing yellow eyes near the top of it. Greetings, we are the League of Villains. We have come to this prestigious school so that All Might may take his last breath. And yet, it seems he is not here. Was the information we retrieved inaccurate? Izuku inhaled sharply. These bastards caused the media break-in yesterday to get information on when All Might would be away from the main campus. They've thought this out. The Mist Man sighed. Ah well, All Might or not, my role is the same. Scatter you all and torture you to death. His body exploded outwards, but one of 13's finger caps popped open. A powerful vortex began sucking in the clouds of mist, and Izuku could make out a metal brace around where the villain's neck would be. He's got a physical body somewhere under all that fog. The trick is getting to it. Acting on reflex, Izuku darted darted to the side, with the mist man occupied by 13. Izuku took the opportunity to run around to the villain's back, quickly summoning his Meta Knight sword and sending a crescent shot slamming into the metal brace. The villain went down, and 13 shut off their quirk. Katsuki was on the man in an instant, pinning him to the ground by his brace. "Stay down, asshat," Izuku shouted. "Let's move it, people. Ada, run ahead to the main campus and get the teachers. You're the fastest one here. Go." The blue-haired teen nodded and sped over to the double doors, forcing them open and disappearing through the gap. Suddenly, a burst of electricity forced the doors to shut, and a blast of fire welded them together, sealing the class inside the dome. Two villains stepped out from the plants lining the entryway, one with yellow hair and one with orange hair. The orange-haired one smirked, holding up a hand filled with blazing fire. "Well, we may not have stopped you from calling the cavalry, but we can at least have some fun with you in the time we have left." Izuku vanished, reappearing in front of the villain and knocking him out with a metal bat to the head. A yellow-haired villain turned towards him, only to be blasted into the wall of the USJ by Kyoka's sound waves. Izuku jogged over to where 13 was still standing. "We're sealed in. Even with your quirk, getting through the doors will take time. While there are still plenty of villains around that could attack us and take up your attention. Do we have your permission to use our quirks?" 13 nodded. "Do what you must to survive as long as you can. You are authorized to use your quirks to defend yourselves, but try not to fight unless you are attacked." Izuku turned towards the plaza where Eraserhead was still fighting. He quickly ran through the options in his mind, before making a decision. His extreme gear appeared in his left hand, his metal bat still clutched in his right, waiting to be attacked. "I'm going to go assist Eraserhead. Don't try to stop me, 13-sensei." Before the hero could protest, Izuku was already speeding down the stairs. He slipped his headphones over his ears, cutting out the noises of his classmates fighting. He focused on his objective, the crowd of villains still surrounding his teacher. "All right, effers, you want to play? Then let's play." Shouta grunted as he bound another 3 villains in his capture scarf and slammed them together, before tossing them off to the side and ducking under the clumsy punch of another thug. Before he could retaliate, however, there was a green blur, and the villain was sent flying into a group of his buddies. The blur slid to a stop next to Shouta, and he could make out Midoriya's hero costume. "What the hell are you doing, problem child? I thought I told you to evacuate." Midoriya huffed as he smacked another villain in the face. "Tried." Katsuki's pinning their warp, but they sealed the doors shut. Ida managed to get out, but for now, we're on our own. These guys are total chumps. They're not worth your time. Let us handle these small fry while you go after the ringleaders." Shouta sighed, leaning back to avoid a villain's attack and punching the guy in the face. "Fine, but if you get killed, I'm finding a way to resurrect you so I can kill you again." Midoriya smirked. "Don't worry, I have absolutely zero intention of dying today. Now get moving." Shouta nodded and broke away, jumping over the heads of several thugs and landing outside the crowd, immediately running towards the villain covered in severed hands. The man started scratching at his neck. "Ah, Eraserhead, leaving your precious student to the tender mercies of villains. For shame. I thought you had a higher intelligence stat than that." Shouta didn't respond, just in case the villain's quirk relied on a vocal response like Hitoshi's. Always pays to be cautious. Paranoia is an underground hero's best friend. The villain dodged around the first swipe of Shouta's capture scarf, immediately darting to the side and backing away. Shouta pursued, reactivating Erasure after every blink. He heard the villain muttering numbers under his breath, and he swore internally. "He's figured out my timing. Shit, I could have sworn the goggles hid that. How'd he know?" He blinked again, and suddenly the villain was in his face again. A hand reached towards his face, and Shouta ducked, before slamming his elbow into the villain's stomach, only for his elbow to erupt in pain. Shouta immediately jumped backwards, internally cursing as he noticed his elbow starting to flake away. This must have been the guy who destroyed the gate yesterday. I can't let him touch me." The villain tilted his head back, one hand rubbing at his stomach. Clearly, the impact hadn't been fully stopped by his hand. "You're so cool, Eraserhead." He held his hands out. "But you're gotten predictable. I can read your tells." Suddenly, 2 gunshots rang out. Lines of red floated in the air for a second, and both of the villain's middle fingers were blown off at the fingertip. He stood there in shock for a few seconds, before howling in pain and dropping to his knees. Glancing back, Shouta noticed Midoriya holding a sniper rifle. "Did that help, sensei?" Shouta smirked. "Good shooting, problem child. Remind me later to get you some private lessons with Snipe." The villain glanced over at Midoriya, and his eyes widened. "That's a effing machina. How the hell?" Midoriya's eyes narrowed. "You use gaming lingo a lot. What are you, some kind of tryhard? Bet you were expecting this to be an easy boss fight. Unfortunately for you, there's several minibosses to get through first." The villain scowled. "Ew, you're that bush boss player I met in that TF2 match a couple weeks ago, aren't you?" Midoriya raised an eyebrow. That must make you dust hands. Bit on the nose, isn't it? The villain snorted. I could say the same about yours. But you see, I'm not the DPS. He turned towards the hulking black figure that hadn't moved since it emerged from the fog. Namu, grab him. The figure shifted, before seemingly disappearing. Midoriya swore and jumped to the side, just as the figure appeared right in front of where he'd been standing, its arms already swinging forward in a bear hug. Super boss? Huh. His rifle dissipated, before his hoverboard and forked sword appeared in his hands. You're gonna need pro gamer strats. The hand villain cackled. You bet. Namu is our cheat code, the bioengineered anti-symbol of peace. He's been equipped with multiple quirks to make him the ultimate punching bag that punches back, able to take on All Might himself. Midoriya hummed. So, he takes hits, and he hits back hard, super fast, and I'd wager a guess that he probably regenerates. The hand villain cackled louder. That's right. You're way more than just a mini-boss. You're my player too. Midoriya snorted and readied his sword. Bold of you to assume I'm not player one. The student disappeared in a burst of air, the trail from his hoverboard creating a green ring around the hulking figure. Waves of blue fire started bombarding Namu from every direction, and Midoriya was moving too fast for the beast to counterattack. Suddenly, the mist villain swirled into existence next to the hand villain, Shigaraki Tamura. Apologies, but I was briefly incapacitated, and one of the students managed to escape in that time. The other students are still sealed within this building, but I fear that the heroes are on their way. We must retreat while we are still able. The hand villain, Shigaraki, grumbled. If I wasn't in such a good mood, and if you weren't our only ticket out, I'd dust you in an instant, Kurogiri. But look, this kid's the player too I've been looking for. Kurogiri looked over at where Midoriya was continuing to assault the monster from every direction. Tamura, that boy will surely incapacitate the Namu, given enough time. Should I intervene? Shigaraki scratched at his neck. I hate quick time events. Fine, if he looks like he's going to destroy it, then you can warp him somewhere else in the building. But I want to see what he's capable of. Shouta scowled and moved to step forward, but the growing pain in his elbow made him hiss and drop to one knee. Shigaraki and Kurogiri glanced over at him, and the mist villain paused. That is, Eraserhead, correct? Shigaraki nodded and strode forward. He's really cool, but he lowered his shields, and I managed to get a status condition on him. The villain crouched in front of Shouta. Hurts, doesn't it? Decay is a really painful status condition. If you don't remove the damaged part, it'll just keep growing until it covers your entire body. And if that happens, game over. The villain stood up and stuck his hands in his pockets, hissing as he seemed to remember his severed middle fingers. Since I'm in a good mood, I'll leave you alone for now. But if you try to keep fighting, then I'll have to order Namu to kill you. So don't hit that continue button. A wave of blue fire flashed between the two of them, and Shigaraki stumbled back as Midoriya put himself between Shouta and the villain. I don't know what the hell you're thinking, but stay away from my teacher. Shigaraki sighed. Oh right, you're a part of the hero faction. And your party doesn't like losing members, does it? Such a pain. Midoriya scowled. When your party's limited to only a few members, you try and keep as much of your DPS alive as possible. Shigaraki let out a dry laugh. I like you, player 2. You get me, you speak my language. Sensei's not nearly as fun. Midoriya raised an eyebrow. Sensei. Shigaraki opened his mouth to say something, but Kurogiri cut him off. Tamura, that is enough. Sensei would not appreciate you revealing his secrets at such an early stage. Shigaraki sighed. Kurogiri, I swear on my PS5, if you don't shut up and let me have this, I'm dusting your wine collection. Suddenly, the doors to the USJ blasted open, and a deep voice echoed throughout the dome. It is all right now. Why? Because I am here. Shigaraki scowled. Took the objective long enough to spawn. Namu, kill All Might. The beast disappeared, leaving a trail of dust as it sped towards the entrance. All Might ran down in the blink of an eye, intercepting it at the base of the stairs. Midoriya leveled his sword at Shigaraki. Hang on, now, I thought we were having a friendly chat, gamer to gamer. How come All Might seems to aggro you with his sheer presence? Shigaraki scowled and started scratching at his neck. You wouldn't understand. All Might always smiles like he can save everyone. But where was he when I was alone on the streets, tired and hungry? Everyone who passed me just looked at me with pity and moved on, expecting a hero to come along and help me. You hero brats would never understand. Midoriya sighed and stabbed his sword into the ground, leaning on the hilt as though it was a cane. I do, actually. The funny thing about my quirk, it had an obscure activation requirement, so I was assumed to be quirkless. You know how much that made me suffer. Every damn day. Bullied and belittled by every effing person around me. Several even implied that I should kill myself and stop burdening my mom by living. And yeah, there were times when I wondered why a hero didn't come and help me. I even tried to talk to a couple nearby agencies. They brushed me off the second I mentioned my quirk status. Shigaraki's eyes widened. You, Midoriya stared at the villain, his hair blowing from the clash between All Might and the Namu. So yeah, I get it. But I chose to become a hero so that I could help people like me. People who were looked down on by society. People who believe they can't help themselves. Real life isn't like a video game, Shigaraki. We don't have minimaps or side quest pop-ups. No alliance symbols. No health bars. No distinction between player or NPC. All we can rely on is our own vision. There's no HUD to guide us, no quests to tell us where to go and what to do. There's no tutorial on how to live. You have to make that choice for yourself. And if you let someone else choose for you, then you're the NPC. There was a huge gust of wind, and All Might punched the Namu so hard that it went flying, crashing through the dome of the USJ and soaring off into the distance. Shigaraki raised his hand to scratch at his neck, only to pause. Kurogiri, let's go. I need to think. The misty villain nodded, part of his body expanding to form a cloud large enough for Shigaraki to walk through. The villain glanced at where Midoriya was standing with his hoverboard in hand. Until next time, player 2. The two villains disappeared, the purple fog fading from existence just as the rest of the faculty showed up. Shouta forced himself to stand and limped over to Midoriya. I'd like to know what the hell you were thinking, problem child. You just let two very dangerous villains get away. Midoriya glanced back at him, before looking towards where Shigaraki had been standing. Is Shigaraki really a villain? Or was he coerced into the whole thing? From what I could gather, it seemed like his sensei indoctrinated him into thinking that heroes didn't care. His whole sense of reality just got thrown into question. He's not going to make a move for a little while, and even then, it's hard to say what his next move will be. Shouta scowled. He's a villain. He attacked your class. You should have tried to detain him. Midoriya gave him a look. Is the world really all that black and white, sensei? Look me in the eye and answer me seriously. Shouta opened his mouth to retort, but then he considered it. Shit, he's got a point. Tamura stumbled into the bar, hissing as the adrenaline faded and the pain returned in full force. F, that hurts. Talk about a debuff. Kurogiri hummed as he coalesced behind the bar, the mist already fading to reveal his bartender's uniform and neck brace underneath. Would you like for me to call for the doctor? Tamura froze, before shaking his head. No, I'm not sure if I want to see that wacko just yet. Player 2, for all his disgusting hero-ness, he had a point. Sensei's always told me that I'm his successor, that I'm supposed to be the next king of evil, but he never asked me if that's what I wanted. Kurogiri hummed. I am sure that Sensei just believes that it is best for you. After all, I doubt that the heroes would accept someone with your quirk into their ranks. Tamura scowled. Are you sure about that? Because when I got the schedule from the teacher's lounge yesterday, I saw a photo on the guy's desk of him and a kid with purple hair, and I recognized the kid from a news article a couple years back. He's from that orphanage in Saitama that got shut down. He's the kid with the mind control quirk. Kurogiri's eyes widened, and I remember seeing him within the ranks of the students. Tamura nodded and looked down at his hands, noticing how the middle fingers had been immediately cauterized at the knuckle, keeping them from bleeding. If the heroes allowed a kid with that kind of quirk to be a hero brat, then who's to say they wouldn't allow someone with a quirk that decays things? Hell, 13's quirk basically does the same thing from a distance. And they're a teacher at UA. Kurogiri hummed. I do not know what that means, but I assure you that Sensei only wants what is best for you. Tamura glanced over at the misty bartender. Do you? Or is that just part of your programming? What? Tamura, what do you mean? Tamura scoffed. If you're not obeying one of my commands, you act like a robot, just doing the same thing over and over until you're told to do something else. Have you ever stopped to consider why you always listen to me? Earlier today, you stayed away from player 2 on my orders, even though something in your code clearly wanted to step in. Why? Kurogiri froze. He warped over to the booth Tamura was sitting in and laid his elbows on the table, head in his hands. I do not know. I do not know who or what I am, or where I came from. All I know is what Sensei and the doctor have told me, that I am to guide and protect you. Tamura nodded. Sensei always said that I was the player in a world of NPCs, that I was allowed to do as I please and destroy whatever I hate. But players choose their route in class for themselves. So either Sensei's a backseat gamer, or he sees himself as a player and me as just another NPC. And I'm not sure which is worse. Kurogiri hummed. I still believe that Sensei has your best interests at heart, but I can see that words will not sway you at this point. Tamura nodded, still looking at his severed fingers. For now, let's just say that Snipe got me on our way out. What Sensei doesn't know won't hurt him, right? The students of Wana had been called over one by one to give their accounts of the day's event. Since they'd gone in order of seat number, Izuku was one of the last ones to be called. He walked over to the police cruiser, recognizing the detective from the news article on Hitoshi's orphanage. Detective Tsukanchi, right? The man's eyes widened. Yes, how'd you know? Izuku grinned. Hitoshi talked about